The protagonist considered the butterfly effect a silly phenomenon, as he didn't believe the fate of all humanity could change due to one insignificant event. Dawood, as usual, completed the game Rise of the Savior and watched the ending, and the next day, he woke up in a different bed. Life had played a cruel joke on him, and so he became a third-rate character in his favorite game, which tells the story of young students. He inhabited the body of a helpless, unknown person with no particular power, and decided to play peacefully. Now he had to live with people who farmed and were barely mentioned in the game's cutscenes. From the very beginning, the game gives him a main quest, enrolling in the academy and being assigned to Class A. According to the game mechanics, ignoring the main quest is impossible, otherwise the game will end, and the academy will descend into chaos. Opening the status window, the gamer was disappointed, as even a veteran like him had never seen such trashy starting stats. But on the very first day of the game, the aristocrat encounters the final boss, Elnor the Bloody, whose body, according to the scenario, harbors the essence of a grey demon. During the ride, the protagonist attempted to protect her from a falling boulder, although he did so only to get closer to a protective talisman. With his actions, Dawood attracted the villain's attention and received 2 special rewards: Desperate Survival and Deadly Charm. Learning his new abilities, the young man realized that the first skill would definitely come in handy in battle, and the second would allow him to attract the attention of villains. The aristocrat remembered that these villains were very nasty girls. Ultimately, the protagonist decided that survival skills were more important. While the protagonist was pondering what was happening, the carriage was already approaching the academy gates. Dud senses the gaze and looks up warily. Soon after, the academy formally welcomes the freshmen and praises them for surviving the incident. During the aftermath, a senior questions Dud about riding with Princess Tristan. The senior explains that he also comes from a minor noble family, and warns Dud that the attack may not have been random. He advises Dud to stay away from Elnor because the Tristan house has many enemies and proximity to high nobles only invites harm. Dud agrees outwardly, but a system notice immediately tells him an Elnor trust event is already approaching, proving he is already entangled. He realizes that in a place full of rumor and hostility, Elnor's path toward becoming the final boss makes grim sense. Even as he thinks that merely standing near her is deadly, someone suddenly calls him out. A group of students mocks him for being the only one left without a sparring partner. He learns that the academy's practical entrance evaluation begins immediately, and that his opponent has been assigned automatically. Dud quickly figures out that being the leftover student means he has been paired with the strongest person available. That fear is confirmed when a confident orange-haired girl steps forward to face him. She introduces herself as Ellia, the greatest genius in the world. Dud is stunned because he recognizes her as the true protagonist of Savior Rising. The future savior offers him a hand before their match begins. He can only think that his situation is completely ruined. Before the duel starts, the crowd buzzes over the arrival of powerful nobles. One observer privately wonders whether Elnor has lost her mind. The reason becomes clear when people realize the entrance duels are already underway and Elnor is somehow late. Elnor then walks in covered in blood, carrying both a cane and a sword, shocking the entire hall. The official in charge demands to know where she has been. Elnor answers with chilling calm that she was taking care of something. The official reluctantly postpones further questions because another matter needs attention first. That night's hidden truth is revealed as a grim conversation about the attack's death toll. Elnor explains that the boulder attack was an assassination attempt on her, that she identified the culprits, and that she personally killed them. When told she should have left that to the academy, she dismisses the suggestion as irritating. She refuses the idea that she should act like a forgiving saint toward people who tried to murder her. As the official tries to move on, she notices that Elnor's absence has affected the duel schedule in a very specific way. She is startled to hear that Elnor's delayed arrival has left Dud Campbell matched with Ellia. Elnor asks how the official knows Dud and remarks that he seemed completely unremarkable. She recalls his awkward, harmless smile from the train. Even so, she concludes that there is something odd about him. Back in the arena, the crowd jeers as Dud shakily takes his stance with a wooden sword. He knows his stats are so bad that a single clean hit from Ellia could end him. That desperation gives him hope, because the danger should trigger his survival skill at full force. He decides that if he can survive and impress the watching villains, he may gain both safety and useful rewards. Armed with game knowledge and his new buff, he starts to believe he might actually endure this. Before he can act, Ellia calls out to him. She asks him to answer honestly. Then, with blunt sincerity, she asks whether he is actually very weak. When he fumbles for an answer, she states that she is certain she is right. She admits she had planned to beat him up for being close to Elnor, revealing that his trouble with dangerous women has only just begun. Ellia openly admits that she hates not just one woman, but the entire Tristan house. Dud realizes she is recklessly bold for saying it aloud, yet he also knows her hatred is justified. He recalls that her grudge against the Tristans comes from deep family conflict, even if he only half understands it. Ellia confesses that Dud reminds her of someone from that hated house, so she had intended to hurt him for it. Dud tries to defuse the situation, but privately decides he needs this fight to become real because his survival depends on standing out. So instead of holding her back, he urges Ellia to stop restraining herself and attack seriously. That unexpected answer catches Ellia off guard and makes her look at him differently. She tests whether he truly means it, still suspicious of his sudden boldness. Dud admits he is provoking her on purpose, using her hatred as the only way to force her full strength out. As he commits to that gamble, a system reward triggers and Elnor Tristan's attraction toward him rises sharply. Ellia finally lunges at him with killing intent. Her first strike is so fierce it shatters his weapon and nearly crushes him outright. When Dud barely avoids the blow, Ellia is surprised he survived at all. She revises her judgment of him and decides he is not as helpless as she thought. With that small respect earned, she immediately escalates and attacks even harder. The system warns Dud that he is in danger, though not yet at the edge of death. His survival skill activates at EX rank, flooding him with emergency power. That sudden surge lets him counterattack and slam Ellia before she can finish him. Both of them are stunned as blue lightning-like power erupts from him. Dud unleashes a massive strike that shocks the entire audience and reveals power no one thought he possessed. Ellia is blasted away so violently that the hit clearly exceeds what a normal student should survive. The attack detonates across the arena, leaving everyone horrified by what Dud just did. Dud himself is left staring in disbelief at the result. The spectators can only think of him as the weakest student who somehow just crushed a top prospect on his first day. Even the Academy's key observers are forced to reassess him on the spot. They frame the impossible outcome as Dud subduing the world's destined main character. Afterward, the Academy begins debating whether Dud is a fraud who staged his weakness. Others argue that no matter what they believed before, his victory still makes no sense. A senior evaluator states that Dud truly had no combat skill or power before the duel. That makes the strike itself even more disturbing, because it was undeniably real. He insists that even he would not walk away unharmed from a blow like that. One explanation is that Dud used some illegal method to temporarily boost himself enough to defeat Ellia, but the evaluator considers a second possibility as well. He bluntly suggests that Dud may instead be a monstrous genius. Even so, the Academy cannot simply accept the result without caution, especially because Elia's powerful sponsor will object. Still, they decide it would be foolish to discard a student with that much potential. They settle on watching him closely, trusting that the truth will reveal itself soon enough. To that end, they begin planning special handling for several unusual new students, with Dud foremost among them. If he truly is exceptional, they intend to find a role for him rather than reject him outright. By the next day, sensational rumors have already turned Dud into Academy-wide news. Reading the exaggerated headlines, Dud is baffled that both his old world and this game world treat news with the same absurdity. At the same time, his system floods him with profile updates as multiple nobles and key figures gain curiosity or interest in him, and Elnor's trust rises enough to unlock a reward. Dud pieces together that attention progresses from curiosity to interest to trust, and that each increase earns points he can spend later. What unsettles him most is that Elnor, who should have no reason to care about him at all, is now rewarding him the most. Her reward turns out to be a Tristan sword technique, an absurdly valuable gain from one of the Empire's greatest sword houses. He knows accepting anything tied to Tristan is dangerous because of their demonic connections, but he decides the benefit is too good to refuse. He also notices Elia's growing curiosity, even though she is neither a villain nor someone who should qualify for these gifts. Before he can think further, someone knocks at his door. The voice immediately sounds familiar to him. It is Ellia, asking to enter his room. Panicking, Dud hopes that if he stays silent she will simply leave. Ellia makes it clear she knows he is inside. When he still hesitates, she threatens to break the door down, forcing him to answer. Her tone softens as she says she only came because she has something to tell him. Dud nervously asks what she wants. To his shock, Ellia awkwardly says she wants them to get to know each other better. When he refuses to engage, she leaves in a huff. But even as she walks away, she keeps thinking about him. She criticizes his stiffness, yet clearly wishes he had accepted her approach. Elsewhere, Dud's desperate attempt to make friends is treated as suspicious even by onlookers. Ellia admits to another girl that she has no idea how to become friends with a man. In her distraction, she drops the bag she was carrying. As she bends to recover it, someone gently checks whether she is hurt. The person helping her is Elnor Tristan, and Ellia freezes the instant she recognizes her. A traumatic memory surges back as Ellia remembers her brother screaming for her to run. That memory centers on a Tristan swordsman standing amid flames and slaughter. The recollection leaves Ellia trembling, but she forces herself to act normal. Even so, her hand goes to her sword on instinct, revealing how deeply the Tristans terrify her. She immediately judges that she could not defeat Elnor in her current state. Elnor calmly asks for her bag back, showing no concern at Elia's hostility. That composure unsettles Ellia even more, because Elnor noticed the threat and still did not bother reacting. Elnor simply repeats her demand, treating Ellia as no danger at all. Ellia returns the bag, but starts wondering why Dud is somehow connected to Elnor too. Elnor then gives her directions to Dud's room as if she already knows exactly where he lives. That makes Ellia stop and question how Elnor knows such a thing. Elnor answers that she had been with Dud until just recently, which only makes Ellia more suspicious. Trying to hide her alarm, Ellia claims she only wanted friendship with a fellow new student. Elnor coldly invents a rule on the spot forbidding new students from mingling with the opposite sex and bans Ellia from visiting him again. When Ellia asks what right she has to interfere, Elnor insists Dud means nothing to her while still ordering Ellia to obey. That contradiction makes Ellia remember how fiercely Dud had provoked her during the duel. She concludes there is definitely something between Dud and Elnor, and decides she needs to stay close to him to learn what it is. The next stage of academy life begins with the class assignment exam, where students are sorted into groups after one-on-one evaluation. Because of his shocking victory, Dud is placed in the highest level group, which worries him far more than it impresses him. His biggest problem is that Ellia has ended up in the same group and is already approaching him again. Even after he tried to push her away, her curiosity rises further and the system warns that a major event will trigger if it becomes full interest. Remembering the anonymous snacks and note left outside his room overnight, Dud realizes someone may now be stalking him as well. When Group 1 is called, he tries to focus on the exam, only for the system to announce that Elnor's trust event is about to occur. His dread is confirmed when Elnor appears as the official in charge of the exam. Dud knows this cannot be coincidence, and becomes certain something abnormal is about to happen. A flashback reveals that the academy leadership deliberately put Elnor in charge because they wanted to observe Dud under pressure. Elnor leads the group onward and postpones all questions until they reach the test site. Some students admire the elaborate setup, while others are told to stop talking and keep moving. The group enters a dark underground area just as the lights fail, turning the atmosphere ominous. Ellia immediately demands to know whether this blackout is part of the exam. The sealed entrance and dead power make it obvious that something is wrong. Dud's system confirms it. Elnor's event has begun, and this is not a test but an assassination trap targeting her. While the others try to stay calm and move carefully, Dud recognizes several of the students around him. He remembers that these people are future members of the main character's party, and therefore too important to lose here. That realization makes him treat the room as a critical story junction rather than a random ambush. Using a map on the wall, he quickly proposes moving everyone to the central hall, where defense and supplies should be better. He explains that the open space would make ambushes harder, alarming the others with how seriously he is reading the danger. He points out that both Elnor and Ellia must have sensed hostile presences already, proving they are not alone. Then, instead of staying with the group, Dud declares that he will head elsewhere by himself. Ellia protests because his route leads away from safety, but he refuses to explain. He only insists that it is necessary and promises to justify it later. Privately, he admits the truth. He is abandoning them because saving his own life matters most to him. Once he slips away, the others are left to face the trap without him. Alone in the dark, Dud is relieved that his bluff worked and that the group accepted his warning. He assumes his earlier victory over Ellia gave his words enough credibility to be believed. Since the assassins are after Elnor, he decides the safest plan is to hide somewhere quiet until the event ends. That plan collapses when someone calls out to him from the darkness. A man claiming to be there to restore the power asks Dud to guide him. The system instantly flags lethal danger, and Dud realizes the stranger is an assassin closing in from behind. At the same time, the hidden killers begin moving elsewhere in the building. One of the girls with Elnor worries that Dud may be in trouble alone. Ellia answers that Dud must have some plan, but she also recognizes that their own attack is beginning. Elnor silently reads the situation and prepares to respond. Meanwhile, the assassin shadowing Dud reveals that Elnor has already wiped out an advanced team. He boasts that this only matters because he is still in play, and that Dud was easy to deceive. He leads Dud toward the equipment room while judging him from behind. Confident in his professional eye, the assassin decides Dud is a complete amateur. Believing he can toy with him first, he plans to kill Dud, steal his appearance, and use that disguise to approach Elnor. Dud, however, remains much calmer than the assassin expects. When the killer finally reveals himself and moves in, Dud greets him by name instead of panicking. He recognizes the man as Hazmed and is almost relieved that the threat is someone he remembers. Hazmed is shaken that his identity was exposed so easily, and Dud notes that a stronger enemy might have actually killed him before he could react. Dud taunts him by recalling his distinctive gait and chronic sniffing, confirming he has identified the same assassin from before. He even starts analyzing his own survival skill aloud, leaving Hazmed completely confused. Enraged by being treated like a joke, Hazmed charges in to kill him immediately. Dud calmly raises his broken weapon to meet the attack. In the next instant, hidden support strikes first and smashes assassins into the walls around Hazmed. Arrows and other attacks tear through the ambushes before they can reach Dud. Across the building, Elnor's side and the main party members counterattack at full force, cutting down the assassins that targeted them. Luca and the others overwhelm their attackers so decisively that Dud's side of the trap is already collapsing. Ellia orders her ally to freeze the remaining enemies, but her attention stays fixed on Elnor. Elnor suddenly moves with terrifying speed toward the source of the threat. She launches herself into battle with overwhelming force. Her assault sends multiple assassins flying at once, proving why the earlier teams were wiped out. The surviving killers can do little more than choke and collapse under the pressure. One last assassin tries to resist, only to be cut down as well. Elnor seizes a captive and demands to know whether more enemies are deployed. When he identifies their leader as Hazmet of the Crescent Moon, she freezes part of him in place to keep him from escaping or lying. She presses for Hazem's location, but the captive refuses to answer directly. Elnor answers that defiance with brutal force, slamming him down without hesitation. She demands to know whether the assassin leader is currently present in the building. The terrified captive admits that Hazmet came in with them. Ellia, watching Eleanor's ruthlessness, asks what could drive her to such extremes. Elnor reveals that Hazmet can steal another person's appearance by killing them, which makes him especially dangerous in a crowded crisis. Ellia immediately realizes there is one obvious victim he would target first. She concludes that Dud deliberately used himself as bait to draw out the most dangerous assassin, and the others are left wondering why he would risk himself that far for someone else's enemies. When pressed about her connection to him, Lady Tristan coldly insists there is nothing between them. Ellia is left unconvinced, sensing that denial does not fully explain the situation. Elsewhere, Dud assesses the trap around him and realizes the school's anti-weapon barrier does not stop an assassin who can turn his own body into a weapon. He decides the barrier changes nothing and prepares to kill through sheer skill instead. Even as he attacks, he cannot understand why his target's defense feels so deliberate. Dud is suddenly struck by a precise counterattack from the black-haired student he underestimated. The boy lands a successful Tristan sword technique, and the system confirms his mastery is improving. He steadies himself, relieved that the gamble worked. Dud recognizes the Tristan technique and realizes he picked a fight with someone far more dangerous than expected. Convinced he was lured into a prepared trap, Dud demands to know who the boy really is, while the system notes the villain is impressed by the plan. The boy silently lets Dud believe it, since he intentionally brought him to a save point where weapons cannot be used. Instead of killing him, he orders Dud to spread word that no one should approach Lady Tristan because even a top assassin nearly died trying. He explains that repeated attempts on Elnor could trigger the release of her Grey Demon, so he wants future attacks discouraged from the start. Dud tests him by asking what happens if he comes back anyway. The boy answers without hesitation that he should try again, because next time he will be guarding her personally. That answer shocks Dud into asking whether Lady Tristan truly matters that much to him. The system reacts immediately, and Eleanor's favorability toward him surges. The boy notices the absurd flood of approval messages while Dud stares at him in disbelief. At that moment, Elnor herself arrives and catches the aftermath. By the next day, the academy is already reeling from the assassination attempt. A staff member collapses over her desk, overwhelmed by the chaos the incident has caused. She complains that the chancellor wants the organizer found immediately even though she is already buried in work. Reporting to Elnor, she confirms the academy is internally compromised and that the timing and route of the attack strongly suggest a spy. Elnor notes that political attacks against her are common, but a second assassination attempt means someone is unusually determined. Her aide agrees and warns that whoever arranged this will almost certainly strike again. She also points out that everyone involved in the attack was subdued without casualties, which makes one person stand out. That person is Dud Campbell, whose record lacks the commendation someone with his performance should have. From the way he avoids recognition, Elnor suspects he is deliberately staying out of the academic team's notice. As she reflects on that mystery, her thoughts keep circling back to Dud's role in all of this. Her aide finally snaps and threatens to hit her if she keeps drifting off with vague thoughts. She follows through with a smack, demanding to know what is wrong with Elnor today. Elnor brushes it off at first, still distracted. Pressed harder, she admits she has been unable to focus because someone has started to interest her. That confession stuns her aide, who immediately demands to know who it is. Elnor points out that the answer was already in their conversation, and the aide blurts out Dud Campbell's name. The room falls into a heavy silence as the implication sinks in. Her aide recoils in disbelief that Elnor could be drawn to that rural nobody. She panics further at the thought of Archduke Tristan hearing about it, and warns he would be furious. Elnor denies that it is romance, but her aide refuses to believe her. The aide argues that Dud treated her with unusual kindness, and that Elnor normally begins with suspicion, not trust. Elnor admits the warning is fair, yet insists she still wants to test him. Her plan is simply to watch him more closely, though that explanation only confuses her aide further. Meanwhile, Dud receives notice that the academy still will not assign his class because the academic team is pursuing some separate project. He grumbles that he would rather be shoved into any class than kept waiting on promises. Even after clearing the first main quest, he cannot understand why he is being excluded from the special class he should qualify for. The system updates with a new main quest: resolve the incident that will occur during the freshman reception in 3 days. He recalls that the reception determines each student's specialization, and decides to pursue a strength-focused path that will match his future equipment. Still, he knows that plan is only part of a much larger problem. The system shows Elnor's trust and affection toward him have jumped sharply, unlocking a special event in 3 days. Ellia is also nearing a major affection shift, meaning another important event is approaching at the same time. With the final boss, the protagonist, and the main quest all converging, Dud realizes something huge is about to happen. Then Elnor's reward arrives, a skill duplication pass that can copy one target's skill, and the sheer value of it leaves him stunned. He immediately thinks of stealing a future final boss skill, but knows using such a reward now would be wasteful. Since Elnor will gain even more broken abilities later, he decides to save the duplication pass for a better moment. For now, he focuses on surviving the event that will happen in 3 days. To prepare, he heads out at night toward a place he knows can improve his odds. He slips into the grass under moonlight, moving in secret. His destination is the old equipment warehouse. Using the point store, he equips cheap stealth and agility items to help him infiltrate the place. After bypassing the warehouse's security, he reaches a hidden farming spot prized by obsessive players. He climbs inside, determined to loot it quickly. The effort drains him, so he uses a stamina recovery biscuit to keep going. Satisfied that the ridiculous item actually works, he starts searching in earnest. He tears through the piles of junk, looking for one specific relic. After finding everything else, he finally closes in on the item that really matters. He uncovers the Ultima of Divinity, an ancient incense burner storing 1,000 years of power. Thrilled, he grabs it and decides he now has everything he needs. Before he can leave, something about the room suddenly feels wrong. The stacked crates begin to shift, and he realizes too late that the whole pile is collapsing. A strange light flashes from within the falling debris, making the danger even worse. As the wreckage crashes down on him, he curses his luck for letting things go smoothly for too long. Out of the dust, he discovers an unconscious girl chained to a sword. When he catches her in his arms, he recognizes her with horror as Yuria. He remembers that she is Yuria Greyhunter, the Chapter 2 boss known as the Cursed Sword Goddess. He instantly understands the relic he stole was originally hers, which means he has wandered straight into her territory. The system screams that the situation is deadly. As Yuria awakens behind him, his desperate survival instinct activates at the highest level. Seeing her chains tighten, he tries to apologize and explain before she fully attacks. She answers by launching a murderous slash that nearly cuts him apart. He realizes this is nothing like his earlier duel with Ellia, because Yuria is fighting to kill. Barely enduring the pressure, he understands he cannot survive many more exchanges. Her blade closes in again, and he knows the margin for error is gone. He recognizes that this is now a pure life-or-death struggle. Even while his body screams from the strain of forced survival buffs, he desperately insists this is all a misunderstanding. When words fail, he begs for a chance to stop the fight. Yuria lashes out with her chained sword and hurls him across the room. He notices a shift in her movement, and starts reading the pattern behind her attacks. As she whirls through another devastating arc, he keeps watching instead of panicking. He realizes the key is not to overpower her, but to stop entering the zone where her curse guarantees death. A blade rushes toward him, and he holds his ground at the exact edge of danger. The attack stops just short, confirming his guess. He recalls the rule of Yuria's curse: anything within 3.5 steps dies, but she herself cannot move forward even 1 step. Using that knowledge, he asks whether she can take a step toward him, exposing the mechanism of her prison. Yuria admits she can, but only in the sense that doing so would doom them both, because she cannot escape the curse either. That answer makes her hesitate for the first time. Dud realizes this isolated place exists because she must be kept away from everyone, and that no one comes here often enough to help her. So instead of another attack, he offers her a stamina biscuit, reasoning that hunger is the one thing stronger than suspicion. Yuria angrily rejects the obvious bribe at first, but hunger wins almost immediately, and she ends up chewing the biscuit while trying not to admit defeat. Once fed, she calms down enough to accept that his intrusion may really have been a mistake. With the immediate danger gone, Dud catches his breath and finally asks who she is and why she is here. Unable to admit he came to steal from her, he lies that he was sent to bring her food. He adds that someone he knows asked him to look after her, planting a useful false connection for later. Privately, he notes that meeting Yuria this early should have been impossible in the original game. To reassure her, he tells her that her sister is safe and doing well in the Holy Empire. He further says the Emperor will not be concerned with them for a while, but warns that she still needs to stay hidden. He reflects that Yuria fled the Holy Empire because of the Emperor, and that as the vessel bound to a cursed sword she suffers the 3-step curse. Because her sister is the only family she has left, he decides this is one truth worth giving her. He recognizes how much pain and isolation she has endured with almost no hope. The story then shifts to the next day, when the academy begins a field lesson. From a hilltop, the students are shown the academy grounds and surrounding facilities. Housemaster Ellia explains that the freshman reception is coming soon and reminds them they must choose majors and minors among the academy's 5 departments. When asked whether the Tribal Alliance teaches the same subjects as the Holy Empire, she confirms it does and jokingly tells the questioner not to think about transferring away. Dud recognizes this as a tutorial event full of important world building, so he cannot afford to ignore it. As expected, one overeager student keeps interrupting with questions, drawing Dud's annoyance. Ellia points out the distant void zone and warns that it is a restricted area protected by a Seraph's barrier. Dud focuses immediately, because the void zone is the scar left by the ancient war between heaven and hell. The lesson describes how divine forces once descended there to suppress demonic power. Even now, the place remains a frontline seal where divine and deathly energies still clash. To monitor it, the Holy Empire, the Tribal Alliance, and the Empire formed a three-way alliance known as the Golden Triangle. That alliance oversees Elfante and the other academies built around the danger. When a student asks to get closer, Ellia allows them to approach the edge of the Seraph's barrier, assuring them it is safe inside. Dud immediately decides to use the excursion as cover for a separate plan of his own. He recalls that the barrier was created by angels and a seraph, beings powerful enough to reshape the world. Once the class settles near the barrier for lunch, he slips into position to act. The others remain relaxed, trusting the barrier to keep the academy safe beside such a dangerous zone. Dud asks for permission to eat a little farther away, claiming the crowd makes him uncomfortable. Ellia allows it, though she notes his classmates have been talking about him, and warns him not to wander too far. Not everyone is pleased, and one hostile student sneers that Dud is getting arrogant from the attention he has received. Ignoring them, Dud finishes preparing the Ultima of Divinity with rare ingredients. He explains that the relic is a portable thurible, meant to reach beings beyond ordinary human contact. When he activates it, a radiant portal begins to open. He checks that he has not missed the lecture while secretly carrying out the ritual. The relic's true purpose is to let him contact beings normal people could never hope to reach. He aims to use that connection to touch a level of power far beyond what students should access. The portal flares open in front of him. Through the light, he starts speaking to the allied forces on the other side and immediately realizes they are not following orders properly. He begins correcting them, only to discover they have misunderstood a simple command and are literally digging instead of flattening the terrain. The angels on the other side finally notice the human voice addressing them and are baffled by his presence. They remark that he has been staring at them for a while, but at least he has not interrupted their work until now. When asked why they stopped, one angel admits the shovel is not moving the way it should. Dud snaps at them to spread the dirt instead of digging deeper, while the workers complain about trivial distractions like frogs. To get their attention, he blasts a loudspeaker through the portal. A truck full of supplies arrives, and the workers are called to unload holy mud bricks. When asked how many there are, the answer is effectively endless, and Dud realizes the scale of the operation is absurd. He also learns the angels treat even drivers as soldiers, revealing how militarized the heavenly forces really are. One superior barks at the others to stop slacking and handle the delivery properly. Another worker explains that the food shipment is delayed because the delivery vehicle is being repaired. Watching this chaos, Dud concludes there is a practical reason angels do not descend whenever they want. In the end, he sums them up as less like divine miracles and more like an overworked military force. Dud recalls that the game's other world runs on strict heavenly hierarchy, where angels obey ranks and chains of command. He realizes that meeting angels this early is abnormal, and direct dealings with high-ranking ones should be impossible at his stage. From that, he concludes the angel's desire must be something simple enough to exploit. So instead of bargaining with words, he offers them something far more basic and irresistible, a lavish meal. While he eats to show confidence, the overworked angels keep watching him and wondering what exactly he brought. One angel tries to ask for a little of it, but the others remind him they are still laborers with no standing to make such demands. Dud politely urges them to eat first, framing the food as concern for their exhaustion rather than a negotiation. The offering is accepted, and the transfer to the angels is completed. The food materializes in their hands, immediately proving his approach worked. The angels are won over at once and call a work break so everyone can enjoy the treat. Dud notes that one human portion is enough to satisfy many beings in this realm, making the exchange absurdly efficient for him. As the angels finish eating, the atmosphere softens completely. One of them, now relaxed and grateful, asks for the thurible Dud brought, and offers to bless it in return for the favor he came seeking. Dud is stunned that the angels are willing to help before any real haggling even begins. He had prepared countless negotiation plans, only to discover that simple hospitality opened a much easier route. The angel sees Dud's suspicion and directly addresses it, knowing he is wondering why a nobody is being treated so well. He reveals that Dud possesses an undeveloped gift that will become valuable later, leaving Dud to suspect the angel means his trait loved by evil. The angel warns that the gift is stronger than Dud realizes, though its future depends on how he chooses to use it. He adds that this same gift has already entangled Dud with a cruel yet friendly monster, confirming Dud's fear that his trait is dangerous. Another angel praises Dud's composure, noting that instead of panicking at the warning, he immediately began planning for survival and showed the makings of someone great. The blessing is completed, and Dud thanks the angel despite still being unsettled by the prophecy. As the angels return to work, Dud keeps turning over the phrase cruel yet friendly, unable to tell what future threat it points to. The angel leaves him with one last encouragement, telling him that even if he doubts himself, at least one heavenly being acknowledges his worth. Once the blessing settles into the thurible, Dud is left alone with the result of his gamble. He reminds himself that he is only struggling this hard because he refuses to die, but the angel's warning is too serious to ignore. The blessed thurible becomes an item called Ultima of Divinity, and grants him 2 defensive skills, asceticism and protective shield. Dud immediately recognizes that the angel has handed him blessings tailored for survival. Because both skills strengthen constitution, he sees them as perfect tools to combine with his survival-focused build and future growth. He is especially pleased that the skills can evolve over time, making them unusually valuable for something obtained this early. The problem is that both skills require mana, which he still cannot use, so he starts looking for temporary ways around that limitation. That search leads him to the Academy's team mock battle registration, where he checks whether anyone is paying attention to his application. A staff member confirms the event requires teams of 2 and immediately points out that Dud appears to have no partner. Dud calmly says his partner will arrive soon, even as others mock the idea that anyone would choose him. He insists he is telling the truth and hints that the place will become crowded once the right person appears. Privately, he relies on his knowledge of the story and the timing tied to his watch, certain the partner he wants is about to show up. Right on cue, the orange-haired warrior candidate arrives looking for the monster research department. Dud greets her warmly, even though he had originally intended to avoid getting involved with the protagonist. After remembering the angel's advice, he changes course and decides to approach her directly. He asks whether her earlier suggestion that they get to know each other still stands. She freezes, caught off guard by the sudden reversal. Dud realizes too late that she meant she likes someone else, not him, and the misunderstanding hits him hard. Her furious reaction makes it clear she thinks he has gone completely insane. Dud flashes back to the Academy rule forbidding freshmen from dating each other, and desperately denying any romantic implication. In that memory, he had insisted there was nothing between them, trying to shut down dangerous rumors. But from her side, that denial sounded like a rejection, and it clearly wounded her pride. Back in the present, he extends his hand anyway, still trying to recruit her. She misreads the gesture as some absurd attempt to make another girl jealous, and concludes he is even more delusional than she thought. Before the argument can spiral further, the Academy mock dungeon opens and the trial begins. Inside the darkened arena, she nervously asks whether he is really sure about this plan. Dud tells her to trust him and reminds her that if she still wants to be friends, she needs to follow his lead. He immediately starts issuing precise combat instructions, calling out enemy positions and counts before the monsters even fully appear. The first beast lunges from above exactly as he predicted. She reacts in time and drags him clear while warning that more are dropping in from the ceiling. Additional flying monsters descend, confirming that Dud knows the stage pattern in advance. He shouts their weak point and tells her to strike the neck and body rather than waste effort on the wings. Following his directions, she cuts through the attackers cleanly. When she demands that he stop ordering her around and actually help, he refuses. Instead, he keeps feeding her exact warnings about incoming traps and projectiles, telling her where and when to move. She survives a barrage of flying blades only because his timing is perfect. He continues the sequence, identifying poison mechanisms and ordering her to destroy them before they trigger. Then he counts down arrows and rear attacks with such accuracy that she can dodge them almost mechanically. Even under pressure, she keeps up with his instructions and holds the formation together. Frustrated, she points out that if he knows everything this well, he should be the one fighting instead of making her do all the work. Dud admits he wants to help but cannot, because his stats are still trash and he is effectively a dead weight in direct combat. He also knows his emergency trait will not activate here, since the mock battle lacks real murderous intent and the monsters follow fixed scripts. That limitation convinces him even more that he must raise his own stats quickly if he wants to survive future battles. When she cries out for him again, he realizes he may be pushing her too hard. He briefly wonders whether this is exactly the kind of cruelty the angel warned him about. Still, she lands another decisive strike while he shields himself and stays out of her way. She begins to understand that his guidance is not random luck but a deliberate reading of the battlefield. Dud watches her closely, measuring every movement and waiting for the clear condition he needs. Their pace shatters the previous record for the stage, and the system announces the new best time. She is baffled that she fought almost alone yet somehow earned a record in a stage designed for 2. Dud brushes it off as luck, hiding how thoroughly he has studied the game and optimized their route. He urges her onward to the next area, but her silence makes it clear she is no longer amused by his methods. Elsewhere, a hooded observer watches their performance through a magical monitor and notes that they are doing remarkably well. The observer is revealed as Percy, Dean of Spellcraft, who starts considering how impressive this mock battle run has become. A nervous subordinate confirms that the dungeon setup came from their department. Conrad, from the knighthood department, admits he has been watching one particular participant with growing interest. When Percy assumes he means the warrior candidate, Conrad corrects her and names Dud Campbell instead. Percy dismisses Dud as a freeloader riding on the warrior candidate's strength, but Conrad rejects that reading. He argues that although the girl is the stronger fighter, Dud is the true key to the record. Conrad points to Dud's positioning, timing, commands, and follow-up decisions as evidence of flawless battlefield judgment. To Conrad, Dud's every move feels calculated by someone with the experience of countless real battles. Impressed enough to gamble on him, Conrad proposes a bet to Percy. He introduces himself directly to the pair through the dungeon system, and says he has taken an interest in them. Conrad announces that he and Percy will wager on whether the two freshmen can break the record he and Percy once set themselves. If they succeed, he promises them the right to demand one favor from Percy, a reward so extreme that even she is startled. He downplays the risk and frames the challenge as nearly impossible anyway, giving them room to refuse. Dud accepts immediately, confident that this opportunity is too valuable to pass up. Conrad is delighted by the bold answer and officially starts the challenge while Percy fumes in the background. Elsewhere in the academy, another student notices unusual commotion around the mock battlegrounds. A bespectacled girl finds a silver-haired woman overexerting herself and tries to calm her down with water. The silver-haired woman explains that she was trying to remember sword forms her mother taught her long ago and had been retracing them from the beginning. The narration reveals the dark rumor surrounding the Tristan bloodline. Their monstrous talent is matched by something far more troubling. That second side is periodic madness, and the silver-haired woman shows signs of slipping toward it. The rumor describes violent breakdowns that ruin the later lives of Tristan descendants, even after great achievements. She insists it is nothing serious now, but her companion can tell she is hiding how unstable she feels. The companion finally shares the urgent report she had been told to deliver at once. The report is that Dud Campbell is currently with the next term's warrior candidate. The silver-haired woman immediately asks which warrior candidate, and hears the name Ellia Crixanax. When she learns Dud and Ellia have paired up for the team mock battle, the implication lands hard. She goes quiet, processing what that means. Then she exhales, but the calm is forced rather than genuine. A moment later she orders to be taken there at once, abandoning any pretense of indifference. Back in the dungeon, Dud draws his sword at last, preparing for the next escalation. He acknowledges Elia's skill but insists that challenging the all-time record is still worth it. Ellia questions whether his confidence is backed by any real reason or just reckless pride. Dud cannot tell her that his certainty comes from knowing the monster's fixed patterns and weak points from the game itself. So he gives her a simpler answer. He wants to do this because she is here with him. Meanwhile, Conrad asks Percy if she is ready to alter the final section's difficulty, explaining that higher settings grant more points. Percy protests when Dud requests the highest difficulty, warning that it is close to real combat and could kill them. Conrad decides the attempt is worth seeing through and agrees to honor Dud's demand. Ellia senses the atmosphere change and realizes something dangerous has just been set in motion. Dud tells her not to panic, because there is no undoing the choice now. Percy complains that Conrad is repeating the same reckless favoritism he showed a previous freshman, but Conrad remains unfazed. Ellia, hearing the professor's exchange, decides that Dud must have some hidden reason for being this sure of himself. Conrad quietly resolves that if the situation turns truly lethal, he will intervene. Then the final section transforms into a slaughter field packed with monsters far beyond the earlier waves. Conrad gleefully announces that slaughter mode has been activated and challenges the freshmen to prove themselves. Ellia curses but charges anyway, refusing to freeze in front of the impossible odds. Percy is alarmed enough to realize the challenge may have gone too far. The subordinate watching with her is convinced their department is finished if the students die. At that exact moment, Dud's survival trait finally recognizes genuine danger. The system confirms the threat is truly life-threatening as the monsters close in from every direction. Dud's expression hardens, and he stops pretending to be helpless. He intercepts the charging beast with a single clean slash, shocking everyone watching. Conrad erupts in excitement, realizing this hidden ability is what he had been waiting to see. Ellia instantly understands that Dud had been concealing his real combat power all along. He slips through another attack with impossible speed, leaving even Percy struggling to follow what he is doing. As he kills the humanoid monster in one motion, the spectators can no longer reconcile this fighter with the useless boy they thought they knew. Conrad explains that Dud had merely been acting weak until the right condition activated. He adds that he cannot blame Percy for misjudging Dud, because even he would have doubted it without seeing Dud's earlier growth firsthand. Conrad further notes that as the monsters become stronger, Dud's survival-based power rises with them. That means the final section's increased difficulty is not just a threat to Dud but also a source of greater strength for him. With Ellia and Dud now both empowered in their own ways, they begin cutting through the horde together at terrifying speed. Ellia drives her blade into the giant red insect while Dud clears the surrounding enemies to open her path. When she calls for him, he responds instantly, and their coordination finally becomes seamless. Dud leaps above the insect and prepares a named Tristan sword technique, revealing a lineage skill he had kept hidden. His strike detonates across the monster's body in a storm of impacts, and even the system praises the overwhelming force behind it. The record board updates to show Dud Campbell and Ellia Crixanax as the new top pair. The system declares that they have broken the all-time record, but Dud notices one last danger before he can relax. He looks up and shouts for Ellia to get down immediately. A final attack flashes toward them from above. Conrad intervenes at the last instant, destroying the threat himself before it can hit the students. Afterward, he praises Dud and marvels that a freshman can mow through artificial monsters of Elefante's level so decisively. Ellia, still breathing hard, thanks Conrad for stepping in when the danger exceeded the test. Conrad claims victory in the bed over Percy, who can only stew over the outcome. The promised reward is formalized as access to a rare item rental and the right to request any favor from the Dean of Spellcraft. Ellia is thrilled by how extraordinary the reward is, while Dud quietly confirms that they both received the same prize. Ellia asks Dud why he stays so unnervingly calm no matter what happens. She realizes his composure feels less like confidence, and more like someone who already knows how events will unfold, while he silently hides that this is exactly the truth. When she calls him back, Dud braces for something stranger than the conversation. Ellia awkwardly offers a fist bump as a sign of friendship, trying to make their bond feel casual. Dud doubts her idea but decides to humor her. The fist bump lands, and his system immediately notes that Ellia is close to trusting him. Ellia quietly confirms for herself that the gesture worked. Satisfied, she cheerfully parts ways and leaves Dud with a better relationship than before. Left alone, Dud concludes that he still cannot tell whether Ellia is genuinely friendly or simply bizarre. That thought is interrupted when the student council president, Elnor, suddenly appears before him. Without preamble, Elnor asks whether he likes the freshman girl he was just with. Dud is caught off guard, but his danger sense stays quiet, so he realizes she is not here to attack him. Elnor makes it clear she expects a direct answer and will not repeat herself again. Dud panics because any wrong response could trigger deadly consequences from the system or from her. He stalls awkwardly, trying to buy time while Elnor waits. His first attempt at an answer collapses before he can even finish it. What comes out instead sounds like he has missed seeing Elnor herself. Dud immediately realizes how disastrous that slip was and mentally curses himself. Elnor interprets his blunder as a confession that he has been thinking about her all along. When she asks why, Dud can only flounder and wonder what is wrong with him. Elnor decides his attachment must come from gratitude because she once saved him on the train. Dud is baffled when she brings up some priority listing he does not understand. Instead of pressing the issue, Elnor hands him a sealed letter she specifically came to deliver. Dud is stunned, unable to tell whether the letter is romantic, hostile, or something entirely new to the story. Elnor tells him to open it only when he is alone, turning the mystery into a command. He reluctantly agrees and accepts the envelope. Later, after reading it in private, Dud is horrified to learn that Elnor wants him as her partner. He remembers the freshman welcome party is the next day, and realizes accepting would only mean spending the event with her. The real danger lies in refusing, because rejection would lower her affection and could make her openly hostile. Before he can settle his thoughts, someone arrives at his door. It is Ellia, who immediately guesses he expected her, and teases him for catching on quickly. She also hands him a sealed letter, making his situation even worse. Dud tries to play dumb, but internally he panics at the possibility of another partner request. Ellia reveals she decided during their mock battle that she wanted to ask him something important. She rushes off before he can stop her, insisting he read it right away. Dud is left reeling at how many dangerously eccentric people now surround him. As he opens Elia's letter, he hopes it might be something harmless, though he knows it probably is not. The word surprise only makes him dread the answer more. His worst fear is confirmed when he realizes Ellia is also asking him to be her partner. The impossible choice finally breaks him. Now holding two partner requests that never existed in the original story, Dud despairs over how unfair this branch has become. He knows choosing Elnor risks making the main heroine see him as a villain, while choosing Ellia risks provoking the final boss and whatever hidden system rule governs her. Refusing both sounds safer in theory, but he has no confidence that either girl would accept rejection quietly. He realizes the crisis happened because both girls are still only in the early stage of interest, making the situation unstable and unpredictable. A reckless idea forms: maybe he can accept both at once. The next day, the freshman welcome party begins in a grand hall as staff organize the arriving classes. Students gather while teachers confirm attendance and direct the newcomers inside. The celebration fills the academy with crowds, noise, and opportunities for disaster. Ellia immediately dislikes the packed hall and complains that the event feels filthy and chaotic. Still, she thanks Dud for accompanying her. Elsewhere, Elnor notices Dud and reacts with quiet displeasure. To survive the double booking, Dud spends all his points on a clone skill so another version of him can stand in his place. He commits to a dangerous double date plan, and the system rewards the choice with a new event while warning him not to get caught. Knowing the plan could collapse instantly, he prepares additional backup measures. He decides that if anyone sees him and the clone together, he will use a cold and distant persona to shut down suspicion. Before he can settle in, a sudden realization hits him. He remembers the hidden monster incident tied to this event and the danger it brings. A wagon carrying caged creatures enters the academy grounds, and someone urgently orders people to clear the way. Dud recognizes the setup from the original story. The academy plans to experiment on outside monsters, and one of them will inevitably escape. Even so, he convinces himself that with Ellia and Elnor both nearby, surviving should still be manageable, then foolishly activates a pheromone item to help. The effect immediately feels wrong, and Dud is alarmed by what he has done. When Elnor finds him, he forces himself to act normal. Elnor notices an unusual scent around him, and Dud desperately blames the flowers instead. The pheromones hit her hard anyway, leaving her flustered and dangerously receptive. Dud internally begs the universe to stop making everything worse. The system confirms the pheromones affected Elnor, but also notes she is actively resisting the attraction. Even while affected, Elnor starts seeing Dud in a more masculine light than before. Dud is horrified by how badly the item has backfired. To keep her moving and avoid suspicion, he suggests they walk through the nearby stalls before the main event. As he leads her away, He reminds himself that the clone should be meeting Ellia elsewhere and that the two routes must never cross. Elnor tries to steady herself and hopes nothing more goes wrong. Dud clings to the hope that if he and the clone simply keep escorting both girls separately, the event might pass without disaster. Trying to weaken the pheromone effect, he deliberately recommends greasy wild boar skewers, assuming Elnor would hate them. Instead, she is delighted and takes his choice as proof that he somehow understands her tastes. His attempt to create distance fails, and he is forced to keep up the act while staying emotionally out of reach. At the same time, he knows Ellia must also be kept far away from this route. When Elnor offers to buy him something from an accessory stall, Dud panics because even a gift could deepen her feelings. He tries to sabotage that too by picking the most worthless item he can find, a plain button. Elnor again takes it as a thoughtful choice and admits she actually needed one, making his situation even harder. To shift the mood, she asks whether he has chosen his major. Dud answers that he intends to study theology, which surprises her. Elnor argues that his talent belongs with the knights and that theology would waste his potential. Dud insists he chose that path for a reason and refuses to reconsider. When she presses him, he explains that theology holds something he must learn in order to protect what matters to him. Elnor asks what he wants to protect, while Dud privately thinks the answer is his own life and her eventual downfall. He explains that holy skills are essential to the future he wants, and that he has wanted this power since childhood. In his mind, he connects that need to the coming secret society incident and the chapter boss that is especially vulnerable to holy abilities. Elnor then asks whether his obsession with protecting something is the reason he keeps involving himself in her affairs, revealing she knows about the Tristan family curse. She openly names the curse that drives her bloodline toward madness and notes that ordinary mental discipline is not enough to solve it. With unusual seriousness, she asks whether he knows the true cure. Dud answers that the only real solution is the angel's blessing, a miracle granted by two archangels to one person. Elnor confirms how impossibly rare that is and then demands to know how Dud can stay so close to her and repeatedly appear whenever someone tries to kill her. She finally asks him outright what his intentions are. After a long silence, Dud answers with the simplest truth he can give. The person he wants to protect is her. Elnor asks what she is to him, and Dud admits that if he fails to protect her, he will die. He insists that this is the whole truth as far as he can tell her. Elnor says she suspected from the beginning that he was strange, but now she sees just how strange he really is. Dud accepts the judgment, relieved that he managed to answer honestly without exposing everything. Elsewhere beneath the academy, Ellia wanders into the basement, and reflects that Dud truly is an odd man. There she discovers the caged monsters being kept below the school, including the massive beasts meant for experimentation. Meanwhile, the clone accompanying Ellia stays unusually quiet, making her wonder if he is upset with her. Ellia decides she needs to get closer to him to understand both him and the Tristan family better, though she has no idea how to handle men at all. Her confusion only deepens as she admits to herself that Dud is unlike anyone she knows. Looking around the basement, she realizes the academy is keeping living monsters there for research. She is disgusted by the professor's irresponsibility and cannot believe such dangerous creatures were left beneath a crowded party. A growl from one of the beasts warns that the situation is already unstable. Ellia notices even larger monsters than expected and senses the danger escalating. When she checks the cages more closely, she realizes some of the restraints are missing entirely. She spots a trigger device on the bars just before the trap is sprung. The realization hits her a fraction too late. An explosion tears through the basement and throws the pair to the ground. Back upstairs, Elnor and Dud are jolted by the blast. The scream and shockwave spread through the hall, turning the celebration into panic. In the basement, the clone shields Ellia from the blast with his own body, leaving her stunned by the sacrifice. Badly hurt, the clone tells her that protecting her is simply his job. Ellia is shaken by the answer and by what he just did for her. Before she can understand it, the real monsters close in. Freed from their cages, the beasts advance on Ellia through the flames. Their roars make clear that the basement has become a killing ground. Ellia steadies herself amid the wreckage and prepares to fight. Remembering how Dud protected her, she thanks him and decides she will return that protection. She takes up a weapon and resolves to stand between the monsters and the injured Dud. At the same time, the system declares the monster outbreak the main quest and warns Dud that too many deaths will bring a severe penalty. Dud orders Elnor to find a priest immediately, knowing holy power is the key to ending this scenario. When she hesitates, he begs her to help save the students. His urgency finally reaches her. The clone is recalled, and the real Dud rushes to Ellia while demanding a count of the released monsters. He finds Ellia alive among the corpses of the beasts she already killed, and the system notes that her feelings for him have risen from curiosity to genuine interest, while the scenario itself changes. Dud realizes one major creature is still missing and identifies it as the giant bear from earlier. Ellia says it should be on the first floor and tries to keep moving, though she is clearly exhausted. Dud wants to check on her, but the main scenario takes priority, and he cannot afford to fail now. He forces himself to focus on preventing mass casualties in the hall above. Upstairs, terrified students are told to endure until the professors and knights arrive. A professor struggles to maintain a protective barrier and orders everyone to keep it from collapsing. The giant bear smashes into the barrier, and the shield begins to crack under its strength. Elnor reaches a priest and learns that neither the Chancellor nor Professor Conrad is present, meaning no one available can invoke the angel's blessing. She furiously demands action, but the priest only insists that such a high-level miracle is beyond ordinary people. He advises waiting for the knights, even while admitting he opposed the monster experiments from the start. Elnor, enraged, blames the Academy for ever granting the Tristan family authority over such matters. Refusing to wait, Dud seizes the priest's rosary and declares that he will handle it himself. As he charges toward the failing barrier, the priest shouts after him in disbelief and outrage. The priest mocks him as just a student who cannot possibly understand a blessing, while Elnor can only stare after Dud. Dud keeps running, fully committed to the gamble. The system fuses his divinity skill with the priest's rosary and grants him 2 usable holy techniques, asceticism and holy shield. Even with that power, the system warns that the danger remains life-threatening. The giant bear lunges at him, and Dud's highest survival instinct activates as the monster closes in. Ignoring the professor's plea to save himself, Dud orders him to evacuate the students while he buys time. He activates asceticism, converting every spare advantage he has into raw durability so he can endure the beast's assault. Then he invokes Holy Barrier and gathers radiant power into a defensive cross. A blazing shield with angelic wings erupts around him just as the giant bear crashes down, and Dud meets the monster head-on. Dud forces himself to hold the line as the crisis peaks. The spectators realize in shock that he has invoked Angel's blessing. He raises a holy barrier and uses it to stop the charging beast head-on. Even trained clergy are stunned that a mere student can wield a blessing that normally demands immense preparation. Elnor, already used to Dud defying expectations, accepts that he has done the impossible again. While Dud strains against the monster, she remembers how often he has hidden absurd power. A priest panics when he realizes the barrier is holding only because Dud himself is sustaining it. Elnor coldly rebukes the useless professor for criticizing instead of helping. Ellia arrives late, apologizes for the delay, and dismisses the professor as dead weight. She explains she had been unconscious in the basement, and only just made it back. Ignoring that distraction, she focuses on Dud's reckless use of the blessing. Watching the clash, she cannot understand how someone outside the battle priest path can control a power said to require a decade of training. Elnor is struck by that same contradiction and starts tracing it back to something Dud once said. She recalls Dud insisting he needed to learn something from the theology department. She also remembers his blunt promise that if he failed to protect her, he would die. What unsettles her most is that he claimed he had no reason beyond that. Ellia notes that even a stored blessing should have had limits, and hints that Elnor should already understand why Dud is pushing past them. That implication lands hard enough to shake Elnor out of her composure. Ellia spells it out. Dud is doing all of this for the Tristan family, and especially for Elnor. At the same time, Dud keeps enduring the monster's assault with sheer stubbornness. The beast continues raging, but Ellia insists there would be no reason for Dud to go this far otherwise. Elnor can no longer dismiss the feeling that his actions have always centered on her. That realization drives her inward, into a dark and private moment of reflection. She sits alone with the weight of what Dud's devotion might mean. In that silence, a distant light appears and draws her attention back outward. As the glow reaches her, her hesitation hardens into resolve. She launches herself into the battle, acknowledging that Dud is far stranger than she first believed. Dud keeps the barrier up just long enough for her intervention to matter. Ellia watches in surprise as Elnor suddenly takes the field herself. The onlookers are equally stunned that she has stepped in. Elnor narrows her focus and commits fully to the strike. She descends with the true Tristan sword technique, aiming straight for the monster's weak point. Her blade lands cleanly, driving holy force into the beast. The monster recoils, wounded but not yet finished. Elnor follows through with a devastating impact that tears up the floor and knocks the creature back. Dud is left staring as she reveals power he did not expect to see here. The beast howls in pain as the wound deepens. Elnor stands alone before it, forcing the monster onto the defensive. Dud recognizes that she is using the genuine Tristan technique rather than the imitation he knows. She chains that revelation into a barrage of radiant slashes. Each strike hammers the beast harder, overwhelming it with precision and force. Elnor presses forward without hesitation, fully in control of the exchange. The monster starts bleeding heavily as her assault tears through its face and jaws. She pivots cleanly to maintain pressure and deny it any opening. Then she cuts across its body in a fast, low pass. The blade bites deep again, opening another fatal wound. Calling the finishing move Tramontana, she unleashes the full arc of the technique. The attack detonates through the monster and engulfs it in a massive explosion. Dud realizes this version of the Tristan style far surpasses the copied one he possesses, and that Elnor was never supposed to intervene in this event at all. A system notice confirms the subjugation is succeeding with 0 casualties, while the knights are only seconds away from arriving. Dud immediately understands why Elnor's involvement is so dangerous politically. By acting, she is exposing the Tristan faction's own failures. Elnor watches the burning aftermath in silence, unconcerned with those consequences for the moment. Dud cannot reconcile her actions with the calculating, detached role he expected her to play. He decides there is no time to solve that mystery and shifts to getting everyone out safely. Elnor remains standing at the center of the ruined hall, sword in hand, as the danger seems to pass. She finally lets out a breath of relief. Dud also believes the ordeal is over, but a warning comes too late. Something far worse rises behind Elnor from the flames. She senses the threat and turns in alarm. Dud throws himself between her and the attack, raising Angel's blessing again at the last instant. A skeletal, demonic remnant crashes into his barrier, and he absorbs the blow in her place. Elnor is stunned that he protected her again without hesitation. Dud, bloodied and barely conscious, still manages a faint, satisfied smile. His vision closes as he collapses from the accumulated strain. He later wakes in a bed to find someone waiting for him. The visitor, Dud Campbell, assures him that the monsters were defeated and Elnor survived unharmed. He is shocked to discover the Academy Chancellor herself, Atalanta Swansong, has come to see him. She calmly confirms that every student also made it through the incident safely. Dud tries to stay composed, but inwardly wonders why an immoral ruler of the Academy would take personal interest in him. Atalanta says she has come with bad news and even worse news, and Dud immediately suspects it concerns his use of Angel's blessing. When she lets him choose, he asks for the bad news first. She tells him that his string of accidents and crises has made him the most conspicuous student the Academy has ever seen, and that his bad luck will keep dragging him into trouble. Dud insists none of it was intentional, but she moves on to the worst problem. She asks how much he knows about demons. The room seems to tighten around the question. Atalanta notices that Dud is far too calm for someone hearing that topic from the Academy president. He decides not to reveal how much he truly knows, wary of what she might be testing. She presses him lightly, but he deflects by complaining that he has not even been assigned to a class yet. Atalanta reads the irritation correctly and changes tack. She admits she has been doing damage control behind the scenes because of the recent incidents around him. Then she explains the broader crisis. The current powers ruling the continent are unstable and losing control. In that chaos, every faction is desperate to recruit exceptional talent by any means necessary. Dud connects that to the recent coups, institutional upheavals, and succession struggles shaking the continent. Atalanta is impressed that he can already see the pattern. She identifies the three great powers locked in that struggle as the Golden Triangle. Beneath their outward peace, she says, a ruthless competition for gifted people is already affecting the entire continent. Dud realizes the Holy Empire, the Tribal Association, and Elfante should all have noticed him by now. Since none of them have moved openly, he concludes someone must be suppressing information about him. Atalanta silently notes that he is not just capable, but politically sharp. He asks whether attracting their attention now would put him in danger. She answers with brutal simplicity that it would mean the end of the world. The warning hits him like a vision of cities burning under apocalyptic force. To explain why, Atalanta shows him a seal tied to a hidden demonic threat. Dud immediately recognizes it as the mark of the Purifiers. That reaction surprises even Atalanta, who realizes he already knows of them. She explains that the Purifiers are a secret demon-worshipping cult whose goal is to bring demons into the world, and that both the assassination attempt on Elnor and the monster escape are suspected to be their work. More specifically, both attacks were aimed at the Tristan family. When Dud asks why she is telling him this, she warns that there is no guarantee a third attack will not come. Then, without explaining her motives, she offers him an interdimensional key, a forbidden item capable of opening paths to other worlds. Dud recognizes at once how impossible and valuable the gift is. Atalanta tells him to guard it well and prove what he can do with it. She promises more gifts if his future results satisfy her. Before leaving, she orders him to keep their entire conversation secret, and he reluctantly agrees. As an afterthought, she asks how things are going with the warrior candidate and the Lady of Tristan. The question hits Dud like a personal attack, but he forces out that everything is fine. Atalanta says she hopes it stays that way, and when he asks why, she gives no immediate answer. Instead, she repeats her warning that if he fails, the world will end. Dud can only despair at how casually Apocalypse keeps getting attached to his life. Atalanta insists she is serious, because the final objective of her plans depends on those three key figures. After she leaves, the Academy returns to ordinary daylight, but Dud is left carrying extraordinary stakes. Holding the key, he can only mutter about the end of the world. He decides to think about it later, while realizing that receiving such an item means the main scenario has already gone badly off script. That thought is interrupted when someone finds him. The Dean of Knights, Conrad Valtador, approaches and says he has been looking for Dud. Conrad explains that Dud cannot keep skipping classes just because his placement is unresolved. He hands over a temporary class assignment. Dud is told he will start attending with that group the very next day. Then he sees the roster and freezes. The class president is Elnor Tristan, and the vice president is Ellia Crixanax. Dud immediately concludes that the end of the world must be approaching after all. The next day, a sword lecture begins with a dry discussion of fundamentals. Elnor interrupts to question whether the professor's abstract theory has any practical value. The professor, flustered but respectful, invites Lady Tristan to continue. She bluntly argues that information useless in real combat should not be treated as meaningful instruction. Forced to respond, the professor concedes part of her point and starts reframing the lesson around practical counters to ranged threats. Ellia sides with the professor just enough to keep the debate going. Dud, stuck between them, points out that terrain and distance can still make a swordsman vulnerable. Ellia snaps back that theory and reality differ, while Elnor tells him that if he is only here by force, he should at least stop interrupting. The argument escalates into a clash of authority and pride between the student president and vice president, with Dud trapped in the middle. Both girls dismiss the other's judgment and insist their own view is more useful than anything being taught. Dud finally cuts in just to beg for the lecture to continue before things get worse. Ellia immediately claims that as a win for her side, while Elnor treats it as only a temporary setback and allows the professor to resume. A weary classmate notes that this chaos has been constant from the start. Dud realizes the rest of the students are now staring at him because he sits between the warrior candidate and the Tristan heir. Trying to ignore the social disaster, he focuses on his own system and sees that Elnor's trust has converted into affection, unlocking a reward. The reward grants him basic Tristan sword techniques and a deep breathing method that greatly boosts stamina and pairs perfectly with the sword style. Dud immediately understands how powerful the combination is. He also remembers that Elnor's terrifying close-quarters strength is exactly what makes her the final boss in the original story. At the same time, Elia's curiosity toward him rises into interest, unlocking another reward. This new reward is far more disturbing, a power that lets him influence good people close to him, force one request on them, and gain even greater rewards if he corrupts them. Dud is horrified that the system is now openly rewarding him for turning good people evil. Soon after, the class moves outdoors for Survival 101, where students are told they will learn by direct experience in the forest. Conrad gives them a simple but subjective task: enter the woods and bring back whatever he personally finds worthwhile. Dud learns they have only 10 minutes to do it. When someone asks for a scoring rubric, Conrad smugly says the judgment is entirely his. He adds that he and the student president will evaluate the results together, which earns Elnor's visible annoyance. Ellia laughs off the vagueness, and Conrad insists that experience itself is the lesson. While others prepare, Dud broods over the corrupting reward and has no idea how he is supposed to use something so sinister. Ellia approaches him warmly and asks if he wants to work together. Dud tries to push her back toward her proper allies, but she cheerfully insists that he counts as her friend too. When asked to team up, the hooded girl refuses because she feels she would only be intruding on someone else's bond. Ellia notices his awkwardness and lightly probes him about what is bothering him. Dud tries to brush it off, but he is clearly uneasy. He admits that he and Ellia are not actually close, and the remark lands harder than he intended. Ellia falls silent, stung by the distance he just drew between them. She turns away, hiding the hurt behind a controlled expression. Accepting his answer, she leaves him with clipped restraint. Tricia immediately senses the tension and wonders if Dud has just offended Ellia. Before he can dwell on it, another student steps in. The newcomer identifies Dud and catches him off guard. Talion Armand confronts Dud over his connection to Ellia, unable to believe someone like him would have access to the warrior candidate. Dud recognizes Talion as one of the strongest students and answers cautiously, claiming he merely happens to know her. Talion rejects that explanation, cites the suspicious duel rumors, and his hostility triggers Dud's system by marking him as another good person pushed into anger. Dud realizes he has satisfied the condition for his sinister ability by provoking Talion. Talion presses harder, accusing Dud's victory in the duel of being fraudulent, while Dud decides this enraged rival may be useful later. Dud denies the duel was fake and twists the knife by suggesting Talion only wishes it had been. He openly mocks Talion's frustration at seeing his ambitions crushed and asks whether he can finally feel the gap between them. Ellia, still nearby, notices the exchange. Talion repeats Dud's taunt to himself, trying to process the humiliation. Instead of backing down, he proposes settling their rivalry with a wager. Talion challenges Dud to compete over who scores higher on the current assignment. Dud accepts at once, pleased that the situation is unfolding in his favor. Elsewhere, the student council president arrives to inspect the grading. She is confronted by the student president, who accuses her of treating the scoring process too casually. He points out that Dud has already been given a perfect score before even submitting his work. She answers without hesitation that Dud deserves it. When challenged, she invites him to observe Dud directly if he wants proof of why that score is justified. She moves to leave, but he stops her. He accuses her of trying to stay close to Dud, and she denies any personal motive while insisting she simply does not want him left alone with Ellia. He asks permission to check on them, and she coldly reminds him that she can still remove him from the exercise entirely. Tricia watches Ellia from afar, worried by the change in her mood. She senses that Ellia is different today and becomes more alert. At the same time, Ellia cuts down a charging beast with overwhelming force. Another student realizes the monsters are unusually strong and suspects something valuable is nearby. A separate group confirms they are in a rare mineral zone and decides to gather gems to avoid a poor grade. As Ellia fights, a dark energy begins to pulse from her chest. Her anger explodes into a brutal burst of strength that crushes the monsters around her. Tricia, who can perceive emotional darkness, realizes Ellia is far angrier than she appears. She approaches carefully and tries to start a gentle conversation. Ellia pretends nothing is wrong and claims there is nothing troubling her. Even while Ellia denies it, Trisha sees the dark emotions still boiling inside her, and fears it may take over. Trisha insists that something is bothering her, and tries to coax the truth out. Ellia finally exhales, her composure slipping. She admits she cannot hide things from Trisha. The moment softens as the tension briefly eases. Trisha explains that Dud may have been keeping his distance not out of rejection, but because being seen with Ellia could create trouble for her. She suggests Dud's coldness may not reflect his real intentions. Ellia asks what that could possibly mean. Trisha points out that Dud comes from a minor baron family, and public closeness to the warrior candidate would invite scrutiny and gossip. Ellia begins to reinterpret his behavior as an attempt to protect her from misunderstandings. Trisha pushes that hopeful reading further, saying he may value her as a friend while waiting until his own reputation is strong enough. Ellia wants to believe it. Meanwhile, Dud runs hard through the forest, still executing his own plans. His system reports that Talian's rage has reached its limit, and that Dud has inflicted lasting humiliation. The system confirms that Dud's corrupting influence on Talian has been fully established. Talian snaps completely, activating the rule of evil reward as he charges in with murderous intent. Consumed by rage, he vows to kill Dud outright. Dud barely registers the incoming strike before it is upon him. Talian dives from above with his spear, forcing Dud into desperate evasive movement. Talian rages that Dud keeps stealing the finishing blows after Talian does the real work. Dud tries to stop the escalation before it turns fatal. Talian plants himself to continue the attack. Then he hears Ellia call his name and falters. Dud instantly tries to defuse the situation by joking about splitting the rewards. Talian ignores him and lashes out again in fury. He unleashes a lightning-charged spear technique meant to finish Dud in one blow. The attack crashes down with lethal force. The spear strike tears into the ground in a blazing column. Talian realizes too late that something has interrupted the kill. Dud is stunned by what he sees next. Ellia has intercepted the attack and shattered Talian's spear with her sword. Standing between them, she warns Talian to keep his hands off her friend. Talian is left speechless by the sudden reversal. Ellia closes the distance before he can recover. She corrects his attempt at familiarity, and reframes their relationship as one defined by his defeat. Ellia reminds him that this is their first meeting since he lost to her. Dud is baffled by how abruptly she appeared and took control. Talian forces a shaky smile and tries to act as if nothing serious was happening. Ellia refuses the act and accuses him of harassing Dud. When Talian tries to explain, she cuts him off physically before he can finish. She knocks him down with humiliating ease. Looking down on him, Ellia makes it clear she has no interest in excuses. Talian demands to know why someone as strong as Ellia keeps defending Dud, while Dud tries to calm her and Talian insists Dud is deceiving everyone. Ellia rejects that accusation completely, and declares that Dud is not the kind of person who harms others without reason. She threatens Talian with another one-strike defeat if he wants to test her again. Talian finally understands that Dud's earlier duel restraint may have been the only reason he survived. His pride collapses. He kneels and apologizes to Dud, promising not to approach him again without permission. Ellia forces him to formalize the apology and agree to get along. With the lesson delivered, she turns away, and Dud notes that this is exactly the kind of harsh correction expected from the warrior candidate. Dud wonders whether he and Ellia can still be called friends, and decides that for the moment they probably still are. He pushes the question aside because the assignment score matters more right now. Trisha approaches him once the confrontation ends. She reintroduces herself, and reminds him that she is Elia's friend. Dud braces himself, knowing Trisha tends to drag conversations out. Trisha hesitates, unsure how to raise what is bothering her. Before she can continue, Dud excuses himself to get graded first, leaving her hanging. Watching him go, Trisha concludes that he deliberately pushed Ellia into fighting Talian, something Ellia normally would have tried to talk through. She decides Dud is the real problem behind what just happened. Dud is blindsided by the accusation. The student president calmly explains that the council president forced her way into the forest and lost to him when he blocked her. Dud can only conclude that this academy's internal politics are absurd. The student president, impressed by Dud's growth, casually suggests punishing the council president rather than worrying about her. Dud ignores that and asks for his assignment score instead. The council president notices how much he brought back and Dud downplays it as careful ingredient selection. His haul earns him first place, and he is told the minerals would make a fine gift for Professor Percy. The student president reminds him that he still holds a wish agreement and suggests using it to gain favor with her. Dud agrees and prepares to leave, while Trisha lingers nearby. He is dismissed from class, and Trisha is asked to look after Ellia. Trisha warns Dud that Ellia loses all sense whenever he comes up, so he should care for her but not encourage her too much. Dud accepts the warning, though privately he is more alarmed than grateful. He leaves with a promise to do what he can. Behind him, Trisha heals the battered council president, and worries that Dud will need to be careful if he wants to survive what is coming. As Ellia is restored, Trisha reflects that Ellia herself may not realize how close she is to crossing a dangerous line. Later, Dud heads to the spellcraft department. Professor Percy, the goddess of spellcraft, is surprised that he wants to spend his one wish so soon. Dud flatters her, and says he needs something only she can provide. She reminds him that others are also working to satisfy her request and that he would not need favors if she had not used the wish system in the first place. Dud reflects that he needs every advantage possible before the coming Purifier boss battle. Percy agrees to help as long as his request is not for some hidden ulterior purpose and asks what he wants. Dud steels himself before saying it aloud. The system suddenly rewards him for Elia's gift, granting points, a seed of evil, and new skill options. It also records a negative seal on Ellia, meaning he can invoke rule of evil on her once. Talion receives the same mark, and Dud notes that these special skills are more valuable than ordinary items, though he still lacks what he truly needs. He thinks ahead to the Purifier and admits that Dud Campbell alone is too weak to overcome the chapter boss's many patterns. So he states the answer plainly: he needs a cannon. Not just any weapon, but one powerful enough to blow away the entire academy if necessary, which makes Percy question his sanity. She demands to know where he could possibly intend to use such a thing. Dud counters by producing the written promise and arguing that fulfilling ordinary requests should make this easy for the Dean of Spellcraft. Percy protests that building a weapon is hardly ordinary, but admits a promise is still a promise. Dud insists he will not use it on people and only wants something capable of killing a troublesome target in a single shot, which alarms her even more. Even so, Percy decides to trust that he has his reasons. Because he recently helped with the monster crisis, she agrees to build the cannon for him. As soon as he thanks her, Percy blurts out that the Chancellor seems absurdly convinced Dud will save the world and even jokes that he is being handed a harem. Realizing what she just said, she spirals into embarrassed self-reproach and blames Dud for making her lose track of herself. Dud reminds her that his wish also included another promised reward, and Percy awkwardly asks what else she owes him. He requests the item from the Vision Warehouse that had been promised to both him and Ellia. With permission for the cannon secured, Dud leaves knowing he now only needs to gather the materials to build it. He reviews the list and notes that the interdimensional key should let him collect everything required. Elsewhere, Ellia walks on believing events are finally proceeding as intended. Then an older man stops Dud and asks his name. When Dud confirms his identity, the stranger's interest sharpens. The man introduces himself warmly and pretends their meeting is a coincidence. He reveals himself as Galdera Riverback, head of the Charity Foundation Purifying House. Dud immediately sees through the facade and recognizes the organization as a money-laundering front. He identifies Galdera as the Purifier, the chapter boss, and the leader of Fury Fire, while Galdera praises Dud's rumored feat of stopping an escaped monster alone. Galdera calls Dud extraordinary and makes it clear he is fascinated by what kind of future such a student might have. He invites Dud to dinner and says he wants a proper conversation, but Dud senses that the encounter itself is already more than enough. Dud realizes the story has shifted, because this man was originally supposed to approach Ellia, not him. As Ellia walks elsewhere under the shadow of the same threat, Dud wonders whether the system now recognizes him as the true main character. A red-haired noble silently rejects what he has just heard. When the black-haired cadet hesitates and tries to delay his answer, the man refuses to leave the matter undecided. He sets the terms himself, ordering the cadet to meet him in 3 days at a place called the Eyes of Twilight. The cadet chases after him in frustration, only to realize the meeting place is a luxury restaurant near the academy. The invitation itself feels so extravagant that it practically blinds him. He gives in because he knows this encounter is too important to avoid. As he weighs the situation, he reminds himself that everything around him keeps collapsing into forced choices. He reviews the people, powers, limits, and dangers already tangled up in this problem. Even after considering every factor, he still cannot fully understand why he has to take Elia's place in all this. He concludes that defeating the Purifier may be possible, but suspects the whole situation may have gone wrong from the beginning. For the moment, he forces himself to stop spiraling and focus on the immediate task ahead. He steels himself, deciding the deeper questions can wait. With that resolve, he knocks on a door. He braces himself as someone approaches from inside. Elnor opens the door, surprised to find him there. He asks to speak with her and tries to keep the conversation casual. When she tells him to go ahead, his nerve almost fails him. He awkwardly asks whether she might be free in 3 days. Before Elnor can react, the student president nearby mistakes the timing for a library matter. The president scolds Elnor for hoarding unread books and returning them late. She even complains that Elnor is about to stick her with the late fees. Elnor ignores the interruption and confirms that he wants to go somewhere with her alone that day. When she asks where, he nervously names the Eyes of Twilight. The president blurts out that the place is famous for dates, and Elnor immediately understands the implication. Pressed to explain himself, he dodges the reason and says he will tell her when they meet. That answer leaves Elnor visibly flustered. As she stands before him in embarrassed silence, she quietly asks the practical question that matters most. Her question pulls him into a memory of another girl calling for him. In that memory, his little sister Ellia is crying and refuses to speak to him. He tries to apologize for teasing her, but she calls him a liar. She is still furious that he once shoved her down a hill as a joke. When he jokes again, she tearfully begs him to stop treating her like a target. He admits that all his roughness came from wanting her to grow strong enough to survive without him, then offers her cookies as peace. She accepts the food only after accusing him of stealing it. While she eats, he talks about how serving a baron might soon let him become an apprentice knight. When she asks what comes after that, he says he will be sent to the battlefield. He dreams aloud about seeing the world and maybe even rising high enough to become a guardian. Ellia mocks the fantasy, but he insists that a person does not have to stay trapped in the place life assigned them. Her bravado breaks when she asks if going to war means he might die. He tries to reassure her with confidence, but she lashes out and says she wishes he would die because he always torments her. Even as she curses him by name, he only smiles at her anger. He answers with a promise that if he ever becomes a guardian, he will always protect her. The memory fades as someone calls Elia's name in the present. Ellia wakes from sleep and wonders what is happening outside her room. The cadet stands there awkwardly and begins with an apology. He admits he was rude before and blames some of it on still being out of place in academy life. He offers her cookies from the kitchen as a peace gesture. Ellia dismisses the apology as uncool and bluntly reminds him that they are already friends. She tries to end the conversation there, but he stops her. He says he urgently needs her help and asks her to come somewhere with him. Ellia immediately suspects he has lost his mind. Elsewhere, a silver-haired woman continues working through academy documents. She pauses, already sensing something troubling beneath the routine. After finishing the teaching material review, she turns to the remaining issue of transfer students. Her assistant reports that only the transfer cases are left unresolved. One incoming student is from the Tribal Alliance, and likely connected to the faction that fell in the recent coup. The silver-haired woman learns the girl is the daughter of a tribal leader, and that her whole family is effectively seeking asylum at the academy. When the assistant names the girl as Lilu Garuda, the woman recognizes the name. She recalls a blue-haired fighter of unusual ability. That memory leaves her uncertain, but not unconcerned. She marks the matter as unfinished in her notes. The assistant adds that a true saintess from the Holy Empire will also arrive next semester. The silver-haired woman is startled that such a figure would come alone. Her assistant says envoys were supposed to accompany the saintess, but suspects the chancellor may have arranged things differently. Hearing that both a saintess and a tribal leader's daughter are being drawn in, the woman's suspicion deepens. She slams her hand down, no longer treating the pattern as coincidence. She concludes that the academy is plotting something behind the scenes. That suspicion hangs over the academy while the night grows darker. Meanwhile, the cadet leads Ellia through the academy and brushes off her unease about sneaking around. The student president questions why anyone would still be rattled by this place after so long. The silver-haired woman offers no real answer. She finally dismisses it as nothing more than a bad mood. Up on the academy's observation deck, the cadet tries to make the setting sound harmless. Ellia is unimpressed and wants to know why he dragged her there at night. He insists the timing is necessary for his plan and tells her to wait. He reveals that he has secretly brought a catapult from the Vision Warehouse to reach a forbidden destination. Using a special access card from the Chancellor, he activates the device despite Elia's alarm. The catapult launches them violently into the sky before she can protest any further. As she panics, he shouts for her to stay focused and keep her eyes open. He keeps yelling at her not to lose concentration. A massive glowing distortion opens ahead of them in the night sky. He reveals that this is the location of the interdimensional portal. He tells Ellia they are about to enter it. His words trigger another memory of her brother telling her to keep looking at him when she was afraid. The memory and the present blur together as danger closes in. They plunge through the portal into a bizarre realm of floating stone and unstable light. From the academy below, the portal appears only as a brief flash in the sky. Inside the realm, Ellia realizes they have little time. The cadet explains that they are now in the interdimensional realm. He warns her not to touch anything because the place itself is dangerous. When he casually leaps between floating rocks, Ellia thinks he has gone insane. He tells her they need to climb higher. When she asks what they are even searching for, he refuses to explain and orders her to keep moving before the rocks drift away. She protests that one wrong step will kill them. He insists they will survive and forces her to trust him. Her footing gives way anyway, and she drops into the void screaming. She realizes too late that she is truly falling. As she tumbles, another memory surfaces of her brother calling her name. In that memory, he finds her in the middle of a burning home and orders her to flee through the back toward the barn. Young Ellia refuses to leave their parents, but her armored brother says he will handle them himself. He warns her that if she sees any descendants of the apocalypse, she must hide immediately. She looks at him and understands he is preparing to stay behind. Through tears, she says she already knows their parents are dead. She begs him not to die too, because he is all she has left. Desperate, she asks him to run away with her instead. He refuses, saying that if he abandons his duty they will both be doomed, and reminds her that before he is her brother, he is a guardian. He orders her to stop thinking, run as far as she can, and wait for him at the hill where he always trained. He demands that she answer him and obey. Terrified, she finally agrees. He sends her off with a final promise that he will follow right behind. The memory snaps back to the present just as the cadet catches her hand in mid-fall. He calmly explains that gravity is distorted here, so she was never dropping as fast as she feared. Still shaking, she is told to calm down and get used to the realm. He points her attention upward and says he has found what they came for. From a floating rock, they stare into the glowing depths above them. Their target is a psychic entity known as the Ghost of Gregory's Pavilion. The cadet thrusts a sack into Elia's hands and tells her to hold it. The sack begins reacting to the entity's strange energy. He says they will need it soon when it is time to escape. When she questions the plan, he tells her to look carefully at the sky around them. At first she sees nothing but the glowing void. Then the emptiness itself seems to open. A monstrous maw suddenly appears around them from the darkness. He identifies it as a beast of the interdimensional realm, and immediately decides they have to leave. The creature lunges with a body so huge it dwarfs the floating islands. Instead of fleeing blindly, he orders Ellia to collect the ectoplasm the beast sheds. She throws herself into the task despite barely understanding it. The sheer amount overwhelms her, but she keeps stuffing the substance into the sack. The beast bears down on them as they continue harvesting from its wake. At the last possible moment, the cadet triggers the card's return effect and drags them back to the academy grounds. He lands exactly where he intended and proudly notes that the timing worked perfectly. He immediately reaches for Ellia to make sure she is safe. Both of them collapse, gasping from the strain. Once she catches her breath, Ellia realizes this entire ordeal was planned from the beginning, including the escape. He cheerfully confirms it and boasts that farming the ghost of Gregory early is easy for someone who knows the game. She demands to know why he hid that they were going into the interdimensional realm, and he admits he thought she would refuse to come. Trying to make up for it, he gives her the filled sack and says he prepared it for her. Ellia thanks him and apologizes for doubting him, and her affection toward him rises sharply. He is left baffled by how suddenly her feelings changed. Even while running onward with her, he cannot understand why the affection increase happened at all. Ellia, however, looks at him with a new and more complicated focus. Later, the blue-haired witch studies the sack and starts to suspect what it contains. The cadet confirms that it is a psychic entity rather than whatever she first imagined. When she asks if he really entered the interdimensional realm, he says yes without hesitation. He reminds her that the Chancellor's card was clearly meant for exactly this kind of trip, though he did not expect to use it so soon. She is distracted by the fact that he came back with his hair fried from being struck by Percy's lightning. He explains that the ectoplasm they gathered is already being delivered and jokes that Percy would panic if she knew what a psychic entity really was. The witch asks whether the amount he brought back is enough, reminding him that he promised another reward if he satisfied her. He says the haul is valuable enough to tempt the magic tower itself, but instead of asking for a gift, he has a specific request. He asks her to use the psychic entity to grant an item, even after she warns that doing so will slowly awaken the consciousness inside it. Dud accepts the Chancellor's offer and is told he made the right choice. Before taking the reward, he stops the process and asks the Chancellor something first. He points out that she has already seen him defeat assassins, overpower a warrior candidate, and hold back monsters, then demands to know why she is helping him grow even stronger. Pressed for a reason, he hesitates instead of revealing the truth he knows about the story ahead. He keeps to himself that demon-level bosses await later and that his ties to Elnor and Ellia make greater power a necessity. After dodging that question internally, he turns the conversation around and asks why she favors him so much. The Chancellor feigns innocence and makes him explain what he means. Dud lays out how suspicious he is, since he knows impossible things for a freshman and has repeatedly produced results no normal student should manage. He stresses that his knowledge and achievements should have made him a target of scrutiny, not special treatment. Even so, he feels the academy itself has started revolving around him in ways too convenient to ignore. He admits it feels as if the Chancellor keeps nudging both his studies and daily life in directions she wants. So he bluntly asks what she intends to demand from him in exchange for all that favor. Rather than answer directly, the Chancellor coolly rebukes his disrespectful tone and reminds him who holds authority here. She acknowledges that he has correctly sensed he is receiving unusual treatment. Then she prepares to reveal her reason. Instead of a serious explanation, she teasingly claims it might simply be because he is cute. Dud is left irritated and unconvinced, but he can only accept that she still agreed to help him with the psychic entity. He refocuses on the practical gain. If he raises synchronization and nurtures the entity, it should become a major asset from the next chapter onward. Before pursuing that future advantage, however, the main quest for Chapter 1 reasserts itself at the Full Moon Festival. A new objective appears, forcing him to resolve the incident at Eyes of Twilight before anything else. At the festival, Dud arrives to find the Student Council president waiting for him. She calmly says she has not been waiting long. Then she reveals she has actually been there for about 6 hours, having prepared far in advance. Dud is stunned by how much effort she put into meeting him and notices how different she looks from the freshman reception. She explains that this is her first time at a place like this in a while, so she came early to get ready. She also confirms that this is her first time going off campus since entering school. Her direct attention leaves Dud flustered enough to realize this outing feels far more like a date than an official event. Before he can sort out his feelings, she takes his hand without hesitation. She leads him forward decisively, intent on getting inside despite the crowd. As they approach Eyes of Twilight, Dud sees the massive line and realizes the place is as packed as expected. He worries they may not even get in, just as the staff starts calling numbers and threatening to cancel absent reservations. Their turn comes up immediately, and they are admitted as number 28. At the entrance, Dud recognizes the blonde part-timer Talion. Talion happily explains he works there because his family gives him no allowance, and he notices the president came with Dud. The president quietly pays attention to that exchange. Talion nervously asks what kind of relationship Dud has with the president if they came together. The question forces Dud to confront again that this really does look like a date. The president cuts through the awkwardness by invoking her authority and securing their entry. Before moving on, Dud suddenly notices Talion is wearing a suspicious necklace. Talion says it came from the Foundation of Purity, the organization run by Marquis Riverback, and Dud immediately recognizes it as dangerous. He orders Talion not to wear it tonight, and tells him to stop the other workers from wearing theirs as well. Talion obeys, while Dud realizes the main story has already shifted because of the affection he has built with Elnor and Ellia. He concludes he now needs to redirect Marquis Riverback's interest toward himself, because a simple dinner and exit are no longer possible. Accepting that the plot has twisted, he follows the president inside. Their arrival draws the attention of Lady Tristan's host. The host is revealed to be Marquis Riverback himself, and Dud immediately understands he has walked into the villain's hands. A quest warns that a villain is trying to win him over just as Riverback politely asks to speak with him alone. The president objects, but Dud allows the separation, sensing he needs to hear Riverback out. Riverback has the president escorted to a VIP room apart from Dud. She reluctantly accepts when told it will only be for a moment. Riverback notes Dud's closeness to Tristan's daughter and leads him onward. Once alone, he begins probing whether Dud understands why he was summoned. Riverback invites Dud to guess the purpose of this private meeting. Dud answers by bluntly naming the Marquis' real agenda instead of playing along. He exposes the plan to exploit the weakened order of the Full Moon Festival, stage a massacre, and harvest bloodshed for demonic power. He continues by detailing the release of monsters, the use of assassins against the knights, and the broader scheme to spread terror. He even identifies the ultimate goal as awakening the demons sleeping in the Tristan bloodline. Then he reminds Riverback that the earlier assassination attempts and monster incidents were also his work. To tighten the noose, Dud reveals he already informed the Chancellor of these plans and asks what Riverback intends to do now. Rather than panic openly, Riverback realizes Dud is far more dangerous and perceptive than he first appeared. He praises Dud's insight, but only as a prelude to his next move. Riverback reveals that his men have already subdued the president, giving him leverage Dud did not anticipate. At that same moment, the president breaks free on her own and turns the tables on her captors. Her sudden resistance shocks everyone, because no one expected Tristan's daughter to be able to fight back like that. She is immediately ordered away from Dud and toward the cultists waiting for her. The cultists corner her, but Dud's warning about her worsening madness resurfaces in her mind. Remembering his advice to release that pressure instead of suppressing it forever, she lets her restraint slip. One of the men taunts her confidence, doubting she can handle them. She answers by embracing that darkness just enough to endure and fight back. The cultists move to capture her alive, still believing they control the situation. One reaches for her head, expecting easy compliance. She cuts him down instantly, proving her madness has become a weapon rather than a weakness. The remaining cultists realize too late that they have unleashed something lethal. Even then, they insist she must not be killed and try to preserve the original plan. She stands over the fallen and forces the rest to confront her directly. The cultists decide to swarm her anyway, accepting injuries as long as they can subdue her. Her gaze sharpens, and she commits fully to the slaughter. She tears through the attackers with overwhelming speed. The madness in her eyes becomes complete focus rather than blind frenzy. One after another, the cultists are cut down before they can react. The survivors are left staring up at a force they can no longer contain. Their desperate counterattacks fail to stop her advance. She closes the distance so completely that their fear becomes visible. With a final sweeping assault, she wipes out the remaining men in the room. Back with Dud, Riverback can only stare in disbelief as his assumptions collapse. The president arrives bloodied but composed, saying she feels refreshed, and a system message confirms her affection has reached friendship, while her madness has improved thanks to Dud. Still treating the night like a ruined social outing, she asks him to go out with her again another time. Before he can process that, another quest appears announcing that Gideon La Tristan has taken an interest in him. Dud pushes aside that new complication and decides to finish the current quest first. Driven into a corner, Riverback finally resorts to consuming demonic essence he had hoped to save for later. Dud is alarmed that such a dangerous trump card has appeared now of all times. The president immediately understands the threat and warns that he must be stopped before he can swallow it. Riverback ignores her and devours the essence, convinced it will grant him divine favor. Outside, the night remains calm for only a heartbeat. Then the building erupts as Riverback's transformation tears through it. The explosion leaves only rubble and a desperate hand reaching from the wreckage. From within the destruction, Riverback exults that this new power is magnificent. He admits he wanted to save this until after dealing with the prophet, but now chooses to test it on Dud instead. The transformed war demon challenges Dud and reveals that consuming demonic essence lets him temporarily wield the demon's power. Seeing a Chapter 1 war demon appear in front of him, Dud bitterly realizes the world keeps escalating against him. The quest updates again, ordering him to subdue the purifier while keeping casualties low. The monster declares that the time for purification has come and prepares to attack. Dud quickly realizes the bigger problem is no longer Riverback alone but the wider chaos his plan has unleashed. He notices that the man-eater cultists Elnor killed earlier have been revived as monsters. Those revived creatures surge toward the area, forcing another front into the battle. At that moment, Teacher Dud Piercing Stab arrives and blasts the monsters away, buying Dud breathing room. Dud is relieved by the reinforcement, even if he cannot help judging the attack name. The president demands an explanation, while Talion finally understands that the monsters are their former comrades and that Riverback was behind everything. Dud confirms that the necklace would have turned Talion into one of those creatures too if he had worn it. Talion accepts the truth and begs Dud to tell him what to do if he wants to avoid a living hell. He then asks what Dud himself plans to do next. Dud says he must handle something else first, because stopping the Marquis and protecting civilians both still matter. He orders Talion to run while the president moves to hold off the revived monsters. When the president asks where Riverback has gone, Dud says he already has a likely answer. He explains that demon worshippers all pursue the same end, spreading chaos and despair. Their sacred destination is the land of demons, Pandemonium. So Dud concludes Riverback will head for the sealed place where evil is confined and try to break through the barrier. At the barrier, the transformed Riverback confirms that even if he cannot destroy it outright, he can still damage it. He gathers a sphere of demonic power in his hand. The energy swells into a destructive attack aimed at the seal. Before he can release it, Dud arrives and orders him to stop. Riverback is startled that Dud found him so quickly, but Dud says his intentions were obvious. He explains that anyone granted authority over evil would naturally head for the place where evil itself is sealed. Dud brings the president with him despite her injuries, though he asks to be put down once they arrive. Riverback welcomes this, deciding he can kill Dud first and seize Tristan's daughter afterward. Dud steels himself as the monster closes in. The president tells him they both have to survive, and her resolve shows how deeply she now trusts him. Though still unaccustomed to that trust, she decides she must answer it with equal resolve. She frames that resolve as the dignity of a Tristan and prepares to fight seriously. Riverback is shaken when she claims that name with such force. She launches herself at him and meets the monster head-on. Her strike sends him reeling through the air. Dud uses the opening to call her toward a better position. Riverback retaliates by hurling another mass of demonic power and vowing they will not escape. The blast tears across the ground, forcing Dud into evasive movement. Riverback is stunned when his attack is interrupted before it can finish them. The president cuts through the opening and drives another attack into him. Her blow sends the massive demon flying back again. Dud sprints through the chaos, trying to turn her offense into a winning sequence. Riverback abandons dignity and screams for Dud to face him directly instead of running. He keeps chasing, enraged that Dud refuses to fight on his terms. The president, now fully focused, decides his tantrum is only a nuisance. Riverback's next attack crashes down and catches both of them in the shockwave. They are thrown across the ground by the impact. Riverback immediately prepares a finishing move called Fangs of Darkness. He dives with the attack, determined to kill Dud this time. The demonic strike descends toward its target. Dud can only watch the blow coming with no time left. At the last instant, a divine shield manifests between him and the attack. The president sees the shield appear and realizes someone else has intervened at the critical moment. Dud is hurled away by a violent burst of demonic power before he can regain control of the fight. The attack slams straight into his chest and overwhelms his already battered body. He is blasted across the battlefield and crashes hard into a wall. The impact leaves him coughing blood and barely conscious on the ground. The demon mocks him for surviving this long and declares that he has exhausted every trick he had. Even so, Elnor steps in front of Dud with a knife, orders him to get up, and resolves to buy him time while the demon praises her stubbornness as Tristan's daughter. The demon sneers that the two of them make a perfectly matched pair in their refusal to give up. Elnor starts to answer from a place deeper than defiance. She admits that all she has ever done is take from Dud, remembering how he once shielded her without hesitation. Elsewhere, two uniformed men face each other in tense silence, hinting at another thread of the conflict. A figure with radiant golden wings prepares to move, as if answering a debt or promise. Back on the ground, Dud forces himself to stay awake, urges Elnor to hurry, and notices his necklace of vitality still bolstering his stamina. Elnor answers his faith with her own, vowing that she will believe in him until the very end as she charges the demon. The demon laughs at their emotional resolve and asks whether their strategy session is finally over. Elnor turns the mockery back on Marquis Riverback and asks whether, in his eyes, she and Dud truly suit each other. She finishes the question with calm, deliberate contempt. The demon is briefly caught off guard by the sudden change in tone. He answers with cruel amusement, saying they fit each other dreadfully well and taunting her about becoming a housewife if she survives. Instead of flinching, Elnor treats the insult as confirmation. She makes her move. A sudden shockwave erupts from the ground near Dud, signaling a hidden action already set in motion. Elnor launches into a blinding aerial assault and drives her blade into the demon. She follows with a storm of slashes that tear across his body before he can properly defend himself. As her red aura flares, she reveals the name Maxima Tramontana and commits fully to the strike. A pillar of force detonates through the demon and sends him reeling. He is smashed downward by the blow. The impact gouges the battlefield and throws debris everywhere. For the first time, the demon is visibly shocked and hurt. He realizes too late that Dud has slipped away from where he expected him to be. The demon snarls that Dud has already fled like a rat, but Elnor instantly rejects that reading. As he surges through the air in pursuit, the demon demands to know what Dud is still hiding. The answer lies among the remains of the battlefield, where another piece of Dud's preparation has been left behind. Nearby, Conrad and the witch observe that their side's battle is effectively over. They acknowledge that Dud and Elnor being present prevented a far more dangerous outcome. The witch admits she came because of what Dud said, while Conrad downplays his own motives but agrees things would have gone badly without them. Watching the moonlit sky, someone reflects that such perfect timing feels less like luck and more like a frightening coincidence. Dud staggers back to his feet, clutching his chest and forcing himself to continue despite the pain. He spots the cylindrical device Talion left behind and realizes it may be the key to turning the battle. Though every movement hurts, he reaches for it anyway. He silently begs Elnor to endure a little longer while he finishes what he started. The demon, still fixated on Elnor, praises her tenacity again as if savoring her resistance before killing her. Dud hears the threat and understands the next moment will decide everything. A dark portal-like rupture opens as the demon turns his attention back to him. The demon attacks without mercy and tells Dud that if he has no plans left, he should die. Elnor freezes in horror as the blow appears to land decisively. For an instant, the scene hangs in stunned silence. Dud recalls the demon's earlier chest core and the black sphere of power that accompanied it. His thoughts race through the chaos as he searches for a way to exploit what he has learned. At that critical moment, Deadly Charm activates. The system begins processing a response from the target, though the message is partly corrupted. A horned female demon-like figure manifests through Elnor's body, revealing the hidden entity connected to her. The world seems to narrow as Dud's perception sharpens around that revelation. His mind races through fragments of memory and instinct, chasing the meaning of what he has just triggered. The demon's monstrous hunger and malice become the perfect bait for the skill's effect. Elnor's face lingers in Dud's mind as the connection between her and the entity becomes undeniable. The entire city feels distant for a heartbeat, while the system rewrites the terms of the fight. A direct threat is identified, and Dud realizes the system is reacting to immediate mortal danger. The horned entity smiles, no longer merely hidden but actively engaged with him. Dud feels himself being judged by the system and by the presence before him. He understands that part of the system has been disabled and that some of his abilities have been stolen through this encounter. The entity confirms his suspicion by revealing that it used Elnor's body as a medium to manifest. Dud recognizes it as a fragment of the white demon, and Deadly Charm continues to react. The system explains that beings with evil traits are easier to influence, and the more extreme their nature, the stronger the effect becomes. That principle takes hold as the entity reaches into Dud's chest and begins altering his fate directly. With unsettling affection, it tells him that it likes him. Dark power pours through him as the contact reshapes his condition instead of simply killing him. Something ignites inside his wound like a brand being stamped into place. Dud receives the mark of the fallen, and the time on his wound begins to rewind. The entity withdraws, watching him with amused interest as the new power settles. Dud finds it disturbing that one of the strongest beings in the world is treating him almost kindly. Still, he decides not to question the opportunity and focuses on taking whatever advantage he can before the future changes. He uses a skill duplication pass on the entity connected to Elnor. The strain is so intense that it feels like his skull might burst under the pressure. Even as his body feels like it is tearing apart, he commits to copying the skill he needs. He reaches through the system interface and forces the duplication to complete. Dud tells himself he needs this power now, and will need it again in the future. The entity accepts his resolve with a pleased smile, and begins to fade away. Before disappearing, it promises they will meet again and leaves him with a final, intimate warning. She makes clear that she will be watching what he becomes. Meanwhile, the demon is still charging in murderous fury, determined to crush Dud. A massive blue eruption tears through the battlefield as Dud's new state fully activates. The demon laughs at first, then abruptly senses that something is wrong. A black, crackling void remains at the center of the blast, marking where Dud vanished from his old position. The demon looks up in confusion, unable to locate him. He finally notices a new presence, and is stunned. What he sees terrifies him enough to silence even his rage. Another pillar of blue force crashes down from above. When the dust clears, Dud stands in the crater transformed by the power he stole. The demon can only ask how such a thing is possible. Dud lands before him with overwhelming pressure and a new, predatory calm. The system confirms the danger is life-threatening, but Dud is no longer the helpless one in this exchange. Desperate survival activates at EX rank, and the newly copied skill Sovereign of Pandemonium comes online. Red demonic energy coils around Dud, and the system grants him a major advantage against hostile demon-type enemies for the next 5 minutes. Elnor and the demon both struggle to accept the reversal, while Dud's transformed gaze makes clear that the balance of power has shifted. Empowered by red and black force, Dud launches himself at the demon. The demon recognizes the power as something tied to the prophet and is shaken by the implication. Before he can finish the thought, Dud's fist crashes into his face and cuts him off. Dud drives him downward in a brutal aerial smash. The impact explodes across the ground in another towering blast. Dud rises from the wreckage and coldly orders the demon to get up for round 2. The demon, now visibly rattled, can only repeat the prophet's title in disbelief. He clutches his chest core and tries to reassert control over his own power. His thoughts spiral as he realizes the prophet never warned him about anything like this. Above them, the night sky remains indifferent, while the battle below turns into something far beyond the demon's expectations. Buried in the crater, the demon groans and struggles to recover. Bloodied and shaken, he falls into a stunned silence as the truth sinks in. Dud's red aura spreads across the battlefield like a declaration that the hunt has reversed. The demon can only ask how this reversal happened at all. He demands to know how Dud can wield the same power as him, only stronger. Dud answers with force instead of words and batters him again. The demon rages that he spent years destroying himself to gain this power, so seeing Dud use it so easily is unbearable. His frustration turns into reckless aggression as he slams down and prepares to amplify himself further. He unleashes black mist to pour out demonic energy, and reinforces himself with blessing of the Tar Soul, hardening his body and defense. Even empowered, he is met by Dud charging straight at him without hesitation. Dud dives through the demon's counterattack and closes the distance before the boost can save him. Their collision detonates in a violent clash of red and blue force. Dud seizes the demon by the face and overwhelms him at point-blank range. The struggle erupts into another shockwave that tears up the ground around them. Dud keeps pressing forward, refusing to let the demon recover even for a second. The demon spits out Dud's name with pure hatred as he is driven back. In desperation, he lunges for a killing blow and screams for Dud to die. A radiant golden barrier shaped like wings suddenly intercepts the attack and protects Dud. The demon recognizes the holy power at once and realizes Dud is wielding divinity as well. He demands to know how Dud can possibly command divine power on top of demonic strength. Dud answers by smashing him again before the question can matter. He drives a devastating strike into the demon's torso and sends him flying. The demon is hurled across the ruined cityscape as Dud's assault continues to escalate. The demon's disbelief deepens as his body begins to fail under the barrage. Dud follows through with another crushing blow. The demon is left suspended and helpless while Dud closes in for the finish. For the first time, the demon looks less enraged than afraid. At the worst possible moment for Dud, the copied skill's 5-minute duration expires. A beam from Talion's abandoned device activates elsewhere in the ruins, answering Dud's earlier preparation. The demon is confused, but Dud calmly reveals he kept the remote instead of returning it and triggers the trap. The device launches upward into position. The demon realizes too late that Dud has one last move ready and vows to tear him apart. The cannon-like mechanism aligns with the demon's exposed chest core. The demon finally understands the target and panics. Dud calls his last words pathetic and fires at point-blank range. The blast strikes true, and the demon can only stare in shock. A massive golden beam engulfs him completely. As he burns away, the demon wonders whether Dud had predicted every step of this from the start. His final thought is the terrifying possibility that Dud planned the entire outcome from the very beginning. With the demon destroyed, the system announces completion of the main quest and rewards Dud with demonic essence, a hero fragment, and points. Dud is stunned by how much he has gained from surviving the ordeal. He reasons that the harsher difficulty may be producing better rewards, even though such choices normally force a trade-off. More importantly, he realizes he has acquired 2 new factors that could disrupt the original course of events. His thoughts return to Elnor, but before he can move, he is informed that the Student Council president is safe. A blue-haired woman with an eyepiece approaches, identifies him as Student Dud, and demands an explanation for everything that happened, especially the Grand Demon. Dud tries to play ignorant, but she makes clear she already knows enough to press him for the truth. Under a tense night sky, the Chancellor confronts Dud with the fact that he has become entangled with a demon. Elsewhere, Elnor lies critically injured as attendants scramble to prepare a blood transfusion and keep her alive. Her condition worsens fast, with her vital signs dropping to a dangerous level. The extent of Elnor's injuries makes it clear she is hovering near death despite emergency treatment. As she barely clings to consciousness, someone desperately wonders why the priest needed to save her still has not arrived. The Chancellor explains to Dud that the Grey Demon's defining power is corruption. Because that corruption spread across the area around him, she warns that both the Inquisition and the Holy Empire will now focus on him. She bluntly tells him he has become the center of a much larger crisis. Dud admits he acted knowing his life could no longer remain that of a harmless background figure. He also acknowledges that he has already formed a direct connection with the demon. Even so, he insists his survival against the Grey Demon was less strategy than sheer luck. The memory of the demon's vessel lingers, reminding him how close he came to disaster. The Chancellor reveals that the Grey Demon is believed to have chosen Student Council President Elnor as its vessel. When Dud reacts sharply, she apologizes for aggravating his injuries but continues. She first thanks him for fighting to protect both the Academy and Elnor. Then she warns him that what follows must remain secret and forces him to listen carefully. Dud braces himself, already sensing the conversation is about to become absurdly troublesome. The Chancellor explains that after the last warrior scattered the demon's fragments, one fragment manifested in their world. She adds that the remaining fragments will eventually converge around the human at the center of that manifestation. Since the Grey Demon briefly awakened the day before, she says the gathering of those fragments will begin soon. What she means, she clarifies, is that the vessels of the other demons will start appearing, just as they did in the original story's calamities. One example is the Crimson Demon's Red Night incident, a catastrophe large enough to drag entire families into ruin. Because some demon fragments choose hosts unpredictably, the exact vessel changes from one version of events to another, though key story beats remain fixed. The Holy Empire has already used its intelligence network to identify likely vessel candidates, and Elnor is among them. The Chancellor admits she has been trying to gather all such dangerous candidates at the Academy herself. Dud recognizes the brilliance of that plan but also sees how reckless it is to concentrate so many threats in one place. The Chancellor introduces a single hopeful exception to the cycle of destruction: true love. She recounts a past case in which a demon's vessel fell in love and the demon fragment was completely eradicated. In that rare case, love itself destroyed the seed of catastrophe. Dud immediately dismisses the anecdote as a familiar trope that has nothing to do with him. The Chancellor then drops the real point: the Grey Demon seems to have taken a liking to Dud. When he denies it in panic, she reminds him that the demon healed his wounds and openly favored him. Whatever the reason for that affection, she says, that fact is what matters most. The implication hangs over them as the possibility of using that affection as a weapon takes shape. She praises Dud's judgment and ability, saying the demon's unusual interest in him proves he is uniquely suited for what she needs. With complete seriousness, she makes a formal request. Her request is that Dud seduce the demon's vessels. Dud explodes in disbelief, but the Chancellor calmly offers to help him court them if that is what it takes. To make the proposal sound easier, she notes that every confirmed vessel candidate so far is female. She mentally lines up the women who may become those vessels, turning Dud's problem into a looming roster of future disasters. The list of likely candidates only makes the assignment feel more impossible. The Chancellor insists this is a blessing, reasoning that if the Grey Demon approves of him, he should be able to win over the others as well. Dud answers with bitter honesty that if seducing women were that easy for him, he would not be this hopeless to begin with. Unmoved, she tells him to use any means necessary to charm them, destroy the fragments, and save the world. He points out the contradiction that true love cannot be mass-produced, and that demon vessels and their followers would be far harder to handle than ordinary enemies. Even accepting all of that, the Chancellor says she still has to ask this of him. She bows deeply and entrusts mankind's survival to him, while Dud internally wishes he could simply quit everything. Trying to regain control of the conversation, he asks what happens if he fails. The Chancellor answers as if repeating an already established certainty. If he fails, humanity will be annihilated and the world will fall under a demonic empire. Faced with that nightmare, and the smiling memory of the Grey Demon, Dud can only curse the cruel design of the game itself. The scene shifts as Elnor's recovery begins in a quiet hospital room. Her eyes finally stir open after days on the edge of death. She slowly pushes herself upright, returning to consciousness at last. Disoriented, Elnor asks where she is. A familiar attendant protests as someone barges in, only to reveal that Dud had been visiting even while skipping class. The attendant is stunned to discover Elnor has already awakened. Elnor's first reaction is amused disbelief that Dud skipped class just to come see her. The attendant rushes to her bedside in a panic, scolding her for making everyone worry so much. Overwhelmed with relief, she breaks down and admits she thought Elnor had died. The memory of Dud's battered state flashes through the room, showing how desperate the battle had been. Once the attendant calms slightly, Elnor immediately asks what happened to Dud. The answer shocks her. He has already been discharged. The attendant explains that Dud was not badly hurt, at least compared to Elnor. Elnor struggles to reconcile that with the claim that she herself had been so gravely injured she nearly died. The attendant is equally confused that Dud walked away while Elnor remained unconscious for days. The image of Elnor on life support underscores how unnatural that difference feels. The attendant admits Elnor has remained in that state for 2 full days and fears what it would mean if she never woke again. She even confesses that if Elnor had died, she would have held Dud responsible and killed him herself. Dud's earlier promise is recalled. Elnor is not meant to die here, and he guarantees she will recover because he survived too. He had reasoned that the Tristan family would never let Elnor throw away her life to protect someone like him. Now that Elnor is awake, the attendant immediately shifts into work mode and says there are urgent matters to review. Elnor protests that she is still a patient, but the attendant says 2 people have recently caused enough trouble that she must hear about them. She presents the relevant documents for Elnor to examine. The first name is Sanctus Lucian, a major figure from the Holy Empire. Elnor recalls Lucian was supposed to enroll next semester, only to learn that her arrival has been moved up to next week. The attendant believes the Holy Empire and the Inquisition accelerated that decision because of the recent demon incident. When Elnor asks about the second troublesome person, the attendant delays the answer for dramatic effect. A vision of a swordsman standing against monstrous darkness hints at the danger tied to that second arrival. The attendant reveals it is Sir Gideon who will be coming to the academy. At the mention of her father, Elnor goes still. The story briefly widens to the city beyond the academy, where larger powers are already moving. Those movements are closing in on the school from every side. In another place, a blonde saintess asks for a window to be shut because the bright city outside disturbs her. She admits that light itself feels unpleasant to her. A blonde young man mocks the remark, asking whether saintesses of this era all find light uncomfortable. She answers that anyone raised in darkness would feel the same. The young man tries to lighten the mood, but his smile only sharpens the tension. The saintess repeats her request to close the window, refusing to indulge him. Instead of obeying, he tells his aide to leave it open because he wants to savor this peace a little longer. She questions how he can call this peace when a demon worshipper and a saintess are sharing the same room. He notes with amusement that she seems less openly hostile than when they first met. She rejects the idea of friendship and says they are only cooperating toward a shared goal. He asks whether such clean separation is really possible, and she reluctantly admits perhaps only a little. The saintess reflects that whether she is bound by human masters or by fate itself, the feeling of captivity is much the same. Surrounded by the shadows of demons, she sees little difference between the forces controlling her life. Even so, she resolves that at the very least she still has someone she must protect. That resolve centers on a black-haired girl carrying fruit, someone precious enough to anchor her choices. Back at the academy, Dud receives a letter from his father as summer approaches. The letter urges him to stay healthy, enjoy the fruit that was sent, and remember the upcoming parent observation event. It also explains that the family cannot attend because of harvest season and will send Herman in their place. A nearby classmate listens as the contents are read. The letter reassures Dud that things are peaceful at home and asks him only to survive respectably rather than stand out. Outside, training students rush past as academy life resumes. The letter continues with practical concern, trusting Dud's brains more than his judgment. It warns him not to cause trouble and to keep his head down. Then it veers into embarrassing parental pressure, telling him to bring home a girlfriend and produce grandchildren soon. The letter closes with forced dignity and a signature from his overly affectionate father, Armand Campbell. Dud is thrilled above all that his father will not be visiting in person. He then turns to the substitute attendant and asks whether Herman is some kind of trainee servant. Herman cheerfully confirms it, and immediately gives off the impression that he will be uselessly relaxed on the job. To be helpful, Herman presents the grapes Dud's father sent. Dud eats them and is briefly pleased to discover they are seedless. That small comfort is ruined when other students mock him for having a butler at school and acting above his station. Rather than argue, Dud decides Herman should pose as a friend instead of a servant, and makes him share the grapes. Herman finds the arrangement exhausting, while Dud realizes he may need endless training just to make the act believable. But Dud has no patience for that problem because the Chancellor's request is still haunting him. Her command to seduce every demon vessel and save mankind keeps replaying in his head. At the same time, new quest notices appear. Elnor has endured the first stage of the curse, and Gideon Tristan has entered the story with dangerous significance. Dud decides that, for the moment, the immediate threat is not world peace but the chain of upcoming quests now accelerating around him. He identifies Chapter 2's boss stage as the real crisis, made worse because he never properly encountered Gideon in the original story. Remembering that Gideon originally appeared only as a corpse, Dud realizes the current timeline has already diverged badly. He also remembers that Gideon and his daughter were estranged, which makes the situation even harder to predict. Yet Gideon's death still mattered to Elnor, because no matter their relationship, he remained her father. Dud recalls the original trigger for the Grey Demon's awakening, Gideon's death. Since Elnor already awakened part of that power during the first boss stage, he realizes the story is now dangerously unstable. The fact that Gideon is alive means the future can now change in ways Dud no longer controls. Elnor, meanwhile, resolves that she must meet her father herself. Dud knows he should avoid Gideon, but concludes he may need information from him if they ever cross paths. That thought is interrupted when Talion grabs Herman, jolting Dud back to the present. Talion had mistaken Herman for someone bullying Dud, then immediately declares that a lazy person like Dud could never be the victim in such a scene. To make amends in his own bizarre way, Talion offers Dud his sword for the day because he interfered with Dud's servant. He kneels dramatically and begs to serve Dud, only for Dud to refuse the absurd devotion and promise to return the weapon. Watching this, someone finds the situation unexpectedly interesting. That observer is Elnor, who questions why Dud wants sword training when he should have transferred into the divinity department. Dud explains that the recent demon attack taught him someone must be able to close distance and fight in close combat, so he wants to learn even the basics of Tristan's swordsmanship. Elnor privately notes that the villain's attention and the cursed gift will keep tying her fate to Dud's, and for once their interests align. She draws her blade and agrees that, as a senior responding to a formal request, she may help him. Dud immediately decides to use this chance to copy the Tristan family's sword skills, knowing such techniques may be vital against Gideon. Their private lesson draws attention, and one classmate remarks on the rare sight of the overworked student council president taking a break. Another quickly realizes this is not a break at all but a personal lesson Dud specifically requested. When someone points out that Elnor is a one-handed combat specialist while Dud fights with both hands, he insists the distinction does not matter. Elnor cuts in coldly, saying the weapon matters less than the teacher, making clear she intends to dominate the lesson. An orange-haired woman steps in and argues that as a former assistant teacher, she would be the better instructor. Eleanor's mood darkens instantly as the challenge becomes personal. She interprets the interruption as a claim that she is inferior with a sword and bristles at being treated like a lesser senior. The orange-haired challenger calmly says she is only pointing out the gaps in Tristan's swordsmanship and offers to explain them. Dud tries to keep the peace by asking for that explanation, provided no one turns the lesson into violence against him. Instead, the two women square off in a duel that everyone at the academy has clearly been waiting to see. The challenger sets the terms at once. No Tristan family powers, only pure swordsmanship, and Elnor must accept if she wants to prove herself. A silver-haired officer coolly dares her opponent to try forcing her hand. Watching from the sidelines, Dud realizes his supposed instructors are fighting over him, while his friend jokes that he has become the prize. Taking that as reason enough, the orange-haired warrior candidate launches a brutal overhead strike at the officer. She turns the attack into a lesson, declaring that Dud is about to be taught properly. Without panic, the officer points out the flaw in the girl's swordsmanship. Every motion is too large and wasteful. She slips under the descending blade with minimal movement, showing how little effort real control requires. The attacker immediately realizes she is facing someone far sharper than expected. The officer punishes the opening with a precise counter that knocks the girl off balance. She tightens her grip and shifts from passive defense to a serious demonstration. A storm of rapid purple slashes crashes down, forcing the warrior candidate to defend as Dud is stunned by the officer's speed. Even while blocking, the girl admits the officer's blows are fast and carry real force. As the pressure mounts, Dud internally challenges Ellia, wondering if she is really going to lose to someone he now sees as a demon. That taunt catches the officer's attention and sharpens her focus. She bursts through the girl's guard with another vicious strike. Dud's thoughts turn darker as he remembers the accusation that Eleanor's bloodline belongs to demons. He recalls the warning that noble status would not save her from that fate. The memory continues with the prophecy that the demon within her will eventually consume her. He sees again the image of a burning world and the inevitability of that doom. In the vision, Elnor stands frozen before the destruction, unable to deny it. The cruelest part of the memory returns. Everyone around her was supposedly only fuel for the demon. That thought jolts Dud into action as he digs in and prepares to interfere. At the same time, Elia's emotions flare and fire begins spilling from her power. She unleashes Guardian Strike, sending a blazing attack straight at the officer. The blast tears across the arena so violently that even the spectators are thrown into alarm. Dud can only stare, baffled by how suddenly the duel has escalated. The officer reads the situation at once and concludes that what Ellia cannot control is not her strength, but her feelings. She moves in front of Dud and shields him from the outbursts while calmly naming the real problem. His emotions are driving this. The fire splits around them, leaving Dud protected behind the officer's intervention. Ellia snaps back to herself and apologizes in horror at what she nearly did. Her panicked blast still sends one bystander flying. Dud realizes Elia's reaction speed and raw power have risen far beyond what a normal human should manage. The officer stands amid the flames, now openly suspicious of what is happening to Elnor. From above, she asks whether Elnor has already begun fusing with the peace, while Ellia breaks down and begs forgiveness for going too far. The officer acknowledges Elia's talent but says her real training should begin with mastering herself, not her sword. She bluntly reminds Ellia that losing control put her own friends in danger. Humbled, Ellia accepts the rebuke, only to realize Dud has vanished. The scene shifts away from the arena to a quiet forest, following Dud's next move. Hidden behind a mask, Dud decides Eleanor's condition is too urgent for him to keep wasting time. He resolves to grow stronger as fast as possible, deciding that swordsmanship alone will never be enough for survival. He concludes he must train holy energy as well, even if that means stepping outside the path of a pure swordsman. He approaches a secluded girl and gently asks how she has been. The masked Dud tells the black-haired girl that she at least looks healthy. She turns in shock, startled by the sudden appearance of a stranger who somehow speaks to her familiarly. Dud identifies her as Yuria Greyhouncher, the Saintess's younger sister, and silently asks her to help him now. Yuria's mind flashes to a nightmare of monstrous death and terror. She remembers a cruel lesson that if she still clung to hope, it would only betray her. That memory deepens into a vision of corpses and the warning that hoping for rescue or friendship would only lead to more pain. In the present, Yuria remains tense and guarded, as if still trapped inside that fear. The voice in her memory insists that reaching toward others will only wound her further. She recalls being taught that hope itself is merely the first step toward despair. The lesson demanded surrender, not resistance. The cruelty became personal when the speaker compared her fate to her sister's. That memory includes blood running down her face, sealing the trauma into her body. The scene of chains and blood returns like a prison she cannot escape. Yuria remembers herself collapsing under that torment. The man who broke her reduced her to a cursed amulet, and declared that isolation was the only way to protect others. He made that loneliness sound like her sacred duty. The memory still grips her so strongly that even now her eyes widen in panic. Back in the present, she clings to Dud in fear, overwhelmed by the resurfacing trauma. She lies in a dim room afterward, still shaken and unable to process what just happened. A simple apple on a branch becomes the first sign of a gentler routine entering her life. Someone bites into the fruit nearby with easy familiarity. A basket full of apples shows that the visits are not a one-time gesture. Yuria looks back, beginning to connect this quiet presence with safety rather than threat. Dud keeps returning to her hidden place, greeting her and checking on her condition as if this has already become a habit. His persistence leaves her visibly confused, because kindness is harder for her to understand than cruelty. When her fear lashes out, she attacks with chained blades rather than words. One of those chained swords drops straight toward Dud. He calmly knocks the weapon aside instead of retaliating. Yuria cannot understand why he would step into her range so deliberately, knowing she is dangerous. She is even more unsettled because he should have known she might hurt him. She whirls her chains around herself in a desperate attempt to keep him away. Dud is forced backward by the sudden violence, yet he still begs her to stop. Yuria warns him to retreat because she truly believes she may injure him if he stays close. Rather than flee, Dud keeps moving around her attacks, refusing to abandon her. He narrowly avoids another sweeping chain and keeps pressing in. Even he feels the danger, but he chooses to endure it. Her chained weapons continue carving through the air in a frantic barrier. Then Yuria suddenly plants herself, deciding to stop running from the encounter. Dud stumbles from the pressure, and she notices that he is still in good enough shape to keep fighting through her assault. When he gets close again, she hesitates instead of striking immediately. The sight of the food he brought reminds her that he promised to keep returning with supplies. Dud gently asks whether she truly does not remember him and explains that he brought enough food to last several days. Still wrapped in chains, Yuria approaches the bag he left and asks him a more personal question. Does he not get lonely living apart from everyone? Dud admits that he keeps visiting her like this on purpose. She is startled by the possibility that his visits might be for her sake rather than duty. But the old words about understanding loneliness and despair still echo inside her. The abuser's command to accept isolation keeps fighting against Dud's presence in her mind. Even so, Dud simply tells her to enjoy the food and promises he will come again soon. His kindness directly contradicts the old warning that rescue and friendship only bring pain. Left alone with the food, Yuria hears the memory insist once more that attachment will only hurt her. Yet when she looks at what he brought, she can no longer dismiss his sincerity. She reaches out and takes the bread he left for her. Nearby, the chained sword that once threatened him now lies still. Holding the loaf with both hands, she treats it like something precious. As she stares at it, the thought that closeness only hurts begins to crack. Tears finally come as she silently begs herself not to be hurt again. Elsewhere, Dud receives a system notice that Yuria's interest in him has risen sharply, unlocking a reward. He decides to accept the result and checks the reward while Herman sleeps beside him. The new skill boosts reaction speed and precision, and Dud immediately sees how useful it will be, though he also grumbles at Herman's carelessness. On the day of the observation class, Dud reviews another reward tied to Tristan's swordsmanship and reminds himself that today's public event is why he and Yuria trained so hard. Herman finally wakes, and Dud rushes him because they are already close to being late. As he gets ready, Dud fixes his attention on one goal, catching Gideon Gale's Tadlaw Tristan's eye. Crowds gather at the academy for the major event. Among the guests, an old noble declines help from his armored escort, preferring to walk and take in the countryside atmosphere. The spectators gossip that even the Holy Empire has come to attend this year's class. Others care less about politics and more about whether their own children will seize the chance to stand out in the battle royale. The academy formally welcomes the assembled nobles, parents, and guests to the observation class. As the battle royale is announced, murmurs spread through the crowd when someone important is spotted. The silver-haired man in red is recognized as someone who appears only in wartime, making his presence here deeply unsettling. People whisper that he is the student council president's father, and that he did not even bother attending the opening ceremony. His reputation as a cold-blooded swordsman keeps everyone at a distance. He silently surveys the arena with sharp red eyes. A green-haired acquaintance greets him as Gideon and jokes about finding him at a school event, but Gideon answers with little warmth. The other man, Valtador, explains that he is only taking a break from training and asks what brought Gideon here. Valtador says he is following old records that tell him to make the mountains his own, a cryptic path to greater strength. When pressed on his progress, he answers matter-of-factly that he has already cut down a mountain. A microphone call interrupts the conversation and redirects attention to the arena. The announcer explains that the battle royale is about to begin and that staff will supervise for safety. Valtador urges Gideon to watch closely because this year's freshmen seem unusually strong. The rules are laid out. Everyone will receive wooden weapons and may now enter. As students step forward under their families' cheers, Dud's nerves spike. He wonders if the original version of himself felt this same dread, then curses himself for ever deciding he needed Gideon's attention. One blonde student eagerly imagines a final showdown with Dud and sees Elia's absence as his chance to shine. Other competitors prepare themselves as the signal to take weapons is given. Ellia spots Dud among the entrants and cannot understand why he chose to participate. While others speculate that Dud may be toying with weaker students or acting out some noble ideal, the countdown to begin continues. A hooded girl in purple quietly reaches for a weapon of her own. She takes hold of a ring-handled blade, preparing to enter the chaos. The announcer confirms that all participants are in place and reminds them of the single objective. Only the last person standing wins, though special points will also go to the top 10. Herman begs Dud to at least survive into the top 10, while Dud searches the stands for Gideon and silently demands to be noticed. Ellia reassures herself that Dud will be fine because she is watching, and the hooded girl privately vows to intervene if necessary. The competitors are told to acknowledge one another just before the start. Above them, the silver-haired officer watches over the event with calm authority. Gideon also turns his attention fully to the field. The announcer raises the final signal. The match begins. The arena erupts instantly into chaos as magic, swordplay, and ambushes explode across the field, with Dud and Yuria both moving through the melee. The hooded Yuria tears through multiple opponents at once, proving she entered not to hide, but to dominate. The blonde boy charges Dud directly, swearing he will not hold back this time. He complains that Dud always ends up as his target, even in the middle of a free-for-all. Dud meets the attack head-on and cleanly deflects it. Watching from above, Gideon finally acknowledges Dud's technique and identifies it as a true parry. Dud follows through with practiced control, batting away surrounding attacks as if the new skill has already settled into his body. Gideon falls silent, now genuinely interested. Before Dud can capitalize, a warning flashes through his system as someone excitedly rushes toward the promising duel. The hooded Yuria crashes into the fight with overwhelming force, smashing Dud aside and scattering the others. As Dud lies stunned, he recognizes the intruder and blurts out her name in disbelief. Yuria, eyes blazing beneath her hood, demands to know what he thinks he is doing and challenges him to face her directly. Dud is jolted when a terrifying new fighter appears, and he recognizes the name Lilu Garuda with alarm. He realizes this is the daughter of the tribal association's war chief, someone who should not have entered the story this early. Talion, already overwhelmed, can barely process the danger now standing before them. The onlookers immediately sense that this newcomer changes everything, and the tension spikes. Lilu steps in eagerly, making it clear that if no one else will fight, she gladly will. Dud identifies her power as tribal arts, the body-enhancing technique used by the tribal association. He quickly judges that even his emergency options may not be enough, because Lilu should now be stronger than Elnor. Talion, ashamed of his weakness, thanks Dud for saving him, while Lilu is baffled that Dud protected the very opponent he had been facing. As he catches his breath, Dud wonders why Lilu is even participating and concludes this must be before the public knew her. He promises Talion that he will secure first place for him and orders him to run the moment he gets a chance. Talion tries to shield Dud, but Lilu dismisses him as merely the second-place rookie and decides to stop holding back. She opens the exchange by driving a brutal strike into Talion's chest. Dud activates Focus of the Swordsman, sharpening his reactions and precision to survive what comes next. Lilu grins at the challenge and warns him not to die too quickly. Her next blow lands with crushing force despite his attempt to defend. Talion is left stunned by how easily she broke through him. Dud retaliates with a sweeping counter that blasts through the arena and knocks multiple fighters aside. The shockwave clears the field around him, instantly dropping several remaining participants. Talion can only stare in disbelief at the scale of Dud's attack. Lilu, thrilled rather than intimidated, realizes that even after parrying, the force of his strike still reached her. The spectators are astonished that a freshman could devastate the battlefield like this, and Lilu finally takes him seriously. She admits she underestimated him and asks if he had been holding back as well. Dud answers by deciding he can no longer afford restraint either. Even so, he privately concludes that defeating her at full strength with his current abilities is impossible. When Lilu attacks again, he meets her head-on and confirms his own grim assessment. She follows with a savage barrage, delighted by the violence. Dud endures the assault, blocking desperately as the pressure mounts. Realizing any wasted motion could get him killed, he chooses the only practical option left. To everyone's shock, Dud abruptly forfeits the match. Lilu is left staring as the officials confirm that he truly intends to withdraw. The crowd jeers at his retreat, but Elnor immediately recognizes it as the smart decision. Dud ignores the boos, mocks the spectators, and leaves with his pride intact because none of them could have survived Lilu anyway. The announcer tries to declare a winner, then realizes the event is still not settled and keeps the competition moving. Lilu fumes because the fight ended just as she was starting to enjoy it. Her frustration turns into open rage at the Imperial student who denied her a proper battle. Dud retreats satisfied, and even the system notes that this clash has created a dangerously volatile bond between them. The moment he relaxes, someone drops a cloth over his head and seizes him. He is hauled into a formal room and confronted by a man who addresses him by name. Before Dud can prepare himself, the man demands to know what relationship he has with his daughter. Dud awkwardly insists they are only friends, and that she has merely helped him at school. The man cuts past that, and asks whether Dud learned swordsmanship from her. Trying to stay calm, Dud denies it, and the man presses further by naming the Tristan family's sword techniques. Dud instantly realizes he is facing Archduke Gideon, who has already seen through part of him. Gideon points out that Dud used the basic Tristan parry, something he would recognize immediately. He demands to know exactly who taught Dud that technique. Dud steels himself, knowing that showing fear in front of Gideon would be fatal. He understands that the man before him is the Blade incarnate, a monster whose strength is beyond estimation. So he offers a careful half-truth, saying the source is someone Gideon also knows well. He names the Sword Emperor as the one who appears in unlikely places, even at a rural baron's estate. Gideon immediately calls the claim a lie but allows Dud to continue speaking. Dud decides to bury a small lie under a larger one and claims the Sword Emperor personally asked him for a favor. When Gideon questions why such a figure would ask anything of him, Dud says it was more like a task. He repeats the exact promise that Archduke Tristan would teach him the way of the sword. Gideon confirms those words match what his master once said, which makes Dud's story harder to dismiss outright. Still suspicious, Gideon asks whether Dud is prepared to take responsibility for invoking them. With no better option, Dud accepts the burden. Gideon gives a simple acknowledgement, leaving Dud to panic internally about what that responsibility could even mean. Dud keeps his face steady while inwardly realizing he is improvising far beyond his understanding. He reminds himself that he has never actually met Gideon before, and is surviving only on story knowledge. That makes this encounter even more dangerous, because he is facing Elnor's father without any real sense of his limits. Dud realizes Gideon is testing every word he says. He also admits that from Gideon's perspective, he must look completely insane, which is not an unreasonable conclusion. The silence grows unbearable until Gideon suddenly raises a finger instead of his sword. He asks why Dud is not even trying to block, as if the next strike is already decided. Dud is caught off guard by the question. Gideon answers it himself by declaring that Dud is already dead. In the next instant, the furniture and teacups around Dud are sliced apart before he can even react. Dud recognizes the attack as Shapeless Blade, a sword art that cuts without a visible weapon. He freezes as the severed tea splashes past him, realizing how close he came to dying. What terrifies him most is that Gideon used a pinnacle knight's skill as casually as breathing. The invisible pressure continues to pass around him, proving Gideon could kill him at any moment. Dud bluntly judges the technique incomplete, calling it useless in its current state. Gideon's killing intent sharpens as he asks what Dud thinks he could possibly learn from someone who cannot even react properly. Dud recalls the original account of Gideon's greatest sword skill, one powerful enough to pierce dragon hide, and remembers that even it was described as unfinished. Using that knowledge, he tells Gideon that a truly complete version would not require movement at all. For the first time, Gideon is visibly shaken and asks whether Dud understands what he is saying. Dud answers that he does, because in the original story Gideon left behind a journal detailing how he grew stronger. That journal recorded his training, his family history, and the teachings of his master. Gideon then probes deeper, asking whether Dud also knows the goal he seeks to achieve. Dud answers that Gideon wants to end his family's curse by mastering something essential. He recalls the moment Gideon once knelt before his hooded master to ask for that path. The master had told Gideon that he would be better off learning to cut the seas. Young Gideon accepted that impossible challenge without hesitation. He began from the principle that rotational motion was the key. He was taught that once the image of the target became clear, he had to draw a perfect line through it. Dud repeats the next lesson as well, saying greater rotational force is needed. In truth, he barely understands the theory, and is simply reciting Gideon's own future notes back to him. He is gambling everything on advice Gideon once wrote for himself. Now the rest depends on whether Gideon can recognize the truth hidden inside those stolen words. Gideon's composure finally cracks as the room itself begins to split under the pressure of his awakening insight. A burst of golden light floods the chamber as his understanding surges forward. The revelation shines in Gideon's eyes, confirming that Dud has touched something real. Faced with someone who knows his deepest path, Gideon can only ask what Dud truly is. Dud dodges the question and claims he is simply someone who wants Gideon to become stronger. His real motive is to keep Gideon alive and prevent Elnor from falling into corruption. Later, Dud secures a document called the Seal of Immunity, a pass that can shield him from punishment. More importantly, it gives him a way to force Gideon, now the Empire's executioner, to intervene on his behalf if needed. He reflects that Gideon is used by the Imperial family to handle their dirtiest work in the shadows. Even so, the seal is worth it, and his sinister affinity gift grows stronger from the attention he keeps drawing from dangerous people. Another reward arrives as he receives guidance from Gideon while his roommate sleeps through everything. The new ability lets Dud temporarily copy any skill a villain unlocks, which he immediately recognizes as perfect for his plans. He looks over the room and the sword nearby and decides the timing could not be better. After thinking it through, he begins preparing his next move. He closes the book and wonders whether what he has gathered will be enough for the coming crisis. He knows the next step will be difficult, but Gideon's promise to take responsibility gives him confidence to proceed. His thoughts turn to the Tristan family, the people Gideon is determined to protect. That resolve to protect them becomes the emotional core of Dud's gamble. Soon after, a lecture on holy energy explains that all living beings possess a divine force distinct from magic. The class continues with the claim that proper manifestation of holy energy requires training. The professor is irritated by the half-empty room and blames River Back for the academy's unrest. Privately, he thinks monsters or zombies would have been manageable, but demon worship inside the school is a disaster. Other students complain about the unruly freshmen, showing how tense the academy has become. The professor reassures himself that no one knows he has been colluding with Riverback and plans to quit before the truth reaches him. Dud suddenly asks how one is supposed to train holy energy, and the question rattles the professor. A nun dismisses the question as obvious, but Dud notes that questions themselves matter, and the class ends in frustration. Afterward, the professor curses Dud and decides to flee the Empire with confidential documents. He convinces himself that abandoning the school and everyone in it is the perfect escape. Before he can leave, someone pounds at the door calling for him. Annoyed, he goes to answer, expecting one last nuisance before his departure. Instead, the door explodes inward and he is kicked violently across the room. He screams in outrage that a professor has been attacked. The attacker is Eliza, who coldly clarifies that she only kicked down the door and that now it is his turn. Dazed and bleeding, the professor struggles to understand what is happening. Dud and Eliza confront him directly, and he realizes this is no prank. Eliza formally places him under arrest while Dud stands behind her with evidence in hand. When he demands an explanation, Dud bluntly tells him he is a spy. A hooded witness confirms that the professor aided the recent demonic monster incident, and that the matter has already been reported upward. Eliza adds that a true Imperial professor would never have abandoned a student to die, proving he never intended to teach properly at all. Dud then reveals there is still more against him. He cites a letter found in Marquis Riverback's home linking the professor to him, but the man desperately claims he was only welcoming Riverback into the community, and is a victim too. Dud cuts off the excuses and demands the truth before time runs out. He orders the professor to name the spies hidden inside the academy. The professor spits back a vulgar refusal, even dragging Eliza's mother into the insult. Eliza answers with immediate violence, inviting him to keep talking if he dares. Under pressure, the professor starts giving names, beginning with the nutritionist. Dud abruptly places a glowing hand on him, claiming he is healing him with holy energy. The professor is horrified and demands to know what Dud is doing. Dud calmly explains that he is practicing holy energy whenever he gets the chance, just as the class had suggested. As the professor panics, Dud remarks that a few names alone will not be enough. Eliza orders a search of the professor's desk for anything more substantial. Desperate, the professor unleashes demonic power and tears free of his restraints to stop them. Dud finds military strategy documents in the desk and mockingly wonders why a holy energy professor would need Imperial war plans. The professor lunges to snatch the papers back, exposing himself completely. Eliza intercepts him with a brutal slash before he can reach Dud. The strike tears across his face and leaves him reeling. He is hurled back into the room's furniture and crashes hard into the wall. Elsewhere, the tremor from the impact is strong enough for others to notice something is wrong. Back inside, papers scatter through the air as Dud asks whether they have finally uncovered everything. With the professor broken on the floor, Dud suggests handing him over to the Night Order. Eliza stops him there, and Dud reminds her with a strained smile that he is still only a freshman. Dud realizes his growing command of holy energy is tied to a man he instinctively distrusted from the beginning. That suspicion pulls him back to an earlier encounter with a red-haired nobleman connected to what he learned about Riverback. In that memory, Dud had been forced to greet someone important while hiding his unease. He also remembers a brutal warning that even asking about a certain hidden figure would get him killed. The threat extended further, making it clear that merely admitting he had seen her would also mean death. And if he ever forgot her, she promised a fate so terrible that death would be preferable. Back in the present, Dud becomes convinced that the man before him and that terrifying woman are somehow connected. The memory snaps him into panic as he senses that something about his holy energy is going dangerously wrong. Trying to steady himself, he credits recent events for improving his holy energy, and notes that exposing the false professor has eased some pressure. After finishing treatment, he dismisses the old man and turns his attention back to Elnor. He notices Eleanor's madness has improved, but decides her fragile state is still too dangerous to gamble with. Elnor immediately presses him, sensing he is hiding something. She reveals that she knows he met her father and demands to know why. Caught off guard, Dud instinctively denies it before realizing he has already exposed himself. Forced to recover, he admits the meeting happened but is confused about how she learned of it. As Elnor waits for an answer, Dud scrambles to invent a harmless explanation. He claims he only met the Archduke because he was worried Eleanor's father might have harmed her. He adds that the Archduke noticed a sword skill Elnor had taught him and summoned him out of curiosity. That explanation unsettles Elnor, especially when Dud identifies the man as Archduke Tristan and ties the skill to the Tristan sword style. She outwardly lets the matter drop, though her reaction shows she is still thinking about it. Even while distancing herself from responsibility, Elnor implies Dud has now entered her family's orbit whether he likes it or not. She warns that he will likely keep crossing paths with the Archduke from now on. Then she reminds him that if he truly means to protect her, he cannot avoid dealing with her family. Her words hit Dud hard, because he knows he is still far too weak to protect her from what is coming. Elnor notices he has started acting more naturally around her and points out the change directly. She teasingly orders him to improve his manners and address her properly as student council president if he intends to guard her. Afterward, Dud's friends complain that he keeps attracting dangerous attention, especially from the Tristan family. Dud dryly admits that with so few connections at school, he is not even sure whether some of them count as friends. His friend fires back that Dud has no right to say that while casually drawing attention and somehow getting free ice cream during midterms. That mention reminds Dud of the midterm survival season and the item he has been preparing to use. He jokingly orders Herman to investigate every ice cream flavor, while privately doubting the boy is a proper butler at all. Once alone, Dud decides he finally has enough to awaken the ghost in Gregory's pavilion. He reflects that he gathered the required holy energy by healing the followers around him. The ritual should summon a great historical spirit, but the result is random, which means everything could still go wrong. He worries about drawing some incompatible legend instead of the kind of ally he needs. For a moment he reassures himself that a bad match would simply mean failure, and nothing worse. Then he activates the ritual and the artifact opens in a burst of light. To his disbelief, the summoning mechanism manifests like a gacha card, making the whole ritual feel absurdly game-like. The card resolves into the silhouette of a knight, and Dud immediately starts guessing who it might be. He runs through famous spear and tank heroes, trying to identify the figure before the reveal. As the spirit's face becomes clear, Dud feels he has seen him before and is relieved that the presence does not feel evil. The summoned spirit identifies himself as the Guardian of Dawn, Calivan Crixanax. Dud is stunned because Calivan is Elia's older brother, a man who should have died long ago. That revelation pulls the story into the ruins of the Red Knight incident that destroyed Elia's home. In the aftermath of that disaster, survivors struggle through the wreckage while Ellia wanders the devastation in shock. The narration reveals that this was the place where the Crimson Demon's vessel caused the Red Knight tragedy. The Imperial family's royal guardians had been ordered to hold their positions for as long as possible against the catastrophe. Among the rubble, Ellia searches desperately through what remains of her family's life. Calivan had been one of those guardians, and he died stopping the Red Knight, becoming a hero in death. The memory lingers on the warmth of the family Ellia lost. That warmth is shattered by the sound of grief and the broken promise of someone who never came back. Elia's mourning centers on the promise her brother made to return, a promise death erased. The narration stresses that even heroic death is still a private tragedy for the family left behind. From that day on, Ellia swore to follow her brother's path and destroy the demons that made her an orphan. She threw herself into harsh training, driven by the need to become strong enough to face what took everything from her. Her effort eventually made her the standout elite of her training class and earned her recognition as a warrior candidate. That recognition marked the beginning of her rise toward becoming a true warrior. In the present, Ellia now stands among the Academy's strongest students with the confidence of someone who earned that place. As midterms begin, the Academy explains that students will be tested in teams of 4 on battle and survival against demons and their followers. Watching this, Dud tells Calivan that Ellia survived and has grown into exactly the kind of fighter her brother hoped for. Calivan is moved to learn that his little sister is now officially one of the Empire's warrior candidates. He laughs through the emotion, remembering her as a messy child while accepting that she has truly grown up. Seeing what Ellia became convinces Calivan that his death was not meaningless. He admits it is still surreal to witness his baby sister as an adult while existing only as a spirit. Dud then asks Calivan to cooperate with him, and Calivan agrees on one condition: Ellia must not learn that her brother has returned as a spirit. Trusting his instincts, Calivan tells Dud he seems like a good man and asks him to stay by Elia's side. Dud accepts that responsibility, declaring that for now his goal is to make sure no one dies. Soon after, Ellia notices him and calls out to him directly. Dud seizes the moment to bring up the midterm teams and cautiously makes her an offer. He asks Ellia to join him for the midterms, surprising her completely. After a beat, Ellia admits she genuinely wants to be on the same team as him. When Dud reminds her that she once claimed they were not close, she awkwardly backs down and accepts his apology. He makes clear that this is not casual friendliness but a personal request because he truly needs her help. Their classmates immediately start shoving Ellia toward him, delighted by the obvious tension between them. Dud notices that Ellia always addresses him more warmly than she does others, which only flusters her further. A nearby nun reacts dramatically as the group all but hands Ellia over to him. With no graceful escape left, Ellia reluctantly accepts the arrangement. She agrees to learn from him during the midterms, while Dud notes that her old party is still highly capable on its own. Ellia tries to frame it lightly as the two of them becoming a duo again. Dud corrects her and says he is building a full team, not just pairing off with her. The nun points out they still need one more member. Elsewhere, the story shifts to the Chancellor's Tower and a more dangerous political conversation. The Chancellor receives a remote report with polite gratitude, though she already suspects trouble behind the visit. She questions why the Saintess would come all the way to Alphonte with an escort knight unless there were hidden motives. The Holy Emperor answers smoothly that Lucienne needs a chance to leave her sheltered position and test the world for herself. The Chancellor remains wary, especially because her own investigation suggests the Saintess may also be a candidate to become a demon's vessel. The Emperor's plan becomes clearer. Bringing Lucienne to Alphonte is the first step in a larger design that began with freeing her twin sister Yuria. That only deepens the Chancellor's alarm, because sending a possible vessel into Alphonte could invite disaster. She directly questions Holy Emperor Credo's reasoning. Credo replies that Lucienne is a symbol shared by both empires, so the decision was politically difficult but necessary. When the Chancellor suggests the move may be tied to recent demonic incidents, he admits that is only part of the reason. He adds that a priest in Elefante was exposed as an insider, and many high officers are now deeply concerned. Then he turns the situation into a test, arguing that if Lucian is truly a saintess, she should prove her courage by entering even the darkest places. He proposes using the Academy's midterms as the pretext, saying Lucian can assist student training while serving that larger purpose. He refuses to explain further, insisting only that everything is meant to destroy whatever evil threatens Elefante. The Chancellor hears the contempt beneath his words and realizes he is effectively forcing Elefante to accept the burden. Credo's amused response confirms that he knows exactly how coercive his proposal is. The Chancellor tries one last time to resist, pointing out that the whole scheme collapses if Elefante simply refuses. Credo calmly corners her by suggesting that if the Saintess volunteers, refusal would become politically impossible. After the call ends, the Chancellor can only curse the situation and the trap she has been left in. She condemns Credo as inhuman and recognizes the move as a calculated act of political cruelty. At the same time, she realizes this crisis may finally give her a chance to meet the Saintess directly. She bitterly reflects that even this opportunity comes at the cost of being used as the Empire's pawn. That thought recalls an earlier, equally shameless request that Dud once made of her. Remembering his audacity, she calls him a hypocrite even while opening the lipstick she had been using. She admits to herself that manipulating others for her own goals is exactly how she has always survived. The story then shifts to a quiet forest stream, where another lonely figure waits. Yuria kneels by the water, washing cloth in isolation with the sword chained to her back. She grows anxious because the one person she waits for has not appeared. Days have passed, and his absence feels wrong because he always comes at this time. Her thoughts narrow to that single missing person. A masked Dud finally arrives, chatting casually about her improving defense and tomorrow's visit as if nothing is wrong. Yuria quietly tells him he does not need to bring food and begins to reveal what she truly wants from him. What she wants is not gifts at all, but simply his presence. Before she can say more, the old poison in her mind resurfaces and tells her he is already bored of her. She immediately accepts that cruel thought as the obvious truth. The narration identifies her fully as Yuria Greyhouncer, the outsider of Elefante who betrayed the Holy Empire. A remembered voice mocks her, saying that when she fled with the sword she should have accepted a life of killing anyone in her way. That voice accuses her of failing to live up to the bloody fate she chose. It insists that this cursed life is the one she selected for herself. The attack on her mind grows harsher, telling her that nothing has changed and that she is still completely alone. The voice drives the point home by insisting she will always remain abandoned. It twists her present loneliness into proof that no one will ever come looking for her. As Yuria breaks down, another voice cuts through the spiral by asking the simplest possible question. Why is she crying? That interruption shocks her out of the delusion for a moment. Dud, still obliviously holding a bag of cookies, asks if something happened while he was gone, and explains he could not find the snack he mentioned. The sight of him returning at all overwhelms Yuria with relief. Her interest in Dud surges dramatically as she tearfully asks whether he hates her now. Dud is baffled by the question and explains he actually came to ask her for a favor. He asks whether she would be willing to leave this place. Yuria instantly agrees to anything, so desperate not to be abandoned that she would follow any request. Her intensity catches Dud off guard and makes him realize he has stepped into something far more unstable than expected. Yuria begs him not to leave her, promising absolute obedience if he stays. When she lunges after him in panic, Dud has to flee while apologizing and trying not to trigger her further. The story cuts to the start of Elefante's midterms, where students must cross the Great Plains and can earn extra points by taking rivals' necklaces. Before the exam begins, Ellia corners Dud because she has too many questions to wait any longer. Dud tries to postpone the conversation, but Ellia refuses to let him escape this time. What she demands to know is why he is involved with a strange black-haired woman, and what exactly that relationship is. Yuria, now dressed in a way she says feels more comfortable, openly admits that this appearance was her own idea. Ellia is horrified by the implication and concludes that everyone around her has lost all shame. Dud hurriedly tries to explain that whatever is going on with Yuria, Ellia should at least clear up her misunderstanding first. Ellia is too stunned and furious to respond coherently at first. Dud then bluntly tells Ellia to stay away from Yuria and promises that the arrangement is part of a larger strategy. He insists there's a reason Yuria is being kept at a distance, though Ellia can only imagine the worst possible explanation. Yuria obediently agrees to go when Dud tells her to move. Even as the team starts forward, Ellia keeps shouting for Yuria to stay back while Yuria interprets that as some kind of perverse instruction. A sudden shadow interrupts the argument, and Dud realizes too late that a new threat has arrived. A blonde spear user appears in the aftermath, urgently checking whether everyone survived the attack. The group confirms they are safe for the moment, and notes that the transfer student from the Tribal Alliance nearly overwhelmed them. The blonde lancer dryly points out that without his barrier support they would already be out of the exam, confirming just how lethal the ambush really was. Once the group feels safe, some students immediately want to use the chance to hunt down Dud, whom they still see as a fraud and an easy target. A blonde student refuses to join the ambush, no longer willing to treat Dud like prey. When the others press him, He admits his view of Dud has changed instead of being talked into revenge. He explains that he has started to see the world more broadly, and no longer judges strength so simply. Lilu Garuda, sitting over defeated students, extends that thought by noting that the world is full of weak people too. She looks at the fallen students with contempt, and cannot understand how they can be this useless. To her, real combat means staking your life on the line, and she sees none of that spirit here. She concludes that these students are not fighting with any true resolve at all. That disgust makes her question how such people manage to survive. Her scorn sharpens into hatred for the empire that produced them. Before she can continue abusing the helpless students, a silver-haired imperial officer suddenly strikes her from behind with a rapier. Lilu is thrilled rather than alarmed when she realizes her attacker might finally be worth her attention. Their clash erupts violently enough to tear up the ground around them. Lilu recognizes the officer as Elnor and mocks her for drawing too much attention for someone who should have been exiled. Instead of being offended, Lilu becomes excited because she has finally found someone useful. Elnor formally orders her to stop, saying she cannot ignore such excessive violence as an official. Lilu dismisses the warning and taunts her to act if she really means it. Elnor answers coldly that if this were a real battlefield, Lilu would already be dead, but she is willing to let her off with a warning because it is not. Lilu rejects that mercy and declares that for her, this place is a battlefield, openly inviting Elnor to kill her if she can. She even presses the point of Elnor's blade to her own skin and demands that a drawn sword should be willing to spill blood. Elnor hesitates, and Lilu immediately notices the weakness in that pause. Lilu laughs that imperial fighters are all alike, skilled but too soft to follow through. She compares Elnor to people in her tribe who can fight well but lose all conviction when something precious is taken from them. Seeing that kind of hesitation always drives Lilu to attack harder. She commits to the assault with a predatory grin. Elnor senses a dangerous shift in Lilu's intent as something dark arises behind her calm exterior. Lilu is briefly stunned when a terrifying pressure suddenly manifests around her. A remembered lesson from her father returns to her, warning that the tribe is not the whole world and that true strength reveals how vast the world really is. Overwhelmed by that realization, Lilu finally understands what he meant and can only marvel at how enormous the world is. Even so, she launches herself at Elnor with renewed ferocity. Elnor remains composed and barely reacts to the charge. She identifies Lilu's trick as forced teleportation rather than raw speed. Lilu revels in being seen through and keeps grinning through the exchange. She tries to bring a kick down from above before Elnor can adjust. But when Elnor calmly avoids it, Lilu is caught off guard for the first time. The attack passes harmlessly, leaving only a fading afterimage in front of Elnor. Lilu is thrown off balance and crashes down hard. Annoyed, she clicks her tongue and reassesses. Back in the larger test, she bitterly jokes that she may have been failed just for stepping out of line. She sarcastically addresses the student council president and admits that what she just faced was no ordinary gap in power. From her perspective, Elnor felt fundamentally different, as if they were born on separate levels entirely. Still trying to make sense of it, Lilu wonders what exactly made Elnor snap into murderous intent. Nearby students nervously guess that insulting imperial conviction might have triggered it, while worrying they could be next. Lilu keeps probing the memory and wonders if the real trigger was her claim that Elnor would do nothing even if her lover were taken away. At that moment, the system reveals that Lilu Garuda has taken an interest in Dud. Elsewhere, Dud is still being chased when a system notice reveals that he has influenced Elnor into awakening her rage skill. Yuria, confused by Dud's muttering, demands to know what he is talking about. Ellia suddenly tears through the pursuing students with overwhelming force, sending bodies flying and making the chaos even worse. Yuria calls out to Ellia in alarm and suggests they should stop and clear up the misunderstanding instead of escalating it. Dud refuses immediately, deciding that talking is no longer an option. He explains that he is already too busy trying to keep Yuria under control while explosions continue behind them. Ellia, meanwhile, keeps attacking because she believes she is rescuing Yuria from a pervert. Dud realizes he has been framed and groans that all of Elia's admirers are now coming after him as well. Yuria, oddly cheerful in the middle of the mess, wonders whether they will even be able to finish the test at this rate. A green-haired upperclassman arrives riding a stone golem and dramatically announces himself to Ellia. He confesses that he has admired Elia's beauty and martial talent since the first day of school. Dud can only stare and ask if Ellia has always had this many deranged admirers. The newcomer declares himself the 10th-ranked student and vows to save Ellia from the supposed kidnapper, even promising her a date afterward. Yuria tries to correct him by saying she has not been kidnapped and that Dud is not even a fraud. The golem rider only half processes that and latches onto the idea that Dud is still a fraud. Yuria grows frustrated that no one will simply deny the nonsense and calm down. The admirer immediately loses his nerve when faced with Elia's anger and admits he does not actually want to fight her. Dud notes that representatives from the Knights, Spellcraft Department, and clergy are all gathered here now. Seeing that concentration of talent, he realizes this is the perfect chance to improve his traits and activates a glowing item on his wrist. He then calls for the guardian he has been relying on to finally reveal herself. Dud formally asks her to come out because he needs a favor. The guardian hesitates, sensing danger even without understanding the full situation. Before she can act, Ellia is still being hailed as a warrior by people rushing in to save her. The system detects extreme danger and upgrades Dud's desperate survival to A rank as more attackers charge in. Dud complains that his guardian still will not intervene, while she dismisses the battle as a mere children's scuffle beneath her station. At the same time, Ellia clashes head-on with the stone golem instead of retreating. The guardian finally reacts when Dud points out that Elia's younger sister is currently fighting off a stalker. That single word enrages Yuria, who explodes at the idea of a stalker and demands to know who it is. Her power surges upward like a flare. She activates Mind Realm and begins buffing nearby allies. The buff spreads to Dud and Ellia, and the system shares A-rank desperate survival with the party. Fueled by that support, Ellia roars that she does not need a fan like this and brings her sword down on the golem. Her strike cleaves straight through the stone construct despite warnings that her blade would break first. The admirer can only stare in disbelief as the golem is split apart. The students watching are stunned, while Yuria seems delighted by the result. Dud, sweating, can only mutter that this is getting frightening. Even Ellia is startled by her own strength and cannot understand how she just did that. Dud, however, is thrilled because the skill interaction worked even better than expected. He notes that the buff's weakness is its tiny holy energy supply. Worse, the enhancement will fade after only a few attacks. Ellia realizes she cannot rely on that power for long. The remaining students still rush her anyway, insisting they cannot let even a warrior candidate get away with this. The guardian finally moves, sending chains whipping across the battlefield. Her expression hardens as she joins the fight in earnest. She tears through the attackers with effortless, acrobatic violence, scattering weapons and bodies. After overwhelming them, she casually apologizes for having held back earlier. Ellia, still angry, says that even if she is not the warrior, none of these people ever listen to anyone else. She dismisses their opinions entirely and keeps fighting on her own terms. Drawing on her guardian power, she unleashes Guardian Burst. A massive tornado-like blast sweeps the battlefield clean and hurls the remaining students away. Dud is shocked by how absurdly strong she has become and suspects his own weak stats may be the only reason he is not being flattened too. Yuria, still glowing, is amazed at how strong Ellia has gotten. When the dust settles, the system declares Dud's party victorious. The Guardian is simply relieved that no one seems seriously injured, and Dud admits he was never worried about her survival. Privately, he wonders when this whole situation spiraled so far out of control. Another scream in the distance reminds Ellia that the chaos is not over yet. Even so, she finds herself enjoying being on Dud's side more than she expected. Dud notices that another blessing necklace has appeared, making this the 9th one he has collected. Elsewhere, another team celebrates what they think is a perfect midterm performance. Their confidence falters when they realize things are going smoothly, but they still are not in first place. The map shows second place with 15 necklaces, which already seems impressive. They decide they can still catch up, until someone questions whether the map is even functioning correctly. The real shock is that second place belongs to a single individual rather than a group. That means one person somehow gathered 15 necklaces alone, and the students can barely believe it. A red-haired girl with a monstrous aura is implied to be one of the terrifying talents hidden among the first years. Someone bitterly reflects that their class is full of monsters. Then the true first-place total is revealed to be 120, leaving them speechless. As they panic over what kind of group could do that, Dud gains a new trait called Perfect Counter, which reflects damage when he blocks perfectly. Dud and his companions arrive before a mountain cave, and he notes that they have reached their destination. He wonders whether claiming this area will end the test. The Guardian reminds him that she is ranked first in their class and snaps at him for asking the obvious. Inside the cave, Dud recalls that this section was only a random event in the original story. He expects some stronger monster to appear, but then senses something far stranger. Ellia also notices the ominous phenomenon and feels the test has gone far beyond anything normal. The Guardian is equally unsettled by what she sees. Then a voice calling for a sister reaches her, and the word hits her with personal force. They discover a blonde saintess bound inside a grotesque organic chamber, fed by branching cords. The system updates the main quest and orders them to stop the holder of the Curse of Severance. It also identifies the bound woman as Saintess Lucian Greyhouncher and Yuria Greyhouncher, making clear that protecting them is now the objective. The Guardian is stunned by the implication that a blessing necklace and teleportation have led them directly to this hidden scene. Ellia realizes this place is not part of Alfante's normal test grounds at all. The Saintess weakly stirs, showing she is still conscious despite the restraint. Ellia steps forward and vows to save her. But before she can act, another presence intervenes. A battle priest of the Holy Empire named Klein Garrison appears and declares that interfering would mean disrupting the Saintess's volunteer work. Ellia is baffled by the claim and refuses to accept such a description. Klein insists the Saintess is acting of her own will. He warns them not to intrude if they do not want to disrespect her, even asking the bound Saintess to confirm his lie. The Guardian trembles at the scene, clearly sensing something is terribly wrong. Ellia presses the issue, demanding to know why anyone would willingly choose such a hideous task. The Saintess, sweating and strained, tries to corner Ellia politically by saying that opposing her would mean opposing the will of the entire Holy Empire. That argument makes the Guardian's eyes sharpen as she recognizes the coercion behind it. Klein addresses Ellia by her full name, making it clear he knows exactly who she is. Ellia answers that she is not opposing anyone's will, only trying to save someone who is obviously suffering. Klein calmly twists her words and suggests they simply ask the Saintess to tell them to stop. Watching this, Dud realizes he has encountered Saintess Lucian in the worst possible way. He recalls that she is one of the three great powers of the hegemony, representing the Holy Empire. In his understanding, the Empire is a deranged state whose ruling elite hide their true actions from the public, especially its emperor. He remembers that Lucian herself is deeply entangled with that imperial system. More specifically, she is treated as a puppet and a consumable tool for the Holy Emperor. He realizes that the Greyhoundsure sisters exist to fulfill that emperor's cause, and that this entire setup was engineered to push Yuria to her limit. Even so, Dud states that his party is in first place and that the Saintess deserves rest rather than further exploitation. Klein refuses, saying she must remain in this state until the second and third place teams arrive. Dud immediately understands why Imperial forces showed up here so quickly. He concludes that Elnor's earlier awakening must have accelerated everything, while Elnor herself is shown elsewhere standing over a slain beast. Recent attacks have convinced outside powers that Elnor is behind the unrest. That suspicion becomes even more dangerous because Yuria could lose control if she is cornered now. With the Holy Emperor already watching Elfante, Lucian realizes Yuria may already have been exposed. He decides he has only one way left to break the deadlock. He throws down a formal challenge, catching the Imperial priest off guard. The others quickly recognize the gesture as a duel request, and the priest is stunned that Lucian would force the issue so directly. Lucian keeps his allies back and takes control of the confrontation himself. When the priest questions why he should accept, Lucian insists on settling the matter personally and sends the injured Saintess away. The priest warns that this could escalate into an international dispute, but Lucian is ready to expose what was done to the Saintess if it does. Asked what rank gives him the right to challenge a high cleric, Lucian answers with deliberate contempt that he is only a minor rural noble. The priest tries to hide behind his office, claiming a high priest cannot brawl with just anyone. Lucian immediately tears through that excuse by pointing out that the man already drew his sword. The priest notices Ellia leaving with the Saintess and realizes Lucian is still guarding someone important behind him. Deciding he needs one crushing strike to end things fast, the priest openly prepares for battle. He frames the duel as discipline for an insolent student and readies himself to punish Lucian. The priest raises his blade with full confidence in his superiority. He launches the opening attack the instant he sees his chance. Lucian meets it head-on instead of retreating. His countering ability triggers perfectly, turning the priest's aggression against him. The reversal detonates through the clash and blasts the priest backward. Watching from behind, Ellia demands to know what Dud is really thinking, since he is following Lucian's earlier permission to act freely to the letter. The priest protests that he merely answered a lawful duel, but Dud coldly notes that he attacked first as a high battle priest, not as some harmless cleric. Dud even produces written protection from the Tristan family, making clear that the Imperial side will bear responsibility for his actions. Elsewhere, Chancellor Atalanta is forced to admit the Saintess's status makes the matter untouchable through ordinary channels. She questions whether Dud truly believes he can win, and he reminds her that she ordered him to draw in every demon vessel and that Yuria is already halfway under their influence. He explains that bringing Yuria along was intentional because only a dramatic result would attract the vessel's attention, and he values saving the world over political caution. A companion points out that Dud and the warrior candidate have never even been enemies at school, exposing how artificial this conflict really is. Dud clarifies that his real concern is not school politics but the larger game around them. His mentor's old advice to make friends and avoid strange incidents now feels almost impossible to follow. He dismisses that simpler life as a luxury he can no longer afford. Because the Holy Empire has formally reported the duel, he knows the Holy Emperor is likely watching. Atalanta warns him that whatever he intends, he is now performing under the Emperor's eyes. She urges him to reconsider, stressing how dangerous the Holy Emperor truly is. The tension gives way to a quieter memory. In private, Yuria's sister waits alone, smoking and thinking. When she hears someone at the door, she allows them in. She calmly invites the visitor to enter. Yuria appears before her, still bound by chains and visibly uneasy. The sister is startled to see her in that condition, while Yuria can barely form words. Yuria addresses her as sister, and the woman answers by calling her Lucian, revealing a deeper bond and confusion between identities. That strange exchange leaves the sister silent and unsettled. Yuria steps closer despite her fear. Then panic overtakes her as she senses what her own curse might do. She begs her sister not to come any nearer. She retreats and warns that even closeness is dangerous. Yuria finally names the threat outright as the curse of severance. She explains that if her sister comes closer, the curse will injure her. The chains react violently as the curse begins to trigger. The sister moves anyway, relieved that she understands the danger now. She catches the chains and reveals the truth that changes everything between them. She tells Yuria that they are twins, making the curse's reaction meaningful rather than random. Back in the present, the duel is formally opened under rules forbidding killing and ending the match only by severe injury or surrender. Dud reminds himself that Lucian must delay Uria's awakening before obsession and curses destroy her from within. He knows that if he fails, her mind will collapse. For that reason, Atalanta concludes that this duel truly is necessary. Dud also understands that the Holy Empire's constant surveillance of Lucian has to be disrupted. To do that, he needs this one fight to leave a lasting impression. He aims to make the kind of impact that even the Holy Emperor cannot ignore. Atalanta is certain the Emperor, Credo, would never miss a spectacle like this even if he could not attend openly. The priest, unaware of the trap around him, says it is too late for mercy. He offers surrender as Lucian's only hope, promising to break fewer bones if Lucian yields quickly. Lucian answers with a calm challenge that shows he has no intention of obeying. A nervous observer clings to the hope that Lucian will surrender once the duel truly begins. Instead, Lucian finds the priest's confidence amusing and prepares himself. Far away, the Holy Emperor quietly warns the priest not to attack with killing intent. When questioned, he explains that Lucian's power grows stronger the harder he is pressed. The Emperor recognizes the ability as monstrously unfair and eerily familiar. The priest recalls being felled by his own reflected attack before and starts to understand the danger. So he tries to purge his murderous intent and adjust his approach. He activates layered blessings to overwhelm Lucian without technically aiming to kill him. Bathed in sacred power, he charges with a far more serious assault. His focus sharpens into ruthless determination. Lucian, meanwhile, treats the fight as the correction of one arrogant noble bully. The Holy Emperor watches with growing interest. Lucian activates guidance to read the incoming strike. At the same time, another power tied to Elnor stirs within him. The priest senses something is wrong too late. The Emperor's attention snaps fully onto Lucian. A red force begins to answer Lucian's call. The two clash at terrifying speed across the arena. Then the Mark of the Fallen reacts. Lucian raises his weapon to meet the next exchange. The priest drives in, expecting to crush him with momentum. Instead, the arena floor shatters under the force of Lucian's resistance. A pillar of power erupts high enough to shake the entire stadium. Atalanta is stunned by how far the duel has escalated. Even the Imperial Guards panic as the disturbance spreads toward the viewing platform. The Holy Emperor only smiles, as if this is exactly what he came to see. Guidance keeps Lucian alive amid the collapsing debris. The priest realizes Lucian is drawing on Elnor's rage as well. Lucian closes in through the ruined arena while the Mark continues responding. A system warning confirms demonic energy is gathering around the Mark of the Fallen. That surge alarms both Atalanta and the Emperor's side at once. The priest finally feels genuine fear. Lucian's eyes turn demonic as the pressure around him becomes openly sinister. The sky itself seems to tear as black-red energy spirals upward for all nations to witness. One of the demon vessels, Elnor, manifests in the arena beside Lucian. Lucian strains under the burden of her appearance but keeps control. Elnor admits that when she manifested before, everything else froze. But enduring this much with her power alone is chaotic even for her. The priest can only stare at the evil pressure now crushing the field. He tries to strike again before the situation worsens. Elnor appears above the duel like a delighted spectator, openly encouraging the violence. Lucian realizes she is not here to help cleanly but to enjoy the fight. She mockingly tells him not to lose too badly, pretending concern while feeding the chaos. Her power lashes around Lucian's weapon, making the battlefield even more unstable. She cheerfully promises to return as much pain as Lucian receives. Lucian is startled by how directly she is interfering. The priest unleashes a storm of blessed attacks, and Lucian barely keeps up while sensing that something in this exchange has changed. The priest cannot understand how Lucian is blocking him at all anymore. Lucian reaches for a simpler answer. He realizes he does not need to kill the priest to end this. The priest is suddenly struck in the eye by a brutal, humiliating blow. Lucian commits fully, his demonic gaze hardening as he seizes the opening. He follows with an overwhelming upward strike that launches the priest into the air. The priest's confidence finally breaks under the force of it. He can only watch in disbelief as control slips away. Above it all, the Holy Emperor smiles with quiet satisfaction. He remarks that while he was distracted, Alfonte's standards seem to have risen far beyond expectation. With a casual burst of golden power, he removes the defeated priest from the arena before the humiliation can deepen. Lucian immediately uses his victory speech to demand that men like this be kept away from the Saintess. The Holy Emperor remains silent for a beat as the priest's name is shouted in alarm. Atalanta warns the Imperial side not to push further, claiming whatever they came for is already lost and that this is their final warning. The Holy Emperor responds with a smiling rebuke, turning the embarrassment back on Alfonte's leadership for allowing such a scandal. A tribal leader in the audience laughs and makes the insult worse by mocking the Empire for sending a trained knight after a child while still harassing the Saintess. He introduces himself as Hatan Wu Jewel, the Blue Dragon Chief, and openly brands the Imperial side as international perverts while taking a liking to Lucian's spirit. Lucian watches as the defeated priest is carried away in golden light. Hatan presses the humiliation further, saying that if even a kid publicly condemns them, the Holy Empire should stop pretending to be holy. Lucian escalates the provocation by saying that if the Holy Emperor is offended, he can come down and fight personally. Rather than rage, the Holy Emperor accepts the challenge with unsettling calm. Atalanta is shocked when he declares that the next duel will carry real stakes. He praises Lucien's talent, while also recognizing his dangerous cunning. The defeated priest is restored enough to be removed, but the real attention has already shifted to Lucien. The Holy Emperor acknowledges Lucien's provocation and withdraws without losing face, which only lets Lucien taunt the Empire for retreating. He departs in a blaze of holy light, carrying the Imperial side away from the scene. Once outside the arena, the Emperor's mood turns thoughtful. He orders Sarahs to place agents around Dud Campbell at Elfonte. Sarahs accepts the assignment without hesitation. The Emperor reflects that one duel has drawn the eyes of 3 nations, and the more he watches Dud, the more Dud resembles someone from his past. Back in the arena, Lucien realizes the Emperor has finally left. Only then is the result formally announced, naming Dud Campbell the winner. Atalanta and Hatton both approve of what they saw, with Hatton especially impressed by Dud's promise as a warrior. As a reward, Hatton tosses Dud a rare lion necklace that boosts stamina and training efficiency. Dud catches the gift, surprised by the sudden favor. Hatton invites him to visit the furnace of battle someday, promising a warm welcome. He leaves Dud with one last warning that he wants to see that strange power again. Dud, exhausted, can only stare after him and mutter that he is finally leaving. He realizes this reward was supposed to appear much later, and that he has just been noticed by the most dangerous man in the tribal association. Afterward, Atalanta privately asks whether he won by using the power of a vessel again. Dud dodges the truth by calling it luck, while Atalanta warns that both the Holy Emperor and Hatton noticed and that many more people will come asking the same question. As Dud reflects on that warning, the Holy Emperor's lingering interest hangs over him like the next crisis already beginning. A scheming woman warns that the Academy is about to descend into chaos. By the time the dust settles, the main objective has been cleared. The protagonist receives confirmation that he has completed a major quest. Along with the victory come rare rewards, including another seed of evil. Realizing he now holds 4 seeds, he starts thinking about the exclusive abilities such ingredients can buy. He spends 1 seed on Eye of Inspection, a skill that reveals another person's status once per day. The purchase goes through, giving him a new way to gather reliable information. Because the skill's results cannot be faked, he decides to test it immediately. He dismisses checking Trisha, since her role is already clear to him. He also ignores the professor, deciding those answers are not what he needs most. A sudden realization hits him as he spots a far more valuable target. He identifies the silver-haired student council president as the ideal person to inspect. While she tears through the training field with overwhelming speed, the other students can only flee her path. He reminds himself that Elnor and Ellia are the scenario's key figures, so learning about them takes priority. He activates Eye of Inspection on Elnor Tristan and is immediately told she is the Grey Demon's vessel. Her status reveals monstrous physical ranks, immense authority, and a demon fusion rate already at 80% with low corruption. The protagonist is alarmed that her fusion has advanced so far already and links it to the Riverback incident. He is relieved her corruption remains low, but before he can finish thinking through the danger, Elnor notices him. She catches his stare, recognizes him as the student council president, and demands to know why he is watching her so intently. He quickly changes the subject by saying he has information for her about the person she asked him to monitor. When she asks if he found the target, he says he has mapped out the man's general behavior pattern and apologizes for making her do such work herself. She still praises the effort, and he leans into his role by crediting his success to his position as council president. Elnor connects that access to the recent expansion of Holy Empire envoys and asks whether he knows more about it. He dodges the question but hands over something more useful, a record of the target's movements during midterms. The protagonist is thrilled because this is information he originally had to deduce on his own in the novel. Overjoyed, he grabs Elnor in gratitude and promises to repay her for the help. Elnor is stunned when he blurts out that the target should be at the clock tower right now. He rushes off at once, leaving her flustered and caught off guard by the sudden closeness. He sprints through the academy, pushing himself to reach the tower in time. As he climbs, he recalls that the target spends time at the clock tower until evening and entered the academy alongside the Saintess. He reasons that such a person would avoid unnecessary outside activity, yet still seek fresh air often enough to make this meeting possible. By the time he reaches the top, he is exhausted from the climb. There he meets the blonde boy king, Valcasus, who coolly notes that he needs to train his body more. Valcasus shocks him by calling him Dud Campbell by name. Out of breath, the protagonist can only ask how Valcasus knows him. Valcasus tells him to calm down and reveals that the prophet had already warned him about Dud. That mention rattles Dud, because it means the prophet knew about him before they ever met. Valcasus explains that he learned of Dud through the person assigned to watch him, and waited here every day because enemies cannot simply request a meeting. Dud realizes the prophet, who should have remained a minor demon worshipper in the original story, is now actively intervening. Valcasus says the prophet specifically named Dud as the greatest obstacle he would face here. As monstrous shadows gather around him, Valcasus asks plainly whether Dud intends to stand in his way. Dud understands that Valcasus already knows both his identity and the threat he poses, despite never having met him before. He is disturbed to realize the prophet may be using the same kind of hidden information advantage that he himself has relied on. Valcasus presses the issue by demanding to know how much Dud really knows. He points out that Dud came because he already had information on them and recognized who Valcasus truly was. Dud answers that he knows enough to believe Valcasus bears no personal malice. He then bluntly adds that this changes nothing about Valcasus's plan to seize the academy by slaughtering everyone in it. Valcasus confirms the attack is set for 3 days later and notes that the prophet is unusually insistent about it. Elsewhere, a masked red-haired woman remains hidden in the shadows as part of the same looming conspiracy. Valcasus admits they still do not know who Dud is, but warns that in the future he may have to face all those granted divine enlightenment. Dud cannot understand why Valcasus is revealing so much and asks his reason directly. Valcasus identifies himself as the last king of Armada, the ruler who once absorbed his own people through alchemy. Even while calling them enemies, he warns Dud not to expose dangerous truths carelessly. He adds that he hates having his plans disrupted. Dud insists he is not trying to sabotage the plan outright, only to make the coming clash honest. Valcasus replies that fairness is meaningless when Dud is overwhelmingly disadvantaged no matter how much he knows. He correctly guesses that Dud came mainly to see whether Valcasus would resort to underhanded methods. Dud admits that assessment is accurate. He says they do understand each other, but warns that he has more to say. Using Eye of Inspection again, he looks deeper into Valcasus. What he sees is a body crowded with grotesque, life-consuming traces. The skill reveals countless alchemic spells carved into Valcasus, and Dud recalls that every alchemic spell demands a human life as its price. The vision shows just how inhumanly altered Valcasus has become. Valcasus dismisses the inspection skill as useless in actual combat. Dud agrees that he normally uses it only from hiding, not in a direct fight. Even so, he says he is being fair by showing his hand openly now. The masked woman appears behind him and says she wanted to see whether the prophet's judgment of Dud was correct. Valcasus calmly tells Dud that, despite the prophet's concern, he does not consider him much of a threat. Dud refuses to be cowed and proposes a wager instead. He says Valcasus may proceed with the massacre in 3 days if he can stop him, though he cannot talk him out of it now. Valcasus answers that he will use every bit of his power to crush Dud's resistance. Dud accepts that challenge even after seeing Valcasus's monstrous body and fixes the decisive moment at 3 days later. He goes further and vows not only to stop Valcasus, but to save him and his fallen kingdom as well. That promise leaves Valcasus momentarily speechless. Then Valcasus names the price of failure. If Dud loses, he will become the next life consumed by Valcasus's alchemy. He departs before Dud can press him further, ending the meeting on his own terms. A shadow creature lingers behind as Valcasus vanishes from sight. Dud realizes the king is gone and that the bet is now real. For a moment, the possibility of losing nearly overwhelms him. He forces himself to stop dwelling on defeat, reminding himself that winning requires refusing that fear. Night settles over the academy as the countdown continues. In another room, the Saintess Lucian checks on Yuria, who has changed clothes and now stands before her with a blade in hand. Lucian apologizes for forgetting Yuria's unusual way of speaking and asks whether she likes the new outfit. Yuria shyly admits she does, but remains embarrassed. She confesses she has never worn anything like it before and feels awkward in it. Lucian tells her to take whatever she wants from the room, treating her gently. She says that after everything Yuria has done for her, such kindness is only natural. Lucian reassures her further, saying Yuria can relax when she is with her. Privately, Lucian reflects that Yuria remained pure despite the curse of severance, and wonders if she herself is the more corrupted one. Yuria coughs and fidgets with the collar around her neck. Lucian notices and asks what she is doing. Yuria explains that Dud gave her the collar as a sign of their bond, and that he said he would not meet her without it. Lucian is visibly thrown by that answer, even as Yuria hurriedly insists she is not valuing the collar above Lucian's gifts. Yuria nervously adds that she only wants to keep it on because otherwise Dud will not see her. That explanation snaps Lucian's mood from calm to dangerous. She repeats Yuria's name with rising anger. Then she asks where that demonic bastard is right now. When Dud appears, he immediately claims the whole thing is a misunderstanding. He tries to explain that the collar was only meant to create distance from Yuria's curse of severance. He also blurts out that the leash was simply the only tool he could find in a hurry, not some deliberate humiliation. Lucian cuts through the excuses by reminding him that Yuria is her only family, and that he has only just reunited with her. Dud acknowledges that truth and says that is exactly why the situation is so serious. Lucian demands to know how he could possibly understand something so personal. Dud admits he was first angry about the collar issue too, but says the more he learned, the more suspicious Lucian herself became. He points out the contradictions around her origins, her connection to Yuria, and her impossible victory over a holy knight, then asks where her information and power truly come from. He almost answers with the truth of his own outside knowledge, but stops himself and addresses her formally instead. Choosing caution, he says only that he has spoken with Chancellor Atalanta and cannot reveal everything yet, but insists he stands on both Lucian's side and Yuria's. Lucian falls silent, weighing that answer. At last she addresses him by name, and prepares to decide how far to trust him. She says she will overlook his earlier behavior for the moment. Lucian acknowledges that he fought for her, helped her evade the Holy Emperor for a time, and cared for Yuria properly, but says that still does not earn complete trust. What she needs from him now is not his identity, but the full truth of what he knows and what he plans to do. Dud begins by revealing that the Holy Emperor's design requires both Yuria and Lucian. He explains that this is the homunculus plan, under which Lucian was not born a saintess but manufactured from combined materials. Lucian was built to contain engineered holy power, while Yuria exists to support and amplify that power. According to Dud, the Holy Emperor intends to use that system to create his own paradise on Earth. He warns that Yuria's escape only delayed the scheme, and that the Emperor merely loosened his grip temporarily because Lucian was present. He urges them to use this brief opening to prepare before the plan resumes. Lucian is left staring at the academy and wondering who Dud really is. A new main quest begins with only 3 days left until the academy attack. Dud turns his attention to the Heart of the Star, the academy's central divine device. He explains that it powers the protective barrier, is said to be a remnant of a seraph, and that they were only able to enter because of Lucian's authority. When Lucian asks whether it can truly help them, he says yes and prepares to explain further. He also points out the irony that Lucian condemned him for the leash while now bringing Yuria along in an even more suspicious way. Lucian clarifies that Yuria's restraints are a disguise to make it look like an exorcism, since almost no students ever enter the sanctum and suspicion must be avoided. Dud tells Yuria she can remove the hood now and asks Lucian to wait outside, but also orders Ellia out. Ellia refuses, saying she is responsible for guarding the saintess and for watching Dud as well. Lucian agrees with Ellia that Dud still cannot be trusted completely. Ellia explains that the Heart of the Star is made from the same substance as Yuria's sword, and that even approaching it is normally forbidden. Lucian adds that she brought Dud here because she believes in the creator who guided him to them, even if she remains cautious. Yuria accepts that caution and is simply grateful to have been brought this far. Dud entrusts Yuria's safety to Ellia, formally asking her to protect his sister. Ellia, startled but pleased by the trust, promises she will guard Yuria properly. As Dud thinks through the situation, he recalls that demons can meddle in the human world freely, but angels are bound by stricter laws. Those rules explain why lesser angels he met could not interfere directly in human affairs. He concludes that warriors are different, because angels act through humans with the purest and strongest hearts. Lucian checks that Yuria can defend herself if something goes wrong, and Yuria answers with quiet confidence. Dud realizes that this is why a warrior candidate matters so much. They are the channel through which angels can intervene. That understanding makes it natural that Lucian places such faith in Ellia, even before she has fully become a warrior. Ellia, thrilled by that trust, vows to protect Yuria and keep anything from happening here. Taking advantage of the moment, Dud suddenly moves toward the Heart of the Star. He strikes the divine core directly with Yuria's sword. The others watch in shock as he attacks the academy's sacred barrier source. Ellia is left staring, unable to process what he has just done. Dud braces himself, knowing how reckless the move looks. Yuria is equally stunned by the sudden act. Outside the sanctum, Lucian calmly lights another cigarette instead of panicking. She remains composed, as if she expected Dud to do something drastic. While smoking, she concludes that anyone who knows about the homunculus plan must have access to extraordinary information. Even so, she decides Dud cannot be fully trusted yet, though Yuria and the warrior candidate's loyalty to him means there must be a reason to keep watching him closely. A radiant winged woman judges that the young man before her does not seem like a reckless troublemaker. The onlookers are stunned as they realize an actual angel has appeared. Even the chained dark-haired girl is caught off guard by the arrival. The man quickly identifies the visitor as Virtue Angel A1101, a far higher-ranking angel than he expected. He had assumed only a low-ranking enforcer would come. Instead of a minor messenger like the one from before, Heaven has sent someone much more important. That unexpected escalation immediately puts him on alert. The angel addresses him calmly, signaling that she understands the situation and has come to intervene. One witness reflects that Heaven's moves are impossible to predict. The angel reveals that she remembers him from an earlier incident. She confirms she was present when her subordinates dealt with him before, and he realizes this is the same angel from that time. Knowing how angels operate, he bluntly predicts that she intends to invade his mind and force obedience into him. Her brief reply makes it clear he has guessed correctly. He braces himself, recalling that angels cannot freely interfere physically and instead punish humans through mental attacks. Those attacks are meant less to destroy than to suppress rebellion and stop a person from acting. Most people break immediately under that pressure, so her hesitation confuses him. The angel admits she has been listening to his thoughts because she found them unusually interesting. That intrusion startles him, though she says she had only intended to issue a warning. He grits his teeth under the growing pressure. Then she decides his deliberate blasphemy deserves more than a warning and moves to punish him in earnest. A faint smile shows she is satisfied with that decision. She begins the mental assault, assuming he is ready to endure it. As the attack takes hold, he experiences its force directly for the first time. His consciousness is dragged into a strange inner realm of floating geometric structures. He realizes he is standing inside his own mental space. The angel is baffled by what she finds there. Instead of a landscape shaped by desire or morality, his inner world appears almost completely empty. She recalls that a mental space should reflect a person's moral nature, so this blankness makes no sense. Unable to classify him as good or evil, she starts doubting her own judgment and taking the case personally. The unstable emptiness around them only deepens her unease. She struggles to understand what kind of human could possess a mind like this. Meanwhile, he stays focused on his real goal. Now that a mental space has formed, part of his soul is exposed, exactly as he wanted. Back in the physical world, his body collapses while the soul-linked space remains active. The chained girl senses what he is doing and anticipates that someone deranged will soon force their way in. The mental realm suddenly darkens as another presence intrudes. The space begins sealing itself off, even though he insists he has no power to create or close such a realm. The angel finally realizes something is terribly wrong. The man warns her that whatever is coming has arrived. She demands to know what exactly he means. When she looks into the darkness, she finds only a void. The emptiness seems impossible, and she calls it deeply strange. Then a white-haired horned woman appears from that void with intimate amusement. Her arrival tears open the man's shirt and exposes the mark on his chest, confirming a hidden connection. The angel instantly recognizes the intruder as a demon. The demon greets the angel with mocking familiarity. Before the angel can react, the demon binds her in ribbons of force and immobilizes her. The demon activates deadly charm, turning the encounter into a seduction-based mental assault. She locks onto the man and declares that she has finally found him. A system notice confirms that a fragment of the white demon has taken an interest in him, and he realizes events are following the original story. The demon addresses him with possessive affection. The mark on his chest flares in response to her presence. She confesses that she has longed obsessively to meet him. As she tightens her hold, he struggles to endure her fixation. Even bound, the angel watches with growing alarm. The man's authority clashes with the demon's charm, but she presses closer and openly claims that she wants him. She demands to know whether he wants her in return and is thrown off when he does not respond the way she expects. Instead, she leans in with predatory delight, trying to overwhelm his resistance completely. He realizes that if he yields to her temptation, he will become her slave. The angel breaks free enough to intervene and orders the demon to stop. She yanks the demon away from him and drags her back by force. The angel commands the man not to move, while he is shocked that an ordinary angel can resist a demon like this. The demon snarls at the interruption. Furious, she dives at the angel for getting between her and the man. The two collide head-on in a brutal clash. Angel and demon trade direct blows inside the mental realm. Their impact cracks the sealed space itself. A hole tears open in the realm above them. The angel coughs from the strain but stays in the fight. The demon recoils in surprise that she has been forced back. The damaged realm ruptures further under their power. The man lies dazed nearby, barely conscious. Even so, he warns the white demon not to touch the angel, threatening retaliation if she does. The demon, now pinning the angel down, demands to know why he is protecting her when she is not the one he should want. The angel angrily tells him to stop interfering and stay where he is. The demon orders the angel to release the mental space and promises to deal with her later. He refuses to back down and tells the demon they are destined to meet again anyway. That promise delights her, and he confirms it with cold certainty. The angel warns him that if he keeps ignoring her orders, she will take drastic action. He answers that if necessary he will even risk death in the mental realm rather than submit. The demon is thrilled by that defiance. She lashes out again, testing how serious he is. When he openly admits he is threatening her, she laughs instead of taking offense. His hostility only excites her more, and he finally orders her to leave. She accepts the command as something precious to keep. As she begins to dissolve, she promises that this is only for now. She vows to return for his soul, while he notes with relief that events have unfolded just like the original story and that the angel now owes him. He turns that outcome into a pointed question for the angel. Still shaken, the angel asks what payment he wants for saving her. He asks for an ingot of star iron. Later, a blonde woman is astonished that he actually obtained such a divine metal from an angel. He explains that he plans to forge it into an item that can ease the saintess's sister's curse of severance. He adds that he has more of the metal and notes that star iron is both sacred and nearly indestructible. The orange-haired girl connects this to the strange curse afflicting the saintess's sister and realizes they needed angelic help just to begin undoing it. He warns that this is only the beginning and that a larger conflict is still coming. His allies sense he is hiding something important from them. As a new chapter begins, he gathers his thoughts about the coming attack on the academy. The women around him press him to explain what he knows. They insist they need time to prepare as well. He finally decides to tell them the truth. His conclusion is simple and urgent: the school must be saved. Elsewhere, a silver-haired figure quietly studies documents as events move toward that crisis. Another person works intensely at a forge, suggesting preparations are already underway. A stern blonde man is introduced as another force within the academy's power structure. Meanwhile, students casually talk about the final day of outdoor training and expect their team to win. They head off in good spirits, unaware of the danger approaching. Watching them, the protagonist reflects on how ordinary their lives seem compared to the truth and the threat closing in. He admits to himself that he has never had warm memories of school, not even in his previous life. A voice suddenly asks whether he is simply used to being alone. He looks up to find a masked orange-haired woman in black standing before him. She introduces herself cryptically as a butterfly effect. He is confused, but she says everything he has done led to this meeting. She frames herself as the inevitable result of his choices and addresses him as both dud and student. He demands to know who she really is. Appearing behind him with unsettling ease, she says she expected someone more cunning and is disappointed by how ordinary he seems. She bluntly calls him normal, almost absurdly so. That only deepens his confusion, especially when she remarks that someone like him surviving against demons this long is unbelievable. He wonders whether anyone like her ever existed in the original story and how she knows so much. When he presses for an answer, she calls herself his #1 fan. She speaks with jealous contempt for the demon girls drawn to him and implies a far more personal obsession. He frantically searches his memory for any such figure among the demon vessels and finds nothing. As he struggles to identify her, she casually produces a key item he had overlooked. Holding it out of reach, she mocks his carelessness. He realizes the situation is dangerous, yet no warning system is reacting, which unsettles him even more. She says what truly enrages her is seeing those other girls act as if they matter to him. In her eyes, they know nothing about who he really is and deserve to die for pretending otherwise. She claims she alone can truly understand him. She insists that in this entire world, only she can meet him as an equal. Then she tosses the key away as if daring him to chase it. He stares up at her, stunned by the intensity of her fixation. She boasts that she is the only villain capable of reaching him like this, in a way even the demons cannot. With eerie confidence, she says he is probably ready for the fight against the boy king. Then she reveals the real twist. The Valcasus invasion planned for tomorrow could be made meaningless if the attack came today instead. She challenges him to prove he can still adapt if nothing unfolds according to his expectations. Wanting to test him further, she says she hopes he will give her a reason to believe in him more. At her touch, the Academy's protective barrier begins cracking across the entire campus. Nearby, the orange-haired girl is still casually eating when the disturbance starts. A nun asks whether Ellia is overworking herself with all her one-on-one training. Their light conversation continues as they discuss how popular he has become among students. The nun explains that his fan club keeps talking about how hard he trains and how inspiring it is. Ellia jokes about that fan club, amused that it still exists. The nun notes that Ellia once crushed those admirers with him and asks whether she has truly let go of her resentment. Ellia begins to answer by comparing him to an ordinary human. Her conclusion is that, judged only as a normal person, he is oddly underwhelming. She contrasts him with the truly monstrous fighters who can erase giant threats in a single blow. Compared to beings like that, she says, a warrior candidate is only slightly above average. Before she can finish explaining, violent cracks and alarms interrupt the conversation. Students panic as they realize the Academy's protective barrier is breaking. The staff and upperclassmen understand at once that this is no drill and order everyone to get inside. Even the injured are told to arm themselves in preparation for an attack. Elsewhere, a red-haired horned woman calmly senses the shift, suggesting the enemy side is already moving. A seraph tears a hole in the Academy's protective barrier, putting the entire area in immediate danger. An orange-haired student realizes the breach will draw every nearby evil being and accuses Dud of hiding how serious this was. A monocled woman rushes toward the damaged barrier to stop it from collapsing. She channels green power into the barrier, trying to reinforce the crack before it spreads. Her spell slams into the breach, but the damage keeps worsening under the strain. As she struggles, she warns Dud that the barrier is failing far faster than he led her to expect. She demands answers, convinced this disaster may have been part of Dud's plan. The towering clock tower looms beneath the weakening barrier, marking the center of the crisis. A dark summoning circle opens above the tower, and a monstrous scream announces that something is coming through. Multiple beasts pour out of the opening, confirming that the breach has become a full invasion. Students panic at the sound and scramble to follow Talian's order to run. As monsters land in the streets, defenders shout for everyone to get indoors and for the freshmen to be protected first. One heavy creature crashes down into the town, signaling the start of open combat. More monsters gather behind it, turning the Academy grounds into a battlefield. Elsewhere, Dud prepares himself and coldly notes that an enemy who announces an attack is hardly acting like a real enemy. The blonde chancellor, wrapped in ominous power, tells Dud to stop delaying because he has waited long enough. A horned beast roars as the invasion intensifies. A student is cornered by a monster and begs desperately for help. He freezes in terror, unable to move on his own. Professor Conrad cuts in at the last second and drives the monster back to save him. Conrad snaps the student out of his panic and orders everyone to evacuate indoors immediately. Another upperclassman drags a student away and warns him not to play hero. Conrad realizes the situation is spiraling beyond simple monster control. He recognizes that the monsters inside the school are no longer the only threat because the barrier itself is close to failing. The monocled woman explains that if the barrier breaks completely, all the death energy targeting Elfante will converge there and may even destabilize the void zone. Still holding the barrier together, she presses the Chancellor for his real objective. Students and staff keep forcing civilians inside while the cracked barrier hangs over them like a countdown. The defenders order everyone to stop trying to fight and focus only on evacuation. The academy guards split their forces, sending one unit to continue evacuations while another stays behind to hold the line. They brace themselves to stop the monsters no matter the cost. The line is immediately overwhelmed as monsters smash through the guards' formation. Watching the chaos, Dud admits to himself that his plan has completely fallen apart. He sees monsters rampaging and the barrier breaking and realizes every part of the situation has gone wrong. He bitterly reflects that none of this should have happened at all. Dud blames the collapse on events straying from his intended course until someone calls his full name and interrupts him. A blade flashes into the battle, cutting through the confusion as a new fighter arrives. Elnor appears after killing a monster and confronts Dud for ignoring the evacuation order. She steels herself, deciding she has to remember what matters and find a way to reverse the disaster. Dud resolves that if he cannot restore control, he will at least fight back. Elnor marches straight toward him and demands to know why he is still standing there. A bespectacled student council member calls out to Elnor, saying the whole student council needs to regroup. Elnor sends her on ahead, choosing to stay with Dud instead. Dud asks Elnor to trust him one more time and listen to what he has in mind. He claims that if she follows him, they can still save the school, even as others keep urging Elnor to hurry. Knowing how suspicious he sounds, Dud asks her to judge him by every crisis he has already navigated. He reminds her that he handled the Count incident, the monster outbreak, the assassination attempt, and even the train terror, insisting he always acts with a plan. The student council member is stunned by his confidence, but the pressure to move keeps mounting. Others protest that the student council president cannot afford to stand around listening to him now. Elnor apologizes to Dud for doubting him and decides this will be the last time she places her trust in him. Dud immediately leads her away, while the others are left shouting after her in disbelief. The student council member can only watch them go and mutter that Elnor is an idiot. Dud explains that the clock tower is the source of the monsters and warns that even stronger ones will be gathered there. Because the two of them cannot handle that alone, he decides they need outside help. He and Elnor approach a cloaked delegation and urgently ask for assistance, though the group initially hides behind its official identity as envoys of the Holy Empire. One of the cloaked figures admits that titles can wait because the emergency is too severe for formalities. Dud calls out their real role, revealing that they are exorcists sent under the Pope's direct command to observe him. The delegation keeps pretending ignorance, but Dud refuses to let them maintain the act. He explains that after provoking the Pope, he expected watchers to be sent, and he knows the true delegation would already be with the professors. He argues that their real mission is simply to monitor him, so if the Pope's target is in danger, they have every reason to intervene. One masked exorcist replies that even if he is right, his survival alone would be enough for their purposes. Dud realizes they are willing to let Elfante fall as long as he lives, which would save him personally but cost him everything else. Before he can press further, a distant ally named Ceres contacts him and says she knows where the item he needs is, while warning him that this is no game. Ceres reminds him that real lives, including his own, are at stake. Dud fires back that in reality countless people die, so she should help him now if she cares about the outcome. Elnor, hearing his desperation, declares that she will use any means necessary to win. Dud demands an answer from Ceres even if the whole world's malice turns against him. One masked exorcist finally reacts, no longer entirely dismissive. The exorcist warns Dud that he had better be telling the truth. At that moment, Dud's system confirms that a deadly charm has activated because Master Assassin Ceres has taken an interest in him. Ceres authorizes another operative, Vizsla, to step in. Vizsla reveals herself and accepts the order, bringing the exorcists into the fight at last. Above them, the corruption around the clock tower thickens and spreads. A monstrous maw opens within the purple distortion, hinting at an even worse threat. The exorcists advance toward a mass of monsters blocking the way to the tower. Dud admits he still does not know how they learned so much about him, but he has no time to dwell on it. Elnor tells him explanations can wait until later. Vizsla plants her blade and gathers crackling power, preparing to carve a path through the horde. Far away, Ceres coolly warns Dud that he will be held accountable for everything he is saying now. Vizsla and the exorcists launch a devastating assault that tears through the monsters in front of them. Gunfire and explosive force shred the regenerating beasts, showing power far beyond the Academy's defenders. Dud is stunned by the exorcist's strength, but Elnor reminds him they still have to reach the clock tower quickly. He confirms that the true enemy is waiting on the roof. As they move together, Elnor warns Dud not to start lying again because she is done accepting evasions. She tells him that from the moment they met, he has hidden things and spoken in circles. But she also admits there was always a reason behind that behavior, which is why she chose to stand beside him now. She tells him to stop wasting effort on excuses and focus only on what he must do at the tower. Dud thanks her, and Elnor awkwardly admits that despite his many strange habits, she does not think badly of him. She finally says she considers him decent in his own way. That unexpected praise catches Dud completely off guard. He recalls the original Flash Terror monster, an unkillable creature with near-infinite regeneration that can only be dealt with by luring it away from the clock tower. Knowing that, he asks Elnor whether she can draw the monster's attention. Elnor flatly refuses and instead decides she will cut straight through it herself. She unleashes a radiant sword technique and hacks into the monster head-on. Dud is horrified that she is seriously trying to kill something he knows cannot be killed that way. Elnor keeps pressing the attack, pouring more power into repeated slashes. Dud spots a strike coming from her blind side and shouts for her to watch the left. A massive limb swings in before she can fully react. Dud yells for her to counter, trying to salvage the opening. Elnor throws up a burst of light to block the blow. The monster's attack crashes through with overwhelming force anyway. Elnor is driven back and realizes her defense was not enough. Even so, she lands another heavy strike and blasts the creature away from her. She stares at her damaged sword in disbelief, realizing the fight is not going as expected. Dud understands that even the Tristan sword technique cannot solve this because the monster was designed from the beginning to be unkillable. He knows he must climb the tower immediately, but he hesitates because leaving Elnor alone now could get her killed. Elnor makes the choice for him and tells him that even if she dies, he must save Elfante. Dud is shaken by her willingness to sacrifice herself. Elnor refuses to let him lose heart over a damaged sword and pushes him to keep moving. She reasserts herself by name, reminding him exactly who she is. Dud rejects both the system and the original story's expectations, refusing to accept weakness from her. He tells her that of all people, she should never look defeated. He reminds her that she is fated to become this world's final boss, not someone who breaks here. Elnor quietly accepts his words and says she has one last thing to tell him in case this is the end. She leans close, catching him off guard. For a moment she loses her nerve, then suddenly realizes something and freezes. The monster surges again, interrupting whatever she meant to say. Elnor's expression hardens as she abandons hesitation and embraces a more dangerous resolve. She explodes forward in a violent charge, driving herself back into the fight with reckless force. The counterattack draws blood, but she is badly wounded in return. Her eyes blaze with a near-mad intensity, as she keeps going despite the damage. At the top of the tower, the blonde chancellor watches the academy burn from above. He admits that it may be inappropriate to say now, but he finds youth admirable for still trying to resist him in this situation. When Dud reaches him, the chancellor marvels that he really came to stop him even now. Dud reminds him of their bet, and declares that he came to win it. Facing the chancellor amid spreading demonic circles, Dud prepares for the decisive confrontation. The chancellor reveals his hatred for demons and for those who worship them, exposing the twisted conviction behind his actions. Dud answers that he understands, because the demon has been bound in agony for thousands of years, and he condemns the chancellor for siding with the prophet who covets demonic power. He asks whether the chancellor was seduced by the promise of certainty, specifically the certainty of granting a free death. Dud recalls that in the original story the prophet made a contract based on the boy king's lifelong wish, promising the death he had always desired. The price of that promise was the total destruction of Elfante Academy. The prophet offered to end the boy king's cursed life, a life in which death was forbidden no matter what he or anyone else wanted. That bargain would finally end the tragedy in which the kingdom's people themselves had become the forbidden art binding him. After enduring unbearable agony for ages, the boy king was forced to choose. The choice was whether a life chained by a demon could be entrusted to a villain. In the end, he made that choice and accepted the path before him. Dud asks whether he made that promise knowing the method, and the answer comes back that it was all to save himself and his kingdom. The chancellor, now named Valcasus, says he knew exactly what he was doing and that is why he can stand here without doubt. Because of that conviction, he says he has no choice but to attack Dud, who is only permitted to die in a full-power battle. He summons a swarm of void-born mouths and tendrils and urges Dud to give everything he has. Elsewhere, the orange-haired girl warns her companions that the next part will be brutal and that experience is the only real preparation. One of the girls is alarmed by how suddenly the danger escalates. Another is told to secure anything loose, but she insists her balance is good enough to handle it. The orange-haired girl dryly says they will understand once it starts, while the others nervously ask if it is really that bad. Without waiting for them to calm down, she triggers the mechanism anyway. All three are hurled downward at terrifying speed, and the orange-haired girl complains that no one could ever get used to this. Back at the tower, Valcasus opens the battle by releasing a void creature and demanding proof that Dud is more than talk. Dud's mind races as he forces himself to remember the attack pattern before panic can freeze him. He quickly identifies the first phase and realizes it is simpler than it looks once the pattern is recognized. He decides the opening can be handled by deflecting the attacks with the Tristan sword technique. But the moment he tries, he realizes the technique is not activating the way he expected. Dud abandons any thought of standing his ground and throws himself into evasive movement as the demon's attack closes in. The monster mocks him for fleeing, disappointed that he chose survival over a direct clash. Dud keeps moving at full speed, buying himself a few more seconds. The demon answers his retreat with contempt and fires more attacks to hurt him. Dud realizes his veteran evasion skill still functions here, so his plan becomes simple: stay alive and keep the enemy locked in combat mode. Even while running with disastrously weak stats, he forces himself to keep thinking instead of panicking. A sudden burst of terror magic hits the transformed enemy. Dud recognizes the source at once as Elnor and remembers that this man's death condition behaves differently here than expected. Elsewhere, Yuri moves into position as golden lines of support magic spread across the battlefield. One of the demon's floating mouths begins charging another lethal beam. Lucian arrives in time to blast it apart, and finally enters the fight. Dud crashes down hard but is relieved to confirm that Lucian's power also exists in this place. The demon presses him again, demanding to know whether he is finally ready to fight. Instead of answering, Dud triggers another hidden ally, and the demon is caught off guard by a new presence. The creature warns that once it has revealed this form, it cannot hold back anymore. It lunges to finish Dud, praising his nerve even as it moves to kill him. The strike comes down with overwhelming force. Before it lands, Dud's chain sword appears and the demon realizes reinforcements have fully arrived. Yuria and the Saintess step in together, promising they will stop the demon. Lucian reassures Dud that he came specifically to save him. Yuria is overjoyed to find Dud alive and safe after all. Lucian lands beside them, ready to support rather than take center stage. He greets Dud lightly and makes it clear he trusts him to keep leading. Dud admits they arrived at the last possible moment, and that he had been one breath from death. Yuria excitedly explains that the star iron circlet Dud made really works and lets her stand near others without the curse harming them. As she celebrates that freedom, the circlet begins converting the old curse into something else. Dud stops her and tells her the change is only beginning, not ending. He explains that the curse suppressed by the circlet does not vanish but transforms. At that moment, Yuria's curse is converted into a maintained defensive enhancement, leaving only the protective blessing around her. The demon cuts off the explanation and invites Yuria to test her new state in battle. Dud immediately starts reading the enemy's behavior as a pattern he can exploit. He takes command of the whole group and insists that if they follow his instructions exactly, they can win. His first order is absolute discipline. No one is to break formation. He warns that a single mistake will end the fight, so everyone must obey precisely. Lucian pauses, surprised by how sharply Dud has shifted into battlefield command. Yuria, now armored and free to fight openly beside the Saintess, feels for the first time that they are truly fighting together without restraint. Dud calls out the next incoming laser and assigns Lucian and Ellia their roles before the attack even lands. Lucian gathers power while Ellia braces to move on Dud's signal. Yuria commits herself to Dud's plan and prepares to cut straight through the enemy's offense. The demon charges a deadly beam and boasts that even a graze would be fatal. Lucian sees through the contradiction in Dud's behavior, and judges that Dud gives orders well but still lacks faith in his allies. The demon notices Lucian by name, sensing his role in the formation. The beam barrage erupts toward the Saintess. Yuria successfully blocks the first wave exactly as Dud predicted. Dud instantly shifts to the next pattern and orders her through the coming tentacle sequence. Following his timing, Yuria ducks, deflects, and parries the assault in a perfect chain. She keeps the defense going without breaking rhythm, proving she can execute his plan cleanly. Dud then orders the others to disengage from her lane at once. Ellia hesitates because Dud had earlier said even a scratch would kill her, but he now tells her to charge anyway. Lucian floods Ellia with attack buffs while Dud rushes the timing, forcing the opening wider. Elia's sword ignites with amplified power as Dud redirects her fear into momentum. He tells her the enemy is switching back to laser mode and orders her to run straight in and do what she does best. Ellia answers with a relentless flurry of slashes that tears into the demon's body. The demon is shaken by the sudden damage and struggles to understand what changed. Even setting the Saintess aside, it cannot comprehend how fighters seeing this form for the first time are making no mistakes. Lucian and Yuria each realize that Dud is coordinating a battle at a level the enemy never expected. Lucian, impressed, keeps feeding the plan while ordering Yuria to maintain pressure. Yuria responds with renewed confidence as the formation holds. Dud calls for a finishing scale strike from Ellia and names the technique he wants. Ellia unleashes Burst Stream, carving a blazing vertical attack through the demon. The demon laughs through the flames, not yet beaten. Even so, Ellia now fully accepts that Dud's strategy is real and not empty talk. Dud sees the hit land and realizes victory is possible if they keep control. The demon refuses to yield and declares it will show them how impossible killing it really is. Above the tower, the warped sky and ritual structure continue to crack and destabilize. A barrier elsewhere begins to fracture under the strain of the battle. Far away, a blue-haired woman notes that 10 minutes have already passed. She admits her own limits, and gives Dud only 2 or 3 minutes at most. Within that shrinking window, she decides the battle's outcome must be settled. Back on the field, Lucian shields while Yuria keeps intercepting attacks, both still moving by Dud's calls. Dud reassures them that the enemy changing patterns does not matter because he has already grasped the structure underneath. He orders Ellia to smash through the next opening and prepare another heavy strike. The demon finally understands that Dud's side has become brave but dangerously predictable. It swings a massive counterattack toward Ellia, aiming to punish the pattern Dud created. Dud reacts instantly and demands Lucian push his attack buff to the limit. Yuria plants herself for the response. At Dud's command, she launches the counter. Her chain blade drives straight into the demon's head, stunning it at the critical moment. Lucian's chain catches and holds the opening in place. He reminds Yuria that he promised to save her, and now proves it. Lucian turns to the demon and declares that Valkasis's time for repentance has come. He invokes proof of faith, detonating holy power above the tower. The possessed body trapped inside the demon begins to convulse and scream as the purification takes hold. The holy force tears the corruption outward while Yuria and Lucian stand beneath the blast. Lucian is stunned that Valkasis is still resisting even under that level of purification. Inside the burning corruption, Valkasis reveals his desperation. If he dies here, he believes he will fail his kingdom. Lucian tightens his resolve and whips the chain harder, refusing to let that desperation turn into escape. The holy light and black corruption clash violently around Valkasis's body. Ellia realizes the enemy is finally vulnerable. She decides this is their only real chance to end him. Remembering that he survived a pierced heart before, she concludes they must take his head instead. Dud stops her and tells her she has done enough, ordering her and the others to go down the clock tower. He calmly says he will handle what remains by himself. Ellia protests that Valkasis is still enduring and that leaving Dud alone is madness. Dud answers that he sees the danger clearly, but if they stay, everyone below will be caught in what comes next. Yuria and Lucian both hesitate, unwilling to abandon him. Ellia realizes from his tone that Dud has already decided on a final move. Lucian asks her to trust him and silently backs Dud's choice. Ellia refuses at first, saying she cannot allow a student to die in front of her. Her resolve wavers as she searches Dud's face for any sign that he is bluffing. Lucian cuts to her fear with a simple truth. No one said Dud was going to die. Dud promises that from his point of view he will win and return. Ellia can only stare at him through tears, caught between duty and trust. Dud repeats that dying is not part of his plan and walks toward the kneeling Valkasis alone. He leaves the others behind and commits himself to the final exchange. Ellia can only call his name as he goes. Lucian finally takes Elia's hand and urges her to descend quickly instead of wasting time on the stairs. She accepts, still shaken, and follows the saintess away. Lucian carries both women from the tower in a single rapid movement. As Dud approaches, he recalls the rule binding Valkasis's forbidden art. It can only be lifted by winning a fair duel. That means the only valid opponent left is Dud himself, the weakest man imaginable. He combines Soul Linker with demonic essence, exploiting a loophole that allows evil-aligned souls to be inserted into the system. Thinking of Caliban, he asks the question that matters most to him before he dies. He wonders aloud whether death hurts, revealing how fully he expects to stake his life on what comes next. Lucian, hearing him from below, can only answer with bitter honesty. The answer is yes, and Dud dryly decides he will never ask Lucian for advice again. He activates Stigmata, setting the final mechanism in motion. Then he kneels before Valkasis and formally enters the duel. The world around him drops into darkness as the duel space closes. Dud senses the traps springing around his mind. The duel immediately assaults him with crushing force, and he struggles just to stay conscious. He reaches for his watch and anchors himself to the plan through pain. Even as the pressure tears at him, he refuses to let go. In the darkness, a memory of the blonde prince appears, wrapped in golden light. Dud forces himself onward, teeth clenched, toward that memory. Bleeding and shaking, he still reaches out rather than retreating. The prince's memory turns to face him at last. The surrounding memory resolves into a burning royal place, scarred by disaster. The prince studies him in silence, already understanding more than he says. Outside the duel, the kingdom below remains in chaos as people flee the spreading destruction. Within the memory, the prince notices the intruder who has entered his past. Dud warns that entering another's memories is dangerous, but the prince asks why he only thinks in terms of winning or losing a duel. Dud answers plainly that he came to save not just the prince, but the kingdom as well. The prince recognizes that Dud knowingly accepted the risks because he refuses to look away from suffering. He concedes the duel, declaring Dud the winner and thanking him. At the same time, the outer barrier around the tower begins to break apart under the released force. The cracks spread fast enough to alarm the one maintaining it. The blue-haired woman rushes to stabilize the collapse and calls out to Dud, hoping he succeeded. The barrier holds only by a thread as the last fracture remains open. Then a blinding golden eruption bursts above the clock tower, signaling the duel's resolution. The remaining demonic projectiles in the sky lose coherence and begin to disperse. A system message confirms the main quest is complete, awards Dud new rewards, and unlocks a special connection with the Inquisition. Dud wakes weakly from the aftermath, barely able to speak. The first face he sees is Elnor, who has come to him immediately. She cradles his head in her lap while he recognizes her with dazed relief. When he asks if she came up right after defeating the monsters, she admits she did and anxiously wonders whether he is angry she left him with someone strange. Instead, Elnor admits she is angry for a different reason and makes him brace for it. She explains that outside the tower she met the warrior candidate and the saintess and learned how the battle ended. Realizing others helped Dud defeat the warlock, she complains that the student council president should have been at the decisive scene, not absent from it. Dud realizes her wounded pride sounds suspiciously like jealousy, and Elnor's expression makes it clear he is probably right. After jokingly asking whether the student council president is jealous, Dud is immediately shut down hard enough that he apologizes on the spot. He suddenly realizes something important as the tension breaks. The pendant that had carried the forbidden art falls away, showing its power has ended. With every curse lifted, the burden carried by the boy King Valcasus is finally over, and the dead can at last rest in peace. Dud recalls how his path began with a desperate promise to stay beside someone longer and help avenge the one who ruined them. Now calmer, he notices the council president staring at him differently and asks what changed. She avoids explaining it directly and only admits that she simply wanted to. Once they settle down after the battle, she asks what he plans to do next. Dud points out that defeating the Flash Terror alone will spread his name everywhere and make the assassins after her even more dangerous. She ignores that concern and instead returns to the invitation he made earlier, asking him to repeat the offer of dinner. Back at the academy, the mood shifts completely when news starts spreading across campus. Students are told that because of the clock tower incident, the chancellor has moved vacation up and wants the announcement spread to every grade. The campus erupts in excitement, while rumors explain that a building was badly damaged and now needs repairs. Above the academy, the scene quietly shifts to a rooftop conversation away from the crowd. A new order allows someone to remain at the academy for the time being. Yuria learns the order came officially from the Holy Empire, and wonders why the Holy Emperor is suddenly acting this way, suspecting Dud may have exploited a weakness. Her companion agrees that Dud is careful enough to have done exactly that. Even so, the black-haired woman is content simply because the two of them are still together. Yuria warns that the Holy Emperor will not abandon the homunculus plan, but her sister remains unshaken. She insists they will not run anymore and that, compared with before, the sisters are freer than they have ever been. Yuria adds that people can no longer look down on them, though she jokes that her sister sometimes feels like the elder one. Her sister laughs it off, saying they are twins anyway, while still teasing that she was born 2 minutes earlier. Their light moment is interrupted when someone nearby asks them to lower their voices. A red-haired student complains that their chatter is ruining her reading and orders Yuria to put out her cigarette, startling them. Elsewhere, a framed family photo quietly reminds Ellia of the home she lost. In her room, Ellia hesitantly asks Trisha whether she truly has what it takes to become a warrior candidate. Trisha answers without hesitation that Ellia obviously does, especially after how well she handled the clock tower incident, and asks whether public attention is what troubles her. She presses further, wondering if the real burden is the title of warrior itself. That question makes Ellia confront whether becoming a warrior is truly what she wants, or only what her brother Calivan would have wanted. She admits her motives were tangled up with grief, homesickness, and a desire not to be consumed by revenge, and Trisha invites her to speak honestly. Ellia wonders if she has only been following her brother's path while searching for someone to fill the emptiness left by her family. Trisha is moved enough to start responding more personally to Elia's confession. But the moment turns awkward when Trisha abruptly asks if Ellia is feeling ill, and Ellia denies it. Meanwhile, the Chancellor warns Dud that demon worshippers will keep targeting him, so he must stay alert and never relax his guard. Dud says he is already used to living that way, but the Chancellor reminds him that even he still needs rest. She explains that the early vacation is partly for repairs after the clock tower incident, and tells him to use the break to recover. Dud agrees he should rest and regroup, recognizing that he has only just finished one stage of his larger journey. Even while accepting the break, he keeps turning over the mystery of the prophet in his mind. He recalls a contradiction. In his memory, the leader of the demon worshippers was not a woman, yet the figure tied to that role now clearly is. When the Chancellor says something unexpected, Dud is jolted out of his thoughts and asks her to repeat it. She calmly informs him that he will return to his hometown during the break with the warrior candidate, and that the arrangements have already been made. The news hits Ellia so hard she practically collapses from shock. The Chancellor adds one more detail that makes the situation even worse for Dud. The student council president is coming too. Dud explodes at the idea of traveling home with both Ellia and Elnor, while the Chancellor brushes off his protest with her usual claim that refusing would somehow doom the world.